The cover of The Cruel History of the Vladan Empire features a man holding a woman. Narrations reveal the male lead was a neglected, illegitimate child who grew up to enter a political marriage. He harbors complicated feelings for his wife because she resembles his mother, as seen in a nearby portrait. Introductory text warns of a descent into a grim romance fitting the novel's dark title. In the modern day, a brown-haired woman checks her phone for reviews after finishing the story summary. Advanced reviews warn readers about the extreme violence and the male lead's descent into madness in later volumes. She smiles at the warnings, her curiosity only piqued by the mentions of the story's brutal nature. A sudden sharp kia sounds as she reacts intensely to the phone's contents while walking through a crowd. On-screen text laments the endless scrolling required and the shocking level of violence found within the pages. Overwhelmed by the intense content, she pauses while a single cold sweat drop rolls down her head. She decides to finish reading the rest at home, finding the content too scandalous for public viewing. Suddenly, a confused "huh" sounds as a loud honk blares from the approaching lights at the crosswalk. Her purple eye widens in shock during the final split second before a violent impact occurs. She desperately pleads for no one to look at her phone's contents as it shatters on the ground. A sudden echoing "ah" sounds as an orange-haired girl bolts upright in the forest greenery. Looking bewildered, the girl is startled by an unseen voice asking if she had been napping again. The voice instructs her to gather mushrooms for dinner, but the girl realizes she lacks that knowledge. Looking up, the orange-haired girl wonders who the light brown-haired woman standing before her actually is. Confused by her surroundings, the girl tentatively identifies the woman as her mother while struggling to understand. The woman asks why she is being treated like a total stranger after their brief separation. Chelsea, the light brown-haired woman, identifies the place as Xenon Village and calls the girl Lucette. Lucette recoils in horror upon realizing she is now within the borders of the dreaded Vladan Empire. A dark Gothic palace appears, representing the setting of the brutal novel she just read. Lucette weeps over her terrible luck, realizing she has been reincarnated into a violent and grim story. The official title card for the story is presented in bold, stylized red script. 1 week later, Lucette has accepted her new life and responds to a call for Demmer. A warm bowl of mushroom stew is served, looking savory with fresh herbs on top. Lucette beams with joy as she prepares to enjoy her meal in the peaceful cottage. Chelsea smiles warmly and encourages her daughter to eat as much as she likes since there is plenty. Lucette greedily asks for 2 bowls, but her mother playfully tells her not to overindulge. Xenon Village is described as a remote mountain settlement located far away from the dangerous imperial capital. A vision of the local lord appears, showing he was a commoner composer who earned his noble title. Lucette continues to eat, finding comfort in the simple life away from the novel's central conflict. She happily munches on bread and stew, savoring the peaceful atmosphere of her new country home. Lucette imagines the novel's characters brutally killing each other at the palace while she enjoys her tranquility. The family's small cottage stands quietly nestled among the green bushes of the village. At the dinner table, Lucette enthusiastically praises the quality of the stew her mother prepared. Chelsea glows with pride at the compliment, happy that her daughter is enjoying the meal. Lucette reflects on her good fortune of having warm food and a loving family despite the grim setting. When her mother asks why she is staring, Lucette simply giggles and dismisses the question. Her mother informs her that some of the neighbors will be arriving later to fix the roof. From above, 2 men are seen working on the shingles while the mother expresses her gratitude. Dahlia, a woman with short wavy brown hair, approaches the house and calls out to Chelsea. Dahlia offers a basket of red apples while a shy, dark-haired boy hides behind her skirt. Dahlia insists on sharing her harvest, and Lucette anticipates a very long conversation between the adults. Lucette decides to quietly slip away while Dahlia and her mother are distracted by their chat. She walks through the bright sunlight, a peaceful smile on her face as she explores the outdoors. A soft rustling sounds as her brown shoes brush through the long green grass. Lucette walks along a wooden fence, fully convinced that a quiet country life is the absolute best. Her peaceful walk is interrupted by a sudden, faint plea for someone to stop what they are doing. Village children bully a boy by the water, demanding he ask nicely for his glasses. The gray-haired boy mockingly dangles the glasses, suggesting he might return them for a polite request. A sharp slap sounding as the bully strikes the dark-haired boy's hand away during his struggle. Lucette stands at the edge of the field, watching the confrontation with a look of shock. Determined to stop the bullying, Lucette rushes forward and demands they return the glasses immediately. A sudden stumble sounding as the bully kicks a stone, telling the boy to play elsewhere. The dark-haired boy gasps in surprise as he loses his balance and begins to fall backward. A sudden wobble sounding as the boy struggles to remain upright before falling into the river. A loud splash sounding as the boy falls into the water while the others laugh mockingly. Lucette cries out in horror as she watches the cruel treatment from the grassy riverbank. The bullies laugh and mock the boy, asking if he enjoys being in the water so much. The boy sits silently in the stream while the bully asks if he needs his glasses. Lucette arrives and confronts the bully just as he suggests crushing the glasses under his foot. A loud thud sounding as Lucette kicks the bully down, calling him a jerk for his actions. From the water, the dark-haired boy stares at his protector with wide, shimmering red eyes. Shielding her eyes from the sun, Lucette stands tall while the bullies react with total shock. She turns toward the stream, her long orange hair flowing as she approaches the wet boy. Lucette looks down at the boy with concern, checking to see if he is physically all right. Extending her hand, Lucette assures the boy he is safe and offers to help him up. A single water drop rolls down the boy's neck as he stares at her in silence. The dark-haired boy gazes at Lucette with wide eyes and a slight blush on his cheeks. Lucette repeats her offer, urging him to take her hand and leave the cold river water. Lucette is struck by the boy's appearance, thinking that he looks quite remarkable up close. Lucette thinks his eyes are beautiful and look just like precious, glowing red jewels. A sudden call breaks her focus as someone nearby shouts out Lucette's name in surprise. The gray-haired boy scolds Lucette for meddling and tells her that girls should not get involved. Lucette reacts with visible irritation, a red vein popping on her forehead in deep annoyance. Lucette demands to know why he is bullying an innocent person who did nothing wrong. The dark-haired boy remains silent while the bully points at his eyes as the reason. The bully calls her an idiot, claiming red is the color of the cursed and ominous. Lucette stands with her arms crossed, looking completely unimpressed by the boy's narrow-minded logic. Narration explains that in this war-torn empire, the color red is viewed as an ominous sign. The boy slowly stands up in the water, rubbing his eyes while remaining in a daze. Lucette challenges the bully's claim by asking him how he explains her own hair color there. She points out that her hair is the exact same red color he just called cursed. Lucette asks if he plans to bully her too for having an allegedly ominous color herself. Lucette threatens to tell her mother that Vincent insulted her father's inherited hair color. Vincent is struck with sudden terror while his friends begin to back away in silence. Lucette pressures him further, asking what he meant by his claim that it was unintended. Lucette fake cries while heading home, vowing to tell her mother that Vincent called her cursed. Vincent stands frozen in fear as the other village children quickly abandon him and flee. A sudden tap sounding as Vincent throws the glasses away, telling her to handle things herself. The bullies sprint away into the distance, leaving the pair alone by the riverbank. Lucette huffs at the departing children, calling them cheeky brats for their rude and cowardly behavior. She approaches the dark-haired boy and offers him the glasses she just successfully reclaimed. The boy stares at her with wide red eyes, clearly shocked by her bravery and help. Close-up of the glasses in Lucette's hand, sparkling against a decorative floral background. Lucette notices that the boy's hands are shaking intensely as he reaches for his frames. She wonders if the boy is weak as he slowly puts his glasses back on. A heave-ho sounding as Lucette pulls the shriveling boy out of the water with effort. Lucette notices his trembling hands and warns the boy that he will surely catch a cold. The red-eyed boy offers to escort her home, asking where exactly the orange-haired girl licks. A sudden, cheerful chirp sounds as they reach a cozy house nestled in the green woods. Lucette questions the sudden appearance of the home as a soft click sounds from the door. A sudden creak sounds as the boy invites her inside, and Lucette agrees with a smile. Her eyes go wide as Lucette gasps in awe at the incredibly scholarly interior of his home. Lucette beams with excitement, claiming that his wonderful house looks just like a secret hidden library. She notes the abundance of books, and the dark-haired boy admits he reads them quite often. Pointing to the scrolls, Lucette asks if he wrote them all himself, and he confirms he did. Lucette asks to explore further, while the boy modestly insists there is nothing special to see. Lucette pleads with wide eyes, and the boy finally agrees to let her look around his home. The boy thinks to himself that having a visitor is a very strange and unexpected occurrence. He worries that allowing a guest to explore his home is against his strict rules and etiquette. The dark-haired boy reflects on the situation with a neutral expression, while Lucette explores behind him. Lucette's eyes sparkle with pure fascination as she continues to admire the boy's many interesting belongings. A soft drip sounds from his wet clothes as Lucette looks back at him with concern. Lucette suggests he change his clothes and asks if he is waiting for her to help. The dark-haired boy blushes with sudden embarrassment as a quick, startled blink sounds from him. He denies her claim, explaining that he simply felt it would be rude to leave her alone. Lucette giggles and smiles warmly, calling the dark-haired boy a very polite and well-mannered young kid. Lucette pushes him toward the other room, telling him to change quickly before he catches a cold. A sudden thud sounds as the door closes behind him while he asks her to wait. Lucette giggles to herself while thinking that the polite boy is actually quite cute and charming. Lucette decides to take a closer look at the glowing, intricate orrery sitting on the wooden desk. She notices the feather pen and ink on the desk, noting the boy's dedication to his work. Lucette wonders if he is introverted because he spends all his time studying and reading books. She observes a heart-decorated book and concludes that the boy is actually a very kind person. Lucette pauses with a thoughtful expression, trying to figure out the mysteries hidden within the cottage.
Floating puzzle pieces represent Lucette's attempt to piece together the identity of her new, mysterious friend.
A sudden snap sounds as Lucette realizes that he is definitely the intellectual and scholarly nerd type.
Lucette's curiosity is piqued by a glowing green bottle sitting alone on a nearby wooden shelf.
She picks up the green bottle and wonders if this strange liquid is actually his daily food.
Lucette reacts to a foul smell, wondering if the green liquid in the bottle is actually rotten.
A sudden sharp eek sounding as Lucette nearly drops the bottle from the overwhelming and terrible stench. She laughs nervously, hoping she is not hungry enough to ever consider drinking such a disgusting potion. A sudden, low voice asks what she is doing, causing Lucette to freeze in her tracks. Lucette stammers an awkward explanation as the boy stands before her, now wearing clean, dry clothes. A sudden, cold shiver sounds as the boy stares at her with a chillingly intense expression. Lucette trembles as she is overwhelmed by the boy's sudden and frightening change in his general aura. A sudden, low hum sounds as the boy addresses Lucette with an incredibly serious and cold tone. A sudden rustle sounds as Lucette apologizes, desperately promising that she will behave herself from now. The boy looks completely confused, wondering why Lucette is suddenly apologizing for looking at his room. He offers a basket of cookies to share, immediately breaking the tense atmosphere with a kind gesture. The basket contains beautifully crafted cookies and fresh strawberries that look incredibly sweet and very tempting. A soft crunch sounds as Lucette eats a cookie, her face radiant with pure, sugary bliss. Sitting together, Lucette thanks him for the snack while he expresses his happiness that she enjoyed them. Lucette asks when he moved to town, noting that he seems very new to the remote village. The dark-haired boy asks Lucette to take care of him as they sit together at the table. A sudden twitch sounds as he mentions the lot was empty just a few days ago. Lucette stammers about the house being there since she arrived, while the boy dismisses her concern. Lucette asks if the many books on the shelf belong to him, and he confirms they do. Lucette finds it impressive that the boy reads so many difficult-looking and scholarly books by himself. The boy identifies some as philosophy books, and Lucette asks if he enjoys the subject while he blushes. The boy explains his recent study of metaphysical realism and epistemology, leaving Lucette looking completely confused. The boy continues explaining transcendental ontology while Lucette is struck by his intense and overwhelming intellectualism. Lucette admires the vast knowledge and incredible concentration, concluding he is a genuine and dedicated nerd. Realizing he overshared, the boy apologizes for talking too much while Lucette begins to cough slightly. As the boy coughs, Lucette stands up worriedly, thinking he stayed in the cold river too long earlier. A soft pop sounding as the boy opens the green bottle, deciding he must drink the contents. The boy drinks the foul-smelling medicine as Lucette watches with a look of intense and obvious disgust. Lucette asks what kind of medicine he is taking, and he explains it is his only effective remedy. Lucette looks on with deep concern, wondering what sort of severe illness requires such strong, smelly medicine. Standing before him, Lucette hesitates, worrying that asking about his specific illness might be considered too nosy.
Lucette falls into a thoughtful silence, her expression serious as she considers her new friend's mysterious health.
Lucette suddenly announces she needs to head home for a moment, surprising the boy with her abruptness.
The boy tries to stop her as Lucette quickly runs out of the house into the distance.
A loud slam sounding as Lucette exits, leaving the boy standing alone and feeling very confused. Looking toward the door, the boy worries if he made a mistake that caused her to leave. A warm memory of Lucette's cheerful smile flashes as the boy reflects on their brief time together. The room falls quiet, the scene showing the empty chairs where they recently shared their snacks. Lucette is shown mid-bite, her expression shifting as if she suddenly realized something extremely important. Dark figures of a king and queen appear in a somber flashback near a mysterious cloaked man. The cloaked man warns the young prince that his true identity must remain a total secret here. He explains that a mind control spell protects him, but warns that no one must discover the truth. Back in the present, the boy stands with his back turned, lost in his own complicated thoughts. The boy looks away with a somber expression, his posture reflecting his inner turmoil and deep isolation. A single red eye gleams as the boy thinks to himself that the current situation is quite strange. The camera focuses on the table, showing a remaining cookie on a plate and a cup of tea. The boy stands alone in the scholarly room, the heavy silence emphasizing his lack of any company. A sudden thud sounding as the boy reacts with shock to a sudden noise from the door. Lucette returns breathless with a large pot, apologizing for her sudden departure and explaining she hurried back. A soft thud sounding as she sets down a pot of her mother's fresh homemade mushroom stew. Lucette explains that taking medicine on an empty stomach is painful, so she brought him some food. A soft clink sounding as Lucette serves the warm stew, telling the grateful boy to eat quickly. As he eats, the boy realizes that her hurry was purely out of concern for his well-being. Lucette beams with joy, asking the boy if he finds her mother's stew to be truly delicious. The boy confirms the stew is very tasty while Lucette cheerfully encourages him to eat a lot. The boy pauses mid-meal, suddenly realizing he still does not know the kind girl's actual name. Lucette offers a radiant and beautiful smile, her green eyes sparkling with genuine kindness and pure warmth. A sudden thud-thud sounding as the boy's heart races, clearly affected by Lucette's bright and friendly smile. The boy smiles back, finally introducing himself and asking the orange-haired girl to call him Lev. Time passes as they become friends, using Lev's house as a secret hideout while he completes a puzzle. Lev holds up a completed wooden cube puzzle decorated with many intricate and glowing sun symbols. Lucette is amazed, calling Lev a genius, though he modestly claims he still has much to learn. Lucette holds the puzzle and jokingly asks what that makes her if he considers himself lacking knowledge. Lucette pouts slightly, wondering if it is difficult for a genius like Lev to play with her. Lev looks up in surprise, reacting with confusion to Lucette's unexpected and self-deprecating comment about herself. Lev explains that her visits and conversation make him incredibly happy, and he is the one benefiting. Lucette is struck by his sincerity as Lev admits that having a friend is all new to him. Lev smiles warmly, expressing his deep happiness and his wish that their friendship could continue like this. Lucette laughs, playfully asking Lev why he finds the idea of friendship so difficult to understand. Lev gazes at her softly and promises to remember her words as flowers bloom around them. A soft thud-thud sounding as a sudden knock interrupts them, and a voice asks for Luch. The door opens to reveal a kind brown-haired woman with a long braid smiling at them. Lev bows politely to the woman while she warmly asks the young boy how he has been. The woman presents a fresh fruit pie, teasingly wondering if her daughter forgot to bring a gift. She apologizes for her troublemaking daughter, but Lev assures her that he actually finds their time fun. The woman becomes flustered, worrying that her daughter's constant visits might be too much for Lev's home. Lucette tells her mother that they are simply friends while the older woman looks on with concern. Lucette explains that they play together daily, so bringing a gift every time is simply not practical. As the sun sets, Lucette says goodbye to Lev, who watches them leave from his cottage door. Lev reaches up to touch his hair, lost in thought after the lively visit from his friends. A radiant image of Lucette smiling appears as Lev reflects on the joy she brings to him. A soft thud sounding as Lucette walks away, leaving Lev standing alone at the entrance of his home. Lev remains silent, his hand lingering near his forehead as he processes the unfamiliar feeling of friendship. Adjusting his glasses, Lev thinks to himself that he truly wishes they could stay together longer. Walking home, the mother asks if Luch is close with Lev, and Lucette confirms he is fun. The brown-haired woman smiles and asks if her daughter plans to attend the festival with Lev this year. Lucette blinks in surprise, her expression turning puzzled as she repeats the word festival back to her mother. A flyer for a quiz contest shows various prizes, including sightseeing in the capital and massive amounts of gold. Sitting on her bed, Lucette holds the flyer and wonders why the village is hosting a quiz contest. Lucette's green eyes narrow in deep thought as she carefully studies the information written on the paper. Looking toward the window, she notes that villagers would naturally be curious about the capital's grand sights. Lucette pouts and tells herself that she has absolutely no interest in visiting the capital at all. A sudden thwack sounding as Lucette imagines a prince's sword fight, fearing she might get caught in drama. She shakes her head vigorously, thinking that she has finally found peace and refuses to take any risks. Lucette suddenly pauses, her attention captured by the massive gold prize listed for the second-place winner. A sudden gleam sounding as Lucette's eyes sparkle with newfound determination and greed for the prize money. A soft clap sounding as Lucette imagines herself and Lev standing together as successful second-place winners. Carrying a pot of stew, Lucette plans to bribe Lev into helping her win the contest's gold. Lucette arrives at Lev's cottage and is surprised to see a bright light shining from the windows. She stands outside, wondering why there is light at Lev's house at such a late hour. Inside, Lev winces in pain while staring at a fresh, bleeding wound on his lower arm. A hooded man named Rada appears, dismissively telling the prince not to fuss over such a minor wound. Rada holds a glowing orb, warning the prince to stop harboring rebellious thoughts while he is here. The tall, hooded magician orders Lev to stay quietly in the village as if he were dead. Rada begins to heal the wound with magic, hoping that his harsh advice has been properly understood. Lev glares at the magician and coldly asks if that is all he came here to say. Rada offers a chilling smile and tells the prince that they will surely see each other again. A sudden hum sounding as Rada stands within a glowing magic circle, preparing to teleport away. Lev turns his head sharply with a look of pure shock as he senses something unexpected. Rada asks if the prince has already made a friend, but Lev tells him to go away. The hooded man notes that the picky prince finally allowed someone near and wonders who it is. A sudden thud sounding as Lev grips the door handle tightly, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. With glowing red eyes, Lev sternly orders the magician to leave and never repeat himself again. Radha smiles calmly, stating that he will comply with the prince's order for the time being. As he vanishes, Radha warns that the emperor could easily make this entire village disappear on a whim. Lev stands alone in the silence, looking down with a somber and heavily burdened expression. Lev looks up in surprise and calls out Lucia's name as he spots her standing nearby. Lucette turns toward him with a serious face, her presence bringing the conversation back to the present. Lucette enters, asking if she kept him waiting, a soft thud sounding as she arrives. Lucette worries about her health. Lev reacts with shock as she leans in close. Lucette falls into a soft, thoughtful silence while looking down at the ground. Lev panics internally, wondering if she overheard his conversation with the magician Radanan. Lucette notices his stained sleeve and asks if he has been injured. Finding no wounds, Lucette sighs with relief and wonders if he cleaned up poorly. Relieved his secret is safe, Lev smiles and asks if she was truly worried.
Lucette confirms her worry, explaining that she thought his sleeve was covered in blood. Lev apologizes for the concern, and Lucette suggests they share the mushroom stew. While eating, Lucette asks about his room activities. He claims he was only studying.
Lucette laughs, teasingly asking if he was too concentrated to hear her knocking. Lev asks a favor, requesting that she avoid visiting the cottage's second floor.
Lucette easily agrees to his request while continuing her meal with a smile.
Lucette asks for a favor in return, demanding he pays attention to her knocks. Lucette beams with a radiant smile as flowers appear to bloom around her. They agree on a 10-knock signal, and Lev promises to listen more carefully.
Lucette presents a flyer, asking Lev to enter the Rodanthi Festival contest with her.
Lev notes the contest requires a partner, appearing quite surprised by her sudden request.
Lucette looks at him warmly, explaining she specifically wanted to attend with him.
Lev turns red and admits he does not think he is suited for such events. Lucette encourages him, noting his high ability and telling him not to feel pressured. She offers a way out, telling the boy he can simply say no.
Lucette mentions she could ask Dominic instead, which causes Lev's eyes to whiten.
Lev reacts with a sharp sense of jealousy at the thought of another partner.
Lev quickly agrees to go, promising to prepare more diligently for the festival contest.
Lucette is delighted by his change of heart and thanks him with a smile. Lev admits he'll try despite his lack of confidence, but she finds him perfect.
On festival day, Lucette arrives in a vibrant yellow dress and matching straw hat. Lucette asks if Lev is ready, surprising him as she stands near the door.
Lev appears in an ornate formal suit, and Lucette wonders why he is dressed up. They stand together outside, a bright contrast between her summer dress and his suit. Adjusting his brooch, Lev nervously asks if his formal appearance looks strange to her.
Lucette tells him he looks great, but her expression shifts as she feels the heat.
A loud chirp chirp sounding as Lucette points out the suit is too hot for today.
Looking into his closet, Lucette finds only thick, checkered clothing hanging on the rack. Lucette stands before the wardrobe, stunned by his complete lack of any summer outfits. They both look dejected as they process the dilemma of his heavy, warm clothes.
Lucette begins rummaging through his things again, hoping to find a usable summer piece. Lev changes into a thin, sleeveless vest, and Lucette finds it really suits him. Lev asks if she likes it, and Lucette enthusiastically confirms that it is perfect. Lev admits he just wanted to wear something she liked, making Lucette's heart race. A soft thud-thud sounding as Lucette's heart beats fast in response to his sincerity.
Lucette reaches up and begins adjusting the boy's dark hair with a gentle touch.
A soft swish sounding as she fixes his bangs, warning him against such actions. Lev is left completely confused by her sudden physical closeness and the strange warning. Lucette quickly dismisses the moment, telling him it is nothing and urging him on. She mentions the carriage is waiting and prompts the boy to finally head outside. Outside, Lucette hands Lev a matching straw hat that her mother made him.
Lev adjusts his new hat as Lucette hears someone calling out her name nearby. A brown-haired boy named Dominic runs up, asking if they decided to attend together.
Dominic grumbles about them attending together, but Lucette dismisses his complaints with a lighthearted apology. Dominic introduces himself and asks the dark-haired boy's name, receiving the formal reply of Levinus. Dominic questions why he uses a formal name when Lucette uses a nickname, but Levinus insists. Dominic offers to teach the boy soccer if Lucette becomes too bothersome, but she denies being trouble.
The dark-haired boy remains stoic as he delivers a blunt, single-word rejection to Dominic's offer.
Levinus firmly states that Lucette won't be a bother, leaving both her and Dominic momentarily stunned. Frustrated by their behavior, Dominic throws a tantrum and calls them both annoying before giving up. Levinus calmly suggests that they board the carriage, and Lucette happily agrees to leave the boy behind. A soft thud sounding as Levinus gallantly helps Lucette step up into the red horse-drawn carriage. Lucette peers out from the carriage window, her expression soft as the journey officially begins. Inside, Levinus opens a briefcase and offers Lucette a cookie to enjoy during their ride together. Levinus explains he brought her favorites, and Lucette is deeply touched by his thoughtful and kind gesture.
The two children sit side by side in the carriage, contentedly snacking on the cookies Levinas provided. A rhythmic clatter-clatter sounding as the horse-drawn carriage travels down the sunlit path toward the festival. Lucette gazes peacefully out the window, watching the scenic landscape pass by as they continue their trip. Noticing her quiet state, Levinas kindly asks if she would like to take a nap if she's tired. Lucette looks at him with soft, tired eyes and gently asks if resting on him is okay. A soft thud sounding as Lucette's head rests on Levinas's shoulder, and she quickly falls fast asleep.
Levinas looks down at the sleeping girl with a sharp, intense gaze from behind his glasses.
The carriage interior is filled with a warm, peaceful atmosphere as the two sit in comfortable silence.
Levinas recalls a radiant image of Lucette smiling, her name echoing in his thoughts with newfound meaning.
Watching her sleep, Levinas reflects on the special nickname and decides he will keep it only for himself.
The scene shifts to the grand and towering royal palace located in the imperial capital of Bladen. A heavy stomp-stomp sounding as someone walks with great urgency down the palace's polished sunlit hallway. A sudden bang sounding as the massive ornate double doors are thrown open with considerable force. A blonde boy enters the study and urgently calls out to Radhanam, who is quietly drinking tea. A royal decree identifies the blonde-haired boy as Delmar Abel Hadassah, the sole heir to the current emperor.
A sharp clack sounding as Delmar demands Radhanam take action because his mother is hiding information.
A soft bow sounding as the hooded magician Radhanam asks what the young prince wishes for him to do. Delmar looks on with watery eyes as he tearfully demands to be taken to his older brother. Radhanam questions if the first prince is hiding for a reason, but Delmar insists on going immediately. The magician looks skeptical as he wonders if the first prince will actually welcome his younger brother's visit. Delmar beams with confidence, stating that his brother surely misses him and will be happy to see him. Radhanam lets out a suspicious chuckle and questions the boy's certainty about his brother's feelings. A sudden hum sounding as Radhanam summons a swirling purple magic portal to transport the young prince. Radhanam drapes a magical cloak over Delmar, warning him never to remove it for his own safety. Delmar is puzzled, questioning why such a dangerous-sounding tool is necessary just to visit his own brother.
A soft swish sounding as Radhanam calls it a precaution and bids the prince a pleasant time.
Delmar begins to float in the magical energy, still wondering where exactly they are headed.
Delmar cries out for Radhanam to wait as the teleportation magic pulls him away from the palace room.
A sudden flash sounding as Delmar vanishes completely, leaving the hooded magician standing alone in the room. Radhanam stands in the silence of the study, his expression hidden as he processes the prince's departure. A soft slurp sounding as Radhanam calmly takes another sip of tea with an inscrutable and chilling smile. The magician remains standing in the ornate room, looking out from under his hood at the surrounding books. At the festival, Lucette and Levinas walk through the bustling streets together, happily enjoying their snacks. Colorful banners and balloons drift across the bright blue sky, capturing the joyful spirit of the festival day. Sitting on a bench with their prizes, Lucette beams and remarks on how much fun festivals truly are. A sharp pop-pop sounding as Levinas displays incredible skill at the dart stall, hitting every single target. A loud whir sounding as the roulette wheel stops on first place, causing Lucette to cheer in delight. Levinas effortlessly finds a golden chest during the treasure hunt, leaving Lucette and the bystanders completely shocked. Lucette expresses her pure joy over the simple pleasures of buying books and eating ice cream. Lucette asks the dark-haired boy if it's truly all right for her to keep all the festival prizes. Levinas smiles warmly, assuring her that seeing her happiness is more than enough of a reward. The two children sit together on a park bench surrounded by their many festival winnings. Lucette's expression turns thoughtful as she quietly ponders the boy's unexpected kindness and dedicated attention. Dismissing her suspicions, Lucette decides she is likely overthinking things and simply enjoys the festival atmosphere. Levinas presents a snow globe, noting that he noticed it was the item she wanted most. Levinas hopes the snow globe will always serve as a happy reminder of their time together today. The dark-haired boy smiles softly while holding the precious snow globe he won for his friend. A festive announcement declares that registration for the upcoming festival competition is officially beginning now. Levinas asks Lucette about her specific goals for the competition as they walk through the town. Lucette surprises Levinas by stating her goal is strictly second place, prompting him to ask why. Levinas encourages her, believing she has the skill to easily aim for the top prize instead. Lucette lets out a cheerful laugh, clearly amused by his high opinion of her abilities. Lucette insists she is perfectly satisfied with second place as long as she personally feels fulfilled. Levinas remains quietly puzzled by her lack of competitive drive for the prestigious first-place title. Lucette admits she has no interest in the first-place prize, which is a city tour ticket. The girl gazes at her companion with a curious look as they continue their conversation. Spotting a general store, Lucette suddenly remembers an important errand her mother asked her to complete. Lucette asks Lev to wait for her briefly while she quickly handles her mother's urgent errand. They exchange friendly goodbyes as Lucette disappears into the bustling crowd, leaving the boy alone.
The scene focuses on the registration desk for the Rodante quiz competition amid the festival decorations. A lively crowd of townspeople gathers around a notice board to read the latest festival updates. Waiting patiently for her return, Lavina scans the area and wonders when Lucette will finally arrive. A nearby commotion catches his attention as someone shouts loudly, demanding to know if anyone hears. The blonde-haired Prince Delmar frantically questions a man about a boy with black hair and red eyes. A heavy thump sounding as Lavinus's eyes widen in shock upon recognizing the young prince's voice. Delmar's voice rings out as he continues his desperate search for his missing older brother. Lavinus identifies the intruder as Delmar, his heart sinking at the sight of the young royal. Lavinus hides his presence, wondering why Delmar is here, and realizing the boy is searching for him. Delmar demands the truth, while Lavinus worries the tall man being questioned will spot his hiding place. A soft thud sounding as Lavinus finally steps forward and places a steady hand on Delmar's shoulder. Lavinus startles the young prince by calmly asking what could have possibly brought him to this town. Delmar looks up with wide, joyful eyes, his face lighting up with absolute relief and happiness. A rhythmic clack-clack sounding as Lavinus leads the young boy away from the crowded festival streets.
Delmar clings to Lavinus's hand, tearfully explaining how much he missed him after he suddenly disappeared.
Delmar reveals he sought Redanum's magical assistance, while Lavinus questions the dangerous choice he made. The young prince beams with excitement, completely oblivious to the gravity of his actions or location. A sudden rustle sounding as Delmar throws himself into a tight hug, calling out to his brother. A royal frame identifies the dark-haired boy's true and full name as Aurelio Lavinus Hadassah. Lavinus reflects on the noble name he discarded, saddened that he is still treated royally. Delmar continues to smile brightly at his brother, clearly overjoyed to have finally found him again. Lavinus relents to Delmar's presence, noting that there is no one around to scold the play. Lavinus warns Delmar that his reckless rule-breaking often results in Lavinus receiving the punishment instead. Lavinus adjusts the prince's ornate collar, causing Delmar to look up with a confused expression.
Lavinus explains that if the palace discovers his location, he will be forced to leave once again.
Lavinus wonders where he might be sent next, fearing his next destination could be far worse. A quick ugh sounding as Delmar gasps when the weight of his brother's potential departure sinks in. Lavinus reassures the frightened boy, telling him that he does not hold any blame against him.
Looking back at his peaceful life with Lucette, Lavinus admits this life is better than the palace. Delmar begs his brother to return home, promising to plead for mercy from their father.
The young prince looks up with hurt eyes, unable to finish his desperate plea for reconciliation. Lavinus coldly dismisses the invitation, claiming he will visit more formally at a later time. Clenching his fist, Lavinus questions if Delmar truly understands the weight of his current words. With a chilling intensity, Lavinus issues a final warning for the prince never to return. Delmar reels back in fear as Lucette's cheerful voice suddenly echoes from around the corner. A soft thud sounding as Lucette rounds the corner and approaches the two young boys. Lucette beams with joy, expressing her relief at finally locating Lavinus within the crowded streets. Lavinus breaks into a nervous sweat as he and Delmar watch the girl approach them. Lavinus lies to Lucette, claiming he was simply assisting a lost child find his way. A sharp glint sounding as Lavinus glares at Delmar, ordering him to leave immediately. Fidgeting with his collar, the young prince reluctantly agrees to depart without causing further trouble. Lucette offers a friendly farewell as Delmar begins to walk away from the alleyway. Delmar reflects on his brother's drastic personality shift as he departs the festive town square. A sudden hum sounding as Delmar's magical cloak activates, signaling that his life is in danger. Horrified, the prince realizes that his own brother might actually view him as a lethal threat. A sudden flash sounding as magic consumes Delmar, while Lucette leads Lavinus toward the competition. Lavinus apologizes to Luce, fearing they have missed the start of the festival's quiz competition. Lucette comforts him with a gentle pat, confident that their skills will overcome the late start. Spotting the building, Lucette excitedly points out that they have finally reached the correct venue. A rhythmic tap sounding as Lucette turns back, confused when Lavinus stops following behind her. Lavinus looks around the busy street with a bewildered expression, momentarily lost in his thoughts. The scene focuses on the official venue for the upcoming festival's highly anticipated quiz competition. A large sign announces the contest while Lavinus stares ahead with a look of pure dread. Lucette lets out a playful laugh, clearly enjoying the lively atmosphere surrounding the competition hall. Lavinus wonders if his current attire is the reason for Lucette's sudden and focused attention. Lucette imagines the boy in a formal suit, thinking he should dress as elegantly as possible. Giggling to herself, Lucette remarks on how she has discovered a surprisingly cute side of him. Festo balloons drift through the sky as the pair hurries toward the building for registration. The grand competition hall stands prominently, decorated with red banners featuring a white lion crest.
A soft gasp sounding as Lucette enters, wondering if the event has already officially begun.
Approaching a purple-haired woman, Lucette apologizes for their tardiness and asks to join the contest. The woman considers the request, noting that the low number of participants allows for an exception. The organizer grants them entry, though she warns that their first 3 questions are already forfeit. A joyful cheer sounding as Lucette celebrates their acceptance into the contest despite being late. Banners flutter as the woman directs them to enter the hall during the current break period. A soft thud sounding as the 2 children take their seats and remove their straw hats.
Lucette looks around the half-empty hall, noting that there are very few participants for this round.
A bored nobleman sits on a throne-like chair, overseeing the competition with an indifferent expression. Lucette whispers encouragement to Levinus, telling him not to worry about any lack of prior preparation. Lucette mentions her own diligent studying before pausing, surprised by a sudden change in the atmosphere. A low rumble sounding as Levinus mutters answers with an intense, fiery aura of extreme concentration. A sharp glint sounding as Levinus's red eyes flare behind his glasses with unmatched competitive determination. Levinus displays a board with the correct answer, easily passing the latest round of the competition. Lucette is completely stunned, exclaiming that Levinus has somehow managed to answer 10 consecutive questions correctly.
Lucette praises his incredible performance, but the boy humbly dismisses his success as mere luck.
Gazing at him with admiration, Lucette notes that the questions were actually quite difficult to answer.
Lucette marvels at his vast knowledge, while Levinus remains focused on the next challenge ahead.
The purple-haired organizer steps forward and formally announces that the final question is about to begin.
A historical narration describes the former emperor's brutal campaign to eradicate every sorcerer from the empire. Narration describes how one lone sorcerer resisted until the very end during the surrender. A monument honors the traitor's spirit as the final question asks for the wizard's name. Levinus stares ahead with a serious expression, carefully considering the difficult historical question presented. Nearby children whisper in confusion, noting that the sorcerers have all been dead for years. Lucette asks if he knows the answer, and Levinus confidently confirms that he actually does.
Levinus warns Lucette that answering correctly will secure first place, which she previously said she avoided.
Lucette leans in close, playfully asking him to whisper the secret answer only to her. Levinus agrees to share while the organizer prepares to announce the official correct answer. Levinus whispers the name Radanim as the narration identifies him as the Empire's last wizard. The contest concludes as the organizers wonder if the final challenge was too difficult for children.
Johann notices the pair, asking his assistant if the children had actually spoken the correct answer.
The woman admits she could not hear them, while Johann remains thoughtfully intrigued by the pair.
Lucette cheers over their near-perfect score, completely unaware of the nobleman's intense and growing interest.
A focused close-up reveals the nobleman's name is Johann as he watches them from his seat. Johann considers that these unusually knowledgeable children could potentially be helpful to his own future plans. A soft jingle sounding as Lucette marvels at the bag overflowing with authentic, shining gold coins. Outside, Lucette thanks Love for his help and asks what she should do with her prize. Lucette decides to buy new clothes for her mother, who always refuses and mends old ones. Levinus listens intently as Lucette explains her desire to see her mother wearing something truly beautiful. Levinus offers to help choose a gift and use his own gold if her funds run low. Surprised, Lucette reminds him that they already agreed to split the prize money between themselves. Levinus explains he wants to repay her mother for the kindness she has always shown him. Lucette feels a bit shy, awkwardly scratching her cheek after hearing his sincere and heartwarming words. To repay his generosity, Lucette holds up 3 fingers and promises to grant him 3 wishes. Levinus blinks in surprise, echoing her offer of 3 wishes with a look of pure bewilderment. Lucette confirms the offer with a bright smile, extending the same promise to him as well. Levinus's red eyes soften behind his glasses as he is deeply moved by her kind gesture. Levinus silently reflects that Lucette is the one sacrificing, as he has already received so much. Looking at her, Levinus feels that no matter what he gives, it will never be enough. A rhythmic thump-thump sounding as Levinus's heart races while he watches his companion's happy, radiant face. Entering a boutique, Lucette exclaims in delight at the wide variety of beautiful clothes on display. Lucette admires the cute lace and shirt designs, finding everything in the store absolutely charming. Lucette giggles with pure joy, completely caught up in the excitement of her long-awaited shopping trip. Lucette quickly spins around, asking Levinus to help her choose between the different outfits she found. Levinus is buried under a mountain of fabric, barely able to hear her over the heavy pile. Feeling exhausted, Levinus sits on a sofa while Lucette apologizes for her sudden burst of excitement.
Lucette laughs sheepishly, admitting she got carried away since she has not gone shopping in ages.
Spotting a purple floral necklace, Lucette admires its beauty, but assumes it must be incredibly expensive. Lucette quickly changes her mind, deciding it is better to forget the jewelry and focus on clothes. Lucette returns to browsing the racks while Levinus watches her with a quiet, patient expression. Levinus remains silent, his gaze fixed on Lucette as she happily continues her search for gifts. Decorative text signifies the end of the current scene as the sun begins to set outside. A rhythmic clack-clack sounding as a carriage travels through the sunset while Lucette asks about his day. Levinus admits everything was a first for him, leaving Lucette stunned by his lack of experience. Lucette suggests they attend the next festival together, but the invitation catches Levinus completely off guard. Levinus hesitates, wondering how he should respond to her unexpected and very forward proposal. Levinus worries he will be unable to join future contests, feeling a sudden pang of regret. Lucette looks confused by his reaction, with floating question marks emphasizing her lack of understanding. Lucette clarifies that she wants his company, not just his quiz skills, though money is helpful. Lucette beams with satisfaction, telling him how happy she is with the gifts they bought today. Levinus confesses that he wants to attend the festival again because he truly enjoys being with her. A soft blush colors Levinus's face as he stares ahead in a moment of quiet, sincere reflection. Lucette is left completely speechless, staring back at him with wide, stunned eyes and a bewildered expression. Inside the carriage, Lucette asks if he is leaving already while Levinus reaches into his brown coat. Levinus reveals a sparkling floral necklace, explaining he noticed she did not buy anything for herself today. Levinus presents the open jewelry box to the young girl, who covers her mouth in complete shock. A rhythmic thump-thump sounding as Lucette blushes, wondering how he could afford such an obviously expensive gift. Smiling gently, Levinus tells her that he simply really wanted to give the beautiful necklace to her. Levinus asks if he can put the jewelry on her himself while they sit together in the carriage. Lucette wonders how long he has been watching her as Levinus carefully fastens the necklace around her neck. Levinus remarks that the necklace looks great on her, while Lucette marvels at how incredibly considerate he is. Lucette touches the pendant with a dazed expression, her face burning red from the boy's unexpected kindness. Looking down shyly, Lucette tells him to hurry up and make his next move. Lucette tells him to think of his next wish, feeling like he is just granting hers instead. Levinus suggests asking for a head pat, but Lucette dismisses the idea as being too simple for a wish. Lucette pats his head anyway, telling him she can do that anytime and to think of a real wish. Levinus agrees to think of another wish while Lucette continues to pat his head with a bright smile. The carriage travels through the sunset as Levinus thanks her, and Lucette dismisses it as being nothing. Returning home at night, Lucette enters the house and is surprised to find that no one is there. Sighing, Lucette sits on the sofa and notes that her mother has not yet returned from her business. Lucette reflects on the quiz competition's final question, feeling certain she has heard the name Rodanum before. A loud thud sounding as someone calls her name, causing Lucette to scream in terror. Lucette asks who is there as a voice outside asks if she received the quiz competition prize money. The person outside claims they forgot to get her signature before issuing the prize money to her. Through the closed wooden door, the mysterious visitor asks Lucette to open the door for them. Hoping it is not a hassle, Lucette reaches for the door handle to answer the late-night visitor. A sudden halt sounding as Lucette stops her hand, struck by a sudden and worrying thought. Lucette realizes she never wrote her address on the form and wonders if the person outside is dangerous. Lucette tells the visitor she is tired and asks them to return tomorrow instead of opening the door. Lucette looks through the door with suspicion, noting that the person seems to have actually left. Rhythmic footsteps sounding as a figure in a dark hooded cloak walks away from the house at night. A sudden turn sounding as the figure stops and mutters to himself while looking back at the house. A silver-haired man with red eyes and sharp nails grins, thinking the girl is interestingly quick-witted. Lucette's mother shouts in a rage, demanding to know who would dare to target her daughter. The mother vows to teach the intruder a lesson while Lucette tries to calm her down. Lucette tells her mother to forget the anger and open the gift she and Love picked out. The mother admires the beautiful teal dress, noting how incredibly thoughtful the two children were. Lucette's mother looks at her daughter with a serious and contemplative expression after seeing the gifts. The mother asks about the expensive necklace Lucette is wearing, catching the young girl off guard. The mother begins to question the exchange of such big gifts before deciding to drop the subject entirely. The mother tells Lucette to lock up properly because she will be very busy starting tomorrow morning. A warm smile spreads across the mother's face as she looks forward to the new plans ahead. The scene transitions to a beautiful, sunlit building that has been converted into a new place of business. Narration explains that seasons passed after her mother opened a general store, bringing changes to their daily lives. An older Lucette responds to a customer's request, telling them she will be right there to help. A soft sigh sounding as Lucette wipes her brow, noting how hectic the busy store has been lately. Lucette's mother, dressed in fine clothes, thanks the customers as they depart from the successful shop. Lucette watches her mother with relief, thinking about how proud her mother looks of their new life. The mother smiles contentedly while working, clearly happy with the growth and success of her general store. A soft giggle sounding as Levinus asks why she is exhausted, and Lucette describes the store's constant bustle.
Lucette reflects on the success of the general store run by her mother Manette.
Levinus mentions he has been busy lately, and Lucette asks if he means at the blacksmith.
Levinus offers to show Lucette something he made while she expresses her curiosity. Lucette laughs at the small object, causing Levinus to defend his long day of work.
Levinus promises to improve in the future, explaining that he is still just a beginner. Lucette wonders if he should refine the little bear-shaped trinket as she observes it closely. Lucette feels a bit envious seeing how her mother and Levinus are both engrossed in work.
The mother tells the children to close up the shop so they can all return home. Determined, Lucette prepares herself to pursue a new goal she has found for herself.
A soft thud sounding as Lucette prepares the third item, ready to complete her task.
With a clenched fist, Lucette declares she has found a specific goal to achieve.
Winter arrives, covering the bare tree branches with a fresh white layer of snow.
A voice welcomes a visitor to the house as snow continues to fall outside.
Levinus offers Lucette some hot cocoa to help her warm up from the cold weather.
While holding the warm mug, Lucette notices an unfamiliar scar on Levinus's hand.
Levinus calls out to her while she takes a sip of her warm drink.
Levinus asks about her math introduction book, causing Lucette to spit out her cocoa in shock.
Lucette sheepishly admits that she read it, though her expression is noticeably strained.
Levinus brightly suggests they study together, surrounded by a cheerful and flowery atmosphere. A heavy thud sounding as a massive stack of books is placed on the table. Levinus enthusiastically claims that math is the foundation for all other learning journeys.
Lucette cries comical tears, lamenting that she and math simply do not get along.
Lucette begs to study a different subject instead, while Levinus asks for her suggestion.
Lucette smiles warmly as she considers which subject she would actually prefer to learn. The scene shifts back to the snowy woods where winter has fully taken hold.
Levinus laughs, noting that her expression is completely different than during her math classes.
Lucette joyfully admits her lack of interest in math while spinning around in the snow.
Falling into the snow, Lucette tells him to stop agreeing with everything she says.
Lying back, Levinus explains he just wants her to do things that make her happy.
Lucette agrees and reminds him that he still has one final wish left to use.
The two share a quiet and meaningful look as the snow falls softly around them.
Rhythmic taps sounding as Lucette peeks through a door at an unexpected kitchen scene. Levinus is seen from behind, wearing an apron while tasting something he is cooking.
Lucette spots a collection of books on the table and moves in for a closer look.
Lucette is stunned to find a pile of cookbooks glowing brightly on the desk. Startled, Lucette responds to his call with a bewildered and wide-eyed expression.
Lucette stares in complete shock as a warm and celebratory energy fills the room.
Levinus presents a beautiful strawberry cake to the young girl with a gentle smile.
Lucette asks if this is for her birthday, and Levinus confirms he remembered her mention. Overwhelmed, Lucette notes how he filled the day with everything she enjoys the most.
Lucette throws her arms around Levinus in a heartfelt and emotional hug.
Lucette smiles contentedly while embracing him, her green eyes filled with genuine happiness.
Levinus looks down at her with a soft, affectionate gaze while they continue their embrace. The two children remain in a hug, surrounded by a warm and sparkling atmosphere.
Later, Lucette falls fast asleep on the sofa while a blanket covers her.
Levinus watches her sleep, promising to prepare things with even more care next time. Rhythmic thuds sounding as someone knocks, prompting thoughts of Lady Rada or Dolor. A sudden halt sounding as Aurelio is surprised by a woman in the hallway. Aurelio looks at the unexpected visitor and asks what brings her there so suddenly. The majestic empress is revealed, standing regally in her elaborate and beautiful blue gown. Aurelio is visibly startled as the empress notes his growth since their last encounter. The empress inquires if he is experiencing any discomfort or requires anything at all. Bowing respectfully, Aurelio expresses his gratitude for the imperial court's consideration during his stay. With a steady gaze, Aurelio asks why she has suddenly arrived at his location. Aurelio feels a sense of trepidation as the empress admits he must have been quite surprised.
The empress questions if he remains troubled by the ongoing issue regarding the succession.
Standing with his back turned, Aurelio listens as she warns him against becoming vulnerable. Aurelio maintains a formal distance while addressing her with a quiet and serious tone. A brief silence follows as the empress pensive acknowledges his words with a soft murmur. Confirming his safety, the empress prepares to depart while Aurelio reacts with sudden surprise. Aurelio asks if she has no further requests or if she truly plans to leave. Pausing on the staircase, a soft rustle sounding as the empress reminds him to take his medicine. Watching her go, Aurelio obediently confirms that he will follow her instructions properly. As light pours through the window, Aurelio doubts the visit was merely a simple checkup.
Aurelio laments being confined to a remote village and subjected to constant surveillance like an animal.
a tight squeeze sounding as Aurelio clenches his fist, feeling the unpleasantness of being monitored. A sharp creak sounding from the floorboards as Aurelio moves through the quiet, dark room.
Aurelio stands silently over Lucette while she sleeps peacefully in her bed at night.
Kneeling beside her, a soft rustle sounding as Aurelio expresses his contentment just being with her. Gently taking her hand, Aurelio thinks that he cannot tolerate any disruption to their current life. A firm grip sounding as Aurelio decides they must prepare for the arrival of unexpected guests. With a dark and determined gaze, Aurelio vows to protect Luce and prevent any danger.
A decorative title card marks a transition in the story as the setting shifts forward.
A cheerful chirp sounding as a new day begins at the snow-covered house in winter. Lavinus notices Lucette's troubled expression while she clutches her stomach with a strained, pale smile. Concerned, Lavinus asks if she is in pain, while Lucette tries to dismiss the issue. Lavinus wonders if she ate too quickly, noting that she seems to have an upset stomach.
Lucette asks if there is any digestive medicine available for what she ate the previous day. Lavinus apologizes for being unprepared, but Lucette insists it is not his fault at all.
Lucette excitedly suggests visiting a pharmacy in the village to find some relief for herself. Lavinus remains deep in thought, prompting Lucette to ask what is currently bothering him. A low thud sounding as they look at a dilapidated and abandoned building in the snow. A sharp gasp sounding as they realize the state of the village's only medical facility. A comical groan sounding as Lucette is overwhelmed by the lack of proper medical resources. Lucette sighs as they approach a small house, noting the inadequacy of the local pharmacy. A warm giggle sounding as an old woman suggests honey water for Lucette's upset stomach. Feeling awkward, Lucette tells the woman they will simply head back home instead. Rhythmic crunches sounding in the snow as Lavinus mentions a better pharmacist over the mountain. Lavinus expresses regret, worrying that his own cooking might have caused her sudden stomach pain. Lucette reassures him that the food was delicious and he should not feel guilty. Lucette reflects on how falling asleep quickly or walking around has helped her feel better.
Lucette stops and looks contemplative while they walk through the quiet, snowy trees.
Recalling a past moment, Lucette remembers watching Lavinus take his medicine while she felt worried. Lucette glances at the boy beside her, thinking about the nature of his regular medicine. Lucette notes that the glowing green medicine looks incredibly complicated and difficult to produce. The scene shows various apothecary tools and dried herbs used for making complex medicinal potions. Surrounded by flowers, Lucette realizes that studying pharmacology could be very useful for Lavinus. Lavinus asks why she suddenly looks so much happier as they continue their winter walk. Lucette brightly announces that she has finally thought of something she truly wants to do. A desperate shout sounding as a man reaches out, begging someone to wait for him. Feet in black boots race across the snowy ground, kicking up white powder in a hurry. A long-haired man stops the children, asking if they won the summer festival's big quiz contest. The man introduces himself as Johann, the cheerful assistant serving the High Lord of Rodante. Johann places a hand on Lavinus' shoulder and asks the pair to come along with him. Suspicious of his motives, Lavinus explains they spent the prize money and cannot return it now. Johann laughs, reassuring them with a bright smile that his request has nothing to do with that. Lucette and Lavinus stand together, appearing quite nervous about being summoned by a high-ranking official. Inside a carriage, Lucette tentatively asks Johann a question while he responds with a friendly hum. A rhythmic clatter sounds as the wheels turn, prompting Lucette to ask why they were summoned. Johann remains mysterious, smiling as he says they will find everything out once they arrive. Sitting back in the carriage, Lucette looks out the window, her mind filled with growing curiosity. A dull thud sounds as the carriage approaches Rodante Castle, standing tall against the winter sky. Lavinus stares out at the castle in silence, his expression darkening with a sudden sense of dread. Fear takes hold as Lavinus wonders if the Lord has somehow uncovered his true hidden identity. He tries to calm himself, thinking it impossible for anyone here to recognize him from the palace. His breathing hitches as he struggles to stay calm, reminding himself to take his necessary medication. Behind his glasses, Lavinus's red eye sharpens as he tries to maintain his composure under pressure. Clutching his chest, he realizes this situation is far more complicated than he had ever imagined. Lucette notices his distress and asks if he is unwell, but he blames it on motion sickness. She worries he is sick, but Lavinus offers a strained smile and tells her not to worry. They are greeted by the Lord of Rodante, who welcomes them warmly after their long journey. Lucette attempts to offer a formal greeting, but the Lord dismisses the formalities with a wave. Radiating a cheerful energy, the Lord invites them to enjoy tea and snacks during their chat. The children and Johann share a moment of surprise, questioning the Lord's unusually informal and welcoming nature. Seated at a grand table, Lucette thinks to herself that they seem very eager to welcome them. Still, she wonders why they were called from the village outskirts for such a private meeting.
The Lord turns his steady gaze toward the children, addressing Lucette and Levinus to begin his proposal.
He asks Lucette if she was the one who answered the final question at the summer quiz. Lucette admits she saw the information in a book once, though she was not entirely confident then.
The Lord notes that very few people in the world know about that specific legendary mage. He explains that such interests are usually found only in high-ranking nobles or dedicated academic scholars. A soft clink sounds as a teacup is set down, punctuating the seriousness of their current conversation. When the Lord asks if they are interested in formal studies, the children nod their heads eagerly. They shake their heads in a cute, determined fashion, showing their serious commitment to the Lord's offer.
Their enthusiastic response brings joy to the Lord and Johann, filling the room with a celebratory mood.
The Lord suddenly grabs Lucette's hands, declaring he has finally found valuable talents for Rodante. He asks if there is a specific subject they want to study, promising his full personal support. Johann dabs at his eyes with a handkerchief, admitting they have been searching for years for talent. He laments how students often leave for the capital, leaving no one behind for them to teach. The Lord expresses his profound happiness at finding such gifted children in their small village contest. He offers to provide anything they need, from expert teachers to rare books, to further their learning. Lucette's eyes widen at the idea of unlimited resources, her mind racing with all the possibilities. She notes that Rodante lacks a pharmacy, a detail that has been on her mind lately. Recalling her frustrations, she explains how difficult it is to find medicine needed for a full recovery. With a bright and determined smile, Lucette declares she has chosen to study the field of pharmacology. Later, as snow falls softly, Lucette remarks on how long and unexpectedly eventful their day became. Helping her from the carriage, Levinus notes that her choice of study was quite a surprise. Levinus reveals his own interest in magical engineering and martial arts as the Lord watches them go. Feeling incredibly motivated, Lucette cheers as they both vow to work hard and study together. Levinus says he must head back first and asks if she can return alone before saying goodbye. Lucette pauses with a curious expression while observing the boy stumbling ahead in the snow. A stumbling sound follows as Lucette notices his unsteady steps and remarks on his growing weakness. Rhythmic crunches sound as Lucette asks Levinus if he is okay or needs help returning home.
A startled gasp sounding as Levinus insists he can manage since the destination is not far.
A stumbling sound repeats as she notices his ears are red, suspecting he is actually sick. Lucette tells him that he must be feeling very unwell as they reach the snowy building. Knocks sound against the door as Lucette urgently calls for Levinus to let her in immediately. She reminds him of his promise to open up quickly as she waits outside in the cold. A sharp creak sounding as the door opens, revealing a patch of light on the dark floor. Lucette looks into the dimly lit hallway, wondering why it has become so quiet inside lately. A pained groan sounding as she hears him struggling somewhere further within the quiet, dark house. Her eyes widen in shock as she spots something concerning and points toward his hidden location. Hurried taps sound on the floor as she rushes through the house to find the source. A sudden gasp sounding as Lucette reaches the room and sees a figure on the floor. A heavy thud sounds as she finds Levinus collapsed, crying out his name in a panic. A sharp gasp sounding as she desperately tells him to wake up and get a grip. Trapped in darkness, Levinus huffs and gasps while realizing he cannot see or move his body. Blindfolded and trembling, he concludes that he is currently being subjected to a harsh palace punishment. Levinus recalls how he can identify everyone in the palace solely by the specific sounds of their footsteps. Soft footsteps sound as he recognizes the cautious gait of the only person he truly knows well. Seeing the Empress appear, he addresses his mother with a tone filled with quiet, painful recognition. The Empress explains that her presence is a burden, while Levinus desperately tries to disagree with her. She laments being unable to protect her son, fearing she only brings more trouble to his life. A metal rattle sounding as he struggles against his chains, rejecting her claims of being a burden. The Empress announces it is time for her to go, leaving him bound and kneeling alone. A soft rustle sounding as she departs, while Levinus begs her not to leave him there. Shaking and gasping, he cries out for his mother to take him away from the scary darkness. Turning away into the light, the Empress tells Levinus to be happy before she vanishes completely. In reality, a soft touch sounding as Levinus weakly calls out for his mother while unconscious. Lucette gasps as she feels his forehead, noting that he is suffering from a dangerously high fever. A sudden rustle sounding as Lucette decides she must leave to call for help immediately. A firm grip sounding as Levinus suddenly grabs her arm, desperately pleading with her not to go. Stunned by his strength, she looks down at him while processing his sudden and fearful reaction. Trembling and huffing, he continues to beg her not to leave him behind in the cold darkness. Lucette is surprised to see his eyes half open, questioning if he is finally waking up now. A tense silence follows as she looks deep into his green eyes, noting his dazed expression. Holding his hand tightly, she tells him there is no need to be afraid anymore.
She promises him that she will never leave him behind, urging him not to worry anymore.
Lucette thinks to herself that she must find a way to lower his dangerous fever quickly.
A sudden spark sounding as she notices a faint glow coming from the floor nearby. She sees the medicine bottle lying on the floorboards, its contents glowing with a soft light. A soft pop sounding as she picks up the bottle he always carries, feeling immense release. A sharp gasp sounding as she stares into his dazed eye, realizing his state is worsening. A sticky squelch sounding as Lucette realizes the medicine's thick consistency makes it impossible to swallow. A firm grip sounding as Levinus grabs her sleeve again, repeating his desperate plea for her.
Lucette looks down at him with a serious and determined expression, making a final decision.
Lucette asks Levinus for his trust, thinking to herself that she must take this drastic measure. A soft gulping sound echoes as she takes the thick medicine into her own mouth first. Leaning down, she transfers the medicine to him with a kiss as a bright light shines. A soft release sounding as his hand finally lets go, his body beginning to relax properly. A quiet contemplation echoes through the dimly lit hallway as someone considers the recent and heavy events. Lucette expresses profound relief upon noticing that the boy's fever has finally started to subside at last. Staring at the glowing bottle, Lucette wonders if its fast-acting effects come from some mysterious calming ingredient. A sudden dizziness overcomes Lucette as her vision begins to blur while holding the glowing medicine bottle. Her strength fades instantly, causing Lucette to lose her balance and fall toward the cold wooden floor. A heavy thud sounds as Lucette collapses completely, her consciousness slipping away into an oppressive, dark void. The story shifts focus, highlighting the hidden truth behind the boy known previously as a simple nerd. A pained groan sounds as light filters through a window, signaling the arrival of a new morning. Levinus wakes with a splitting headache, confused by his surroundings and how he ended up in this room. Behind his messy hair, his ruby eyes sharpen with confusion while he attempts to recall the previous night. Seeing Lucette lying motionless nearby, Levinus calls out her name with a sudden and intense wave of concern. Touching his lips, he realizes a bitter taste remains despite having no memory of taking any medicine himself. A soft rustle sounding as he gently lifts her head, realizing she must have administered the medicine. Levinus notices a trace of green liquid on her lips and begins to feel a mounting sense of dread. He recalls the wizard's warning that the medicine, tailored specifically for him, could be lethal to anyone else. Desperation takes hold as he frantically shakes her, begging the unconscious girl to wake up and speak. With a panicked shout, he pleads for her to wake up while holding her limp body very tightly. The scene transitions through a brief interval as the setting shifts back toward the Grand Royal Capital. Standing tall under a clear sky, the Vladan Empire's royal palace looms with an air of absolute authority. Inside the palace, a report is delivered to the emperor regarding a noble's suspicious and growing military expansion. The emperor and his family discuss political maneuvers while the hooded mage stands watch in the silent background. Expressing his displeasure, the emperor suspects the noble is subtly trying to expand his territory and personal influence. A soft slosh sounding as the emperor orders his subordinate to neutralize the perceived threat to his rule. He coldly declares that any potential danger to his throne must be completely and utterly eradicated immediately. Turning his gaze toward the empress, he mocks those who do not understand their proper and restricted place. The pink-haired empress remains silent, her expression guarded as she absorbs the emperor's harsh and threatening words. The young prince asks his father what he wants to know while cautiously continuing his meal in silence. A sinister smile spreads across the emperor's face as he admits to having only one specific area of curiosity. He asks the empress directly if she perceives any hidden dangers that could jeopardize his current absolute power. The narrative reveals the identity of the forgotten prince, exiled to a distant village due to his birth. The young boy walks away into a void, symbolizing his complete isolation from the royal family and throne. A memory surfaces of a crying infant born as an illegitimate son to a royal concubine years ago. He wonders if his exile was due to his illegitimate status or his unnerving and exceptionally sharp intelligence. A dark prophecy delivered by a wizard after the prince's birth was taken very seriously by the emperor. The empress tries to reassure the emperor that the exiled prince is happy and content in his village. The hooded mage confirms the empress's claim, stating the boy has taken a liking to that specific village. Smiling mysteriously, the wizard adds that the boy is adapting well and has even formed some new friendships. The emperor dismissively states he does not care about the boy's life unless he develops any dangerous ambitions. She reflects on how the emperor would stop at nothing to ensure his absolute and cruel hold on power. A sharp snip sounding as the true power behind the throne is hinted at through dark symbolic imagery. Determined to change her fate, the empress vows not to let such a tragic ending be her story. She observes her young son, worrying that the Emperor's unpredictable mind could shift against them at any moment. Under the blue night sky, she commits herself to protecting her royal position and her only child.
A panicked voice echoes through the house, desperately pleading for the red-haired girl to wake up right now.
Shaking with fear, the boy begs Lucette to come back to him as she remains completely unresponsive. A heavy thud sounding as he realizes her condition is his fault for not warning her about medicine. A soft blink sounding as Lucette slowly opens her green eyes, groggy and confused by the current situation.
A soft rustle sounding as she sits up, apologizing for falling asleep while Levinus watches in total shock.
She smiles warmly at him, expressing her relief that he is awake before apologizing for her unpermitted intrusion. Stunned into silence, the boy stares at her, moved by her simple confession of being worried for him. Lucette explains she found him collapsed and gave him medicine, though it tasted very bitter. She admits she gave him a dose, apologizing because the situation felt far too urgent. A soft rustle sounding as the boy hugs her, expressing relief that she is okay. Close-up of Lucette as he admits fearing she would never wake up again. Looking at the spoon, Lucette realizes the boy must have been truly terrified and scared. Lucette notes the potion's calming effect, wondering how he drinks such bitter things every time. Touching her face, the boy tells her to cheer up because he is really okay. He confesses his heart stopped the moment he thought he had lost her forever. They sit together in a warm glow, finally finding comfort in each other's presence. Time skips to the following week at the castle as a voice calls for Lucette. Johann expresses his nervousness about the first class and the distinguished guests they brought in. Lucette enthusiastically promises to work hard while holding hands with the nervous assistant. A rhythmic thudding sounding as Lucette waits in her seat, feeling her heart pound nervously. A sudden creak sounding as the classroom door slowly begins to swing wide open. Standing up quickly, Lucette greets her new teacher with overwhelming excitement and many questions. A sparkling gem catches the light as a calm voice tells her to take care. A sudden gasp sounding as Lucette sees the stern pharmacology teacher for the first time. The teacher adjusts her glasses and prepares to begin their very first pharmacology lesson today. Lucette excitedly tells her new teacher that she is looking forward to the class. The teacher instructs her to read the first chapter about the basics of herbal medicine. Lucette realizes she already studied this, but tells herself not to rush through it. Raising her hand, Lucette asks a specific question about plant-based toxins found in molds.
She asks for an explanation of the different mold types shown in the textbook diagrams.
Lucette sits on the floor, surrounded by books, deep in thought about her complicated studies. She is overjoyed to finally have a teacher to answer all her burning questions. The teacher dismissively states she does not need to know that, shocking the young girl. Claiming all molds use the same antidote, the teacher moves the class toward practical work. A soft click sounding as Lucette asks if leaf changes signal the end of maturation. The teacher explains that color changes and stronger scents indicate that the process is finished. Working together at the table, the teacher tells Lucette to check the herbs herself. Holding a pink potion, Lucette is pleased to hear her work was well done. A soft snap sounding as the teacher closes her book, ending the lesson abruptly. A soft rustle sounding as the teacher departs, while Lucette thanks her for the lesson. A sharp thud sounding as the door closes, leaving Lucette wishing she asked more. Lucette reflects on the lesson, feeling that the information provided was somewhat superficial. She wonders if the knowledgeable teacher dislikes her based on her blunt and dismissive attitude. Johann appears at the door, asking Lucette if her first lesson went well. Johann tells Lucette he has something important to ask her about their mutual friend. A soft whisper sounding as Johann leans in to share some troubling news with her. A symbolic title card highlights the hidden truth behind the boy known as a nerd. Lucette is shocked to hear that Levinus was apparently angry with the kind assistant. Sobbing into a handkerchief, Johann explains he only went to check on the teacherless boy. A memory surfaces of Levinus coldly telling the assistant to leave him alone and go. Stunned, Lucette questions if the boy she knows really said such harsh and cold words. Johann blames himself for the delay, but Lucette reassures him that the boy cares. A low rumble sounding as Lucette suspects a misunderstanding while the scene shifts outside. Walking through the village, Lucette wonders why the boy was so harsh to the assistant. A voice calls out to Lucette, pulling her out of her deep and troubled thoughts. Dominic waves to her, asking if they should walk home together as they usually do. Lucette asks about his forgery work while Dominic proudly shows off his new arm scar. Dominic boasts about his future as the greatest blacksmith in the village. Lucette teases him about his habit of crying as a young child. Flustered by the teasing, Dominic bickers playfully with the laughing red-haired girl. A soft thudding sounding as the dark-haired boy watches them from a distance. The atmosphere becomes heavy as he remains silent and unobserved by the pair. Levinus looks pensive while standing alone in the middle of a wide field. Lucette spots him and greets him with an enthusiastic and joyful smile. A soft thudding sounding as she waves to Dominic and approaches the friend. Levinus inquires about her conversation with the aspiring blacksmith she was just with.
Lucette expresses her deep concern about his solitary and difficult academic studies.
He dismissively claims that he has been managing perfectly fine on his own. She wonders if he ever feels frustrated having no one to answer questions. A soft patter sounding as rain begins to fall on the village houses. They sit together inside, where Levinus rejects the assistant's unnecessary concern.
Lucette hopes there wasn't a major misunderstanding between him and the assistant.
A sharp twitch sounding as Levinus suggests including Dominic in their future plans. Surprised, she notes that Dominic is a longtime friend just like him. She thinks it would be wonderful for the three of them to bond. A soft snap sounding as Levinus remains stoic and guarded during their talk. A soft tapping sounding as he asks if she has feelings for Dominic.
Lucette clarifies that she views them both as very precious and important friends.
Levinus asks a strange and unsettling question about who is more special. A soft sliding sounding as he stares into his cup in deep silence. Lucette watches the rain, unaware of the sudden shift in his mood. He hypothetically asks if disappearing would make someone feel more special. He explains his dark curiosity about human nature and the value of absence. A soft patter sounding as he urges her to answer his dark joke. Lucette finds the topic very upsetting and refuses to consider such a scenario. He assumes the person who remains by her side is naturally more special. Levinus smiles, seemingly content with the idea of staying with her forever.
Lucette argues that the one who disappears is the one who becomes special.
She explains how memories are glorified after someone is no longer present. They share a quiet moment watching the rain fall through the window together.
Levinus is visibly struck by her unique and unexpected perspective on loss.
She vows to keep her friends close and never joke about disappearing. He quietly apologizes for bringing up such an unnecessary and troubling topic. A soft giggle sounding as she tells him to stay by her side. A soft rustle sounding as he promises to never leave her alone. He reassures her that she has absolutely nothing to worry about anymore. He makes a secret resolution to become the most special person to her. A soft patter sounding as his dark ambitions begin to take a shape.
A rhythmic thudding sounding as he walks her home under a black umbrella.
Lucette prepares to enter her house as they say their final goodbyes. A sudden shout sounding as someone calls her name from the pouring rain.
A rapid thudding sounding as Dominic runs toward them with a cloak on.
He reports that her house's roof has suffered even more damage recently. He conveys his mother's invitation for her to stay at their house tonight. A sudden tightening sounding as Levinus stares at Dominic in utter disbelief. A sudden snap sounding as Dominic reaches out to grab the girl's hand.
Lucette looks back at Levinus, startled by the sudden and unexpected situation.
Dominic firmly holds Lucette's hand, prompting her to worry if he is in pain. Levinus remains silent and intense while Lucette asks him to release her hand. Embracing her amidst a background of thorns, Levinus admits he wants her all to himself. With glowing red eyes, he warns her never to let anyone else close to her. Standing in the cold rain, Dominic's presence is interrupted by a sudden, loud sneeze sounding. Dominic questions why they are lingering in the rain, surprising both Levinus and the red-haired girl. A soft patter sounding as Levinus stares into the distance with a grim, pensive expression. He apologizes for delaying her, telling her to leave with Dominic as they part ways.
Lucette waves a friendly goodbye while Dominic stays by her side in the village.
Levinus stands alone under his umbrella, watching the pair disappear into the rainy distance. A soft patter sounding as he questions his next move while looking increasingly determined. A rhythmic thudding sounding as he resolves to keep her by his side forever. A heavy downpour sounding as they marvel at the storm outside the safe house. While drying off, Lucette notices a collection of unfamiliar books stacked on a nearby table. A soft rustle sounding as Dominic explains that his brother sent the heavy stack home. Surprised to hear about his brother, Lucette learns that he will be returning home soon. The boy notes that all the recently arrived volumes are focused on the study of history. Lucette wonders if his brother is pursuing a degree or career as a history major. Dominic admits his brother talks excessively, sharing various legends about the nature of powerful wizards. Legends describe wizards as invincible beings who cannot enter homes without being granted permission. He folds his arms, clearly tired of the repetitive stories his brother often tells him. Eyes sparkling with excitement, Lucette asks for more information regarding the tale of the last wizard. Flustered, Dominic confesses he only knows a small portion of the stories his brother shared. A soft groan sounding as the girl expresses her frustration over his lack of knowledge. Dominic suggests she ask Levinus instead, though she notes he is acting unusually cold today. He claims Levinus doesn't see him as a friend and purposefully ignores him around her. He abruptly ends the conversation, leaving Lucette to wonder why her friends are so misunderstood. Lucette stands in thought while a memory of Levinus at a door fades behind her. A heavy downpour sounding as the girl remains convinced that Levinus is a good person.
A soft thud sounding as an abandoned black umbrella lies discarded on the wet ground.
Standing in a puddle, Levinus laments having to let go of the girl he treasures. a soft patter sounding as he walks away, fueled by a dark and lonely resolve.
With a sharp gaze, he vows that he should be the only one at her side.
The scene shifts to the Grand Rodante Castle, where a new medical lesson begins today. The teacher lectures in a massive library, categorizing analgesics by their fever and inflammation reduction. A soft rustle sounding as she tells Lucette to study the textbook independently for details. Frustrated by the lack of guidance, Lucette suspects that teacher has no intention of teaching. Raising her hand, she asks why certain medicines cause such unexpected and harmful side effects. The teacher dismissively claims that such knowledge is unnecessary for her future work as a pharmacist. A sudden squeeze sounding as the girl clenches her fist in response to the dismissal. Lucette stands up boldly, declaring that her goal is not simply to earn money from medicine. She demands an accurate education, expressing her genuine curiosity and desire to master the craft. The teacher stares at her intently, questioning the girl's true motivation for becoming a pharmacist. Lucette passionately explains that her primary goal is to learn how to properly heal people. The teacher looks away in silence, seemingly moved or challenged by the girl's honest declaration. A rhythmic tapping sounding as the teacher wonders why she would choose such a path. The teacher begins a story from her past, recalling a sunset at the castle long ago. She remembers being tasked with curing a noble lady who suffered from a severe disease. A soft rustle sounding as she succeeded where many other dedicated pharmacists had previously failed. The lady is revealed to be fully healed, radiant, and happy after the successful treatment. Darkness descends as a narration reveals the dreadful price paid for curing the severe disease long ago. A woman lies on the ground as a mob points fingers, accusing her of using wicked magic. Her hands tremble on the cold bricks while the hostile crowd continues to surround her. The teacher clutches her scarred arm, noting that pharmacists have always been targets of public scorn. Lucette listens intently as her teacher explains how medicine is often misinterpreted as dangerous sorcery.
The teacher reveals her motivation for protecting Lucette, worried she might be wrongly accused of witchcraft.
She offers Lucette a way out, stating that attendance is no longer required if she understands the risks.
Lucette realizes the reason behind her teacher's earlier cold behavior after seeing the severe arm scar. A determined look enters the red-haired girl's eyes as she reflects on the teacher's warning. The teacher asks if Lucette still truly wishes to continue her studies despite the potential social dangers. Lucette insists on staying, revealing that her driving force is curing a dear friend's rare illness. A memory of her sickly friend flashes through her mind, reinforcing her desire to master pharmacology. Smiling brightly, the girl argues that healing is a noble pursuit and not something to be feared. The teacher reminds her never to abandon the hope of saving lives through their misunderstood craft. A soft smile touches the teacher's face as Lucette's passion reminds her of her own beginnings. Lucette playfully calls her a strict teacher, but accepts the challenges and preparation required for the future. A wave of joyful laughter fills the air as the red-haired girl celebrates her renewed motivation. A sudden creak sounding interrupts her thoughts as a familiar voice asks if her class went well. The secretary enters with a cheerful greeting, and Lucette happily calls out to her friend. She tells him about her growing bond with the teacher while he listens with an encouraging smile. He expresses his high expectations for her growth, and Lucette promises to do her very best. The secretary advises her not to feel pressured, explaining the common societal hesitation toward their field. He reassures her that simply persevering and not giving up is more than enough for now. Lucette ponders the deep-seated connection between the public's fear of magic and their distrust of pharmacology. He explains that while others see sorcery's legacy, the Lord and he reject such outdated superstitions. Behind a vision of her allies, the secretary emphasizes the importance of cultivating new medical talent. A somber narration describes a recent deadly pestilence in Peter that claimed many innocent lives. He sighs at the tragic reminder of why their medical work is so vital to the world. Lucette feels a bit overwhelmed by the pressure as he urges her to be ready for anything. Night falls over the village as Lucette returns home, reflecting on the day's busy events. She stares at a massive stack of textbooks, noting the daunting increase in her daily reading requirements. Standing in her nightgown, she wonders if she should be thrilled or dismayed by her workload. She remains curious about why the local prejudice against magic is so remarkably intense and pervasive. Memories of angry crowds show the deep aversion people feel toward any hint of magical influence. She recalls being told that all sorcerers were long gone, leaving only their lingering stigma behind. The red-haired girl scratches her head, trying to make sense of the confusing history and rumors. A soft thud sounding as she puts her hand on a book, deciding to stop overthinking. She celebrates her current life, believing she is safely removed from the original story's complex events. A soft rustle sounding as the girl jumps into bed, ready to put the day behind her. Tucked under the covers, she dreams of living a comfortable and peaceful life from now on. Outside, a hooded figure watches her window, noting a fundamental misunderstanding in her current perspective. With glowing red eyes, he smiles and decides to let the situation develop for his amusement. The scene shifts to a snowy village where a green-haired boy grumbles about the freezing work.
He fills a rustic mailbox with letters, questioning his father's choice of delivery tasks for him.
A rhythmic crunching sounding as he walks through the snow, wondering why such a rural place needs mail. He reaches into his bag and pauses, surprised by the next item he finds among the letters.
The boy notices an unusually expensive-looking envelope that stands out from the rest of the mail. The boy holds a thick, white envelope secured with a pristine and ornate golden wax seal. He wonders why a noble would send mail to such a remote village while examining the crest. His eyes widen in shock as he discovers the letter is addressed to Lucette's mother. Thoughts about Lucette being from a count's family appear over an image of her and her mother. A look of disbelief follows as the possibility of her noble heritage is considered. A soft thud sounding as a hand searches through a bag and pulls out an envelope. Dominic grumbles in annoyance upon discovering that the fancy-looking envelope is completely empty. He tosses the letter aside, convinced that a true noble wouldn't live in such a village. An unseen observer watches the envelope fall, noting how disappointing the situation has become. A soft rustle sounding as the discarded white envelope lies forgotten on the snow-covered ground. A soft flutter sounding as a pale hand with sharp, pointed nails reaches for the letter. The hooded man picks up the discarded mail and calls the boy a very troublesome child. A soft rustle sounding as the man smiles, considering the turn of events fortunate for him. Redanum reveals his red eyes, deciding to let the girl enjoy her peace for now. Dark energy swirls around a final warning that the truth will eventually be revealed. Walking through the snow, Lucette wishes she had stayed over while Levinus worries about her mother. Lucette grumbles about her mother's recent strictness while remembering a stern instruction to return early. Levinus tells her to reassure her mother and echoes the man's earlier words about preserving peace. He admits he walks her home because she has always done the same for him. He reflects on how he used rain, wind, and flowers as excuses to stay by her. Levinus notes that the only time she went ahead alone was when he was feeling sick. A soft rustle sounding as the girl looks at him in surprise, questioning his previous claims. A soft rustle sounding as he admits his previous reasons for walking her were all excuses. Levinus looks at her intently, confessing he simply didn't want to part ways with her yet. A soft thud sounding as the girl stares at him, her face flushed with sudden surprise. Lucette happily points out that they can always be together as they continue their snowy walk. A wave of joyful laughter fills the air as she teases him for being surprisingly clingy. Levinus explains his concern that she might collapse alone on her way back home. Lucette insists she is healthy now and promises him that she never overdoes her work anymore. The girl laughs, agreeing to believe him, but demanding he also share his own future troubles. Reaching the house, Levinus promises to do so while Lucette prepares to walk the final stretch. Levinus calls out to her to wait just as she approaches the front of her home. He presents her with a small, neatly wrapped gift box as they stand in the snow. He tells her to open the gift only when she is alone and hopes she likes it. The night sky hangs over the quiet village as the girl returns to her safe room. A soft rustle sounding as Lucette sits on her bed and wonders what could be inside. Her eyes widen in shock as she finally opens the box to see what lies within. A brilliant white brooch set with a glowing red gemstone is revealed inside the gift box. Lucette wonders if Levinus learned jewelry making until a voice suddenly speaks her name aloud. A sharp gasp sounding as the girl realizes the voice is coming directly from the brooch. Lucette asks if it is him, and Levinus confirms it is, while asking if she hears him. He admits he made it to talk more, wondering if the gesture is too childish. Lucette insists it isn't a joke and admits she is happy to hear his voice again. Levinus is startled to find an unfamiliar box placed carefully underneath his own dining table. Lucette tells him to open it, explaining that she wanted to surprise him with a gift. Levinus stares at the box with intensity as he prepares to see what she has provided. A soft thud sounding as he discovers several medicine bottles she crafted using her recent lessons. A soft rustle sounding as she instructs him to read the note for important usage directions. Lucette smiles while writing, and Levinus tells her that her gift feels even more significant. Levinus looks at a large teal bottle, wondering what its original purpose was meant to be. He remembers Redanum giving him medicine for his condition, which he never fully disclosed to Lucette. A soft groan sounding as Levinus suddenly leans on the table while Lucette asks what happened. He dismisses her concerns despite clearly suffering from a sudden and intense wave of head pain.
A rhythmic gulping sounding as the boy with glasses drinks the medicine while his hands tremble.
A sudden thud sounding as Levinus collapses in pain while Lucette's voice asks why he is silent. The scene shifts to the Grand Palace, its ornate white domes standing tall under a clear sky. Inside her study, Lucette pauses her writing with a soft exclamation as she reflects on recent events. Looking downcast, the red-haired girl wonders if Levinus is currently managing all right on his own.
a soft rustle sounding as she slowly turns the pages of a large, ancient book with her hand. In a memory from last night, she asks through the brooch if he is feeling sick again. Levinus laughs nervously as he apologizes for making her worry during their previous conversation.
Lucette clutches her head, calling him an idiot and admitting her heart stopped from intense worry.
She sighs, feeling increasingly anxious about his clumsy nature and the risks of him being alone. Looking at her medicine kit, she decides to prepare more first aid supplies and ointments for him.
The girl stares ahead with a serious expression, her green eyes reflecting her deep concern.
A soft rustle sounding as she decides to stop overthinking, reminding herself that he isn't a child. A sharp clanging sounding interrupts her reading, causing her to pause and look up in surprise. She wonders about the metallic sound of a sword coming from somewhere outside the palace window. A rhythmic clanging sounding as she opens a glass door and hears a man's voice giving instructions. From the balcony, she spots Levinus practicing swordsmanship with a knight who tells him to relax more. Lucette is surprised to discover that Levinus has actually started a formal swordsmanship training class. A sharp clanging sounding as she realizes he finally has a proper instructor to guide his growth. She watches them intently, wondering if he is healthy enough to be training so hard today. The morning light fills the palace as a new chapter in their training officially begins. A voice comments on the pace of the practice, questioning why there was such a hurry. A soft swish sounding as Levinus smiles and thanks Lucette for her concern, insisting he is okay. She expresses relief about his first lesson, though he seems confused by her choice of words. Lucette asks if the man he was sparring with isn't his instructor, surprising the black-haired boy. She praises his skilled sparring performance, but Levinus prepares to clarify the man's actual identity. Levinus explains that the person she saw him with is definitely not his swordsmanship instructor. He introduces the man as a personal knight of the Lord while Lucette listens with curiosity. Franz introduces himself, mentioning that the Lord praised their talents and he only came to observe. Levinus humbly claims to be a beginner while practice dummies stand in the background of the yard. Franz laughs at his humility, noting that his stance suggests significant prior experience with a blade. A rhythmic tapping sounding as Johann runs over and tells Franz that the Lord is looking for them. Levinus agrees to go at once after Johann explains that the Lord requires the knight's presence. Johann apologizes for the interruption, and Lucette happily agrees since it involves the Lord's business.
Franz waves goodbye, promising Levinus a proper sparring match the next time they meet.
A soft thud sounding as Levinus bows politely while Lucette waves goodbye to the departing men. A rhythmic thumping sounding as Franz asks Johann why a supposedly untrained orphan has such high-level skills. Johann is shocked, insisting that Levinus is an orphan who has never touched a sword before. Franz remains certain, noting that even a few blows revealed a level of mastery beyond a beginner. He realizes Levinus received royal training, making him likely the son of a duke or higher rank. Inside a carriage, Lucette asks him if he has actually learned swordsmanship at some point before. A soft thud sounding as Levinus looks away, claiming he only learned some basic foundations long ago. A soft thud sounding as the carriage continues while Lucette reflects on the knight's generous praise. She insists that he possesses a genuine talent for swordsmanship despite his own quiet and humble denials. Levinus smiles and promises to ask the knight for more advanced lessons the next time they meet. The boy stares ahead with an intense gaze, his red eyes reflecting a deep and hidden secret. He recalls the sparring match, realizing with panic that he accidentally used a secret royal technique. He hopes to avoid the knight while a sharp gasp sounding as Lucette feels sudden discomfort. Lucette explains that her hair became tangled, and Levinus immediately asks if she has been hurt. Levinus offers to fix the tangle for her, as Lucette thanks him with a happy smile.
Lucette thanks Levinus for fixing her hair, saying she could have done it herself.
Levinus gently notes that she is often quite oblivious to her own personal needs. A soft rustle sounding as Levinus mentions her fall yesterday, causing her to laugh defensively. He looks away in minor embarrassment, suggesting that they should both just forget about it. Levinus thinks to himself, feeling guilty for hiding the complicated truth from her right now.
He reflects on how the royal family monitors him via mages, fearing for her safety.
Lucette expresses deep worry for him despite his claims that everything is perfectly fine. A soft rustle sounding as she asks him to share any burdens that might arise. Levinus watches her intently as she continues to offer her sincere and heartfelt support. A soft rustle sounding as he eventually agrees to her request with a simple confirmation. Lucette reflects on their long history and how much she has relied on him recently. A memory shows younger versions of the pair, with Lucette patting the boy's head comfortingly. A warm light surrounds her as she smiles, feeling comforted by their enduring childhood bond. The girl laughs joyfully, admitting his kind words are making her feel quite flustered. Levinus looks at her warmly, noting the significant amount of comfort she provides him daily. He wonders silently if a day will ever come when he can speak truthfully. The boy looks slightly downcast, fearing that such a day might never actually arrive for them. The carriage continues its journey through the woods as the snowy winter landscape slowly fades. Time passes in a quiet blur until the vibrant green colors of spring finally arrive.
Lucette excitedly points out the new flower buds forming along the path in the village. She reflects on how nearly a year has passed since she first arrived in Saman, a soft swish sounding as she concludes that she has adapted quite well to her life. Standing on a grassy hill, she continues to contemplate her successful transition to the village.
She thinks this is her ideal life until a man's voice suddenly calls out her name.
A brown-haired man waves energetically from a distance, drawing her attention across the green hill.
A soft rustle sounding as the man, Dietrich, notes how much she has grown since then.
Dietrich jokingly asks if she has forgotten his face already after their time spent apart.
A brief memory shows Lucette and Dietrich together in a room from their shared past.
Lucette runs toward him with a bright smile, greeting Dietrich and asking about his well-being. Dietrich mentions he heard she was taking classes at the castle from a mutual friend. Lucette happily confirms she is on her way back from her recent studies at the castle.
A soft rustle sounding as she admits studying is becoming increasingly difficult for her lately.
She asks Dietrich if he has already finished his graduation requirements from his previous school.
A soft rustle sounding as she realizes he will be staying in the village for now.
A soft swish sounding as she asks him to confirm if he studied in the history department. Lucette prepares to ask him a question as she leans in with a curious expression. She mentions a story about a mage that caught her interest during her recent history studies. She describes a tragic prince who suffered due to his status as an illegitimate royal child. The story ends with the prince killing those he loved after a difficult political marriage arrangement. Lucette pauses, wondering if her summary of the dark tale was perhaps a bit too blunt. Dietrich looks surprised, finding her interest in such a grim historical narrative to be quite unexpected. A soft chuckle sounding as he notes she has grown interested in such dark tales. Lucette questions why such a situation wouldn't be possible within the context of real royal history.
Dietrich explains the ancient magic that prevents royal family members from harming one another directly.
Lucette mentions the disappearance of mages, leading Dietrich to explain the rarity of such ancient magic. A soft swish sounding as Dietrich asks why she has suddenly developed an interest in history. Several books sit on the table as she admits to having a small interest in history. A history book describes the end of the Minor Era and the disappearance of doppelgangers. Dietrich notes how unexpected her questions are while she sits nearby with a thoughtful look. Lucette gazes ahead with a serious expression, her mind clearly occupied by the historical mystery. A sense of confusion lingers as a mysterious question echoes through the soft, hazy light.
Night falls over the Grand Palace as a voice reminds young Delmar of the late hour.
The Empress sits elegantly in her chambers, gently urging the boy to finally get some sleep.
Delmar apologizes for staying up, explaining that his brother Aurelio used to read him to sleep.
The blonde boy looks up from his bed, pleading to bring his exiled brother back home. The Empress notes Aurelio's loneliness in the remote village, while Delmar watches her with hopeful eyes. A sharp glint appears in her eyes as she contemplates the mention of the hidden village.
A sharp gasp sounding as Delmar covers his mouth, terrified that he accidentally revealed a secret.
The Empress rises from her chair, questioning how he could possibly know about that forbidden location. A soft thud sounding as she grabs his wrist, demanding to know if he met the child. Her expression turns cold and stern as she forbids him from leaving without her explicit permission. Delmar begins to cry, frantically confessing that the magician Radanum was the one who sent him. The Empress is stunned to hear Radanum's name as Delmar explains magic was used for the trip. The boy insists that although he met his brother, the encounter was brief and completely uneventful. She rubs her forehead in frustration, skeptical that such a risky meeting resulted in absolutely nothing. She realizes that since the king has remained silent, no major incident must have occurred yet. She worries about the consequences if anyone discovers Delmar has taken an interest in the exile. The king sits upon his throne in shadow, representing the absolute authority that governs their lives. The Empress commands Delmar to act as if he has never once met his brother Aurelio. The young boy looks downcast, his eyes reflecting the deep sadness of being forced into silence. Delmar eventually agrees, promising to consider the secret meeting as something that never actually happened. A rhythmic tapping sounding as the Empress walks alone, determined to handle the dangerous child situation. She curses the cunning magician Radanum as his tall, cloaked figure looms ominously in her mind. Recalling Radanum indulging the boy's whims, she decides it is time to issue a stern warning. Intricate purple jewels hang in the darkness, marking a transition to the palace's moonlit exterior. Walking through the palace gardens, the Empress warns Radanum about the extreme dangers of his actions. Radanum stands in the shadows, mockingly noting that nothing can escape Her Majesty's sharp, watchful eyes. The silver-haired magician bows, claiming he will blindly obey any order given by the royal family. She glares at him, stating she knows he allowed Delmar to meet with the exiled child. She reminds him that the king isolated Aurelia for a reason and he must respect that. The Empress warns him that further disobedience will surely invite the king's terrible and absolute wrath.
Radhanam admits his thoughtlessness and asks if there are any other commands or questions she has.
She asks about the prophecy that caused the exile, but he refuses to disclose the private contract.
She reflects on the nature of prophecies being promises kept only by those involved in them.
Radhanam smiles enigmatically, asking the Empress exactly what it is she wishes to know right now.
Seeing her son in a memory, she expresses deep fear that her child might come to harm.
A soft rustle sounding as Radhanam insists the request is simple, though he suggests a hidden catch. He explains that every prophecy requires a price, asking if she offers gold, jewels, or money.
A soft swish sounding as he explains a single word establishes the contract despite the risks. He cryptically informs her that the true price is only revealed after the contract is fully complete.
The Empress finds it absurd that he would attempt to hide the terms of their dark deal.
A soft chuckle sounding as Radhanam claims he only speaks the truth and tells her not to worry. Her eyes widen in realization as she considers the prophecy concerning her to be unfinished business.
She questions if his word is trustworthy, leading him to ask if she doubts the Emperor himself. A soft rustle sounding as she clenches her dress, her knuckles turning white from the intense pressure. Looking at the memory of her smiling son, she concludes this is her only way to protect him. Her profile is illuminated by the moon as she prepares to make a life-altering and dangerous decision.
The Empress finally agrees to the deal, demanding the specific prophecy that concerns her son Delmar.
A sharp clinking sounding as Radhanam flexes his long pointed claws and agrees to fulfill her wish. A sharp swish sounding as the magician raises his arms, unleashing a swirl of dark and powerful magic.
Radhanam raises his hands as golden magic begins to swirl intensely around his cloaked figure.
The silver-haired magician presents a glowing golden apple to Empress Diana, labeling it as the prophecy. A crisp crunching sounding as the Empress takes a bold bite of the luminous golden fruit. Swirling golden energy engulfs Empress Diana in the palace gardens as the prophecy's power takes hold.
The magical light continues to swirl and intensify, marking a deep transition into a vision.
A mysterious voice within the light urges the Empress to find a specific person. The Empress is visibly stunned by the command to locate Prince Delmar's destined betrothed. The scene shifts to the Grand Academy grounds as talk of a spring festival begins. Johann smiles warmly, noting that the harsh winter is finally coming to an end. Johann explains that the upcoming festival is a chance for students to showcase their accumulated skills. Lucette finds the prospect of a spring music festival to be quite exciting and fun. Johann gestures enthusiastically while mentioning a specific highlight of the festive events yet to come.
Johann leads Levinus and Lucette toward a set of large doors to meet with the Lord.
A soft clicking sounding as the door opens and Johann announces their arrival to the Lord. The blonde Lord greets the talented students from Rodante, explaining he has been waiting for them. He asks if they have already heard the details of the academic and music festivals. The Lord joyfully explains that the festivals celebrate research achievements and the start of the year. He holds up a music sheet, revealing he has just finished a new piece for the guests. Johann, Lucette, and Levinus watch him curiously as he hums a tune with great excitement. The Lord turns toward them, revealing he has a specific favor to ask of both students. He shocks the pair by suggesting that they participate directly in the upcoming academic festival. Lucette panics at the thought of giving a presentation, but the Lord tells her to relax. Johann encourages them, suggesting they view the presentation as a valuable and positive life experience. Still looking slightly flustered and nervous, Lucette eventually agrees to the Lord's unexpected request. Walking through the hallway, Lucette mentions she will discuss the matter further with Levinus later. A sharp gasp sounding as Lucette clutches her head, overwhelmed by the stress of the presentation. Lucette worries about the Lord's support, while Levinus reminds her they weren't supposed to feel burdened. Levinus looks at her kindly, reassuring her that she doesn't actually have to participate if she refuses. Levinus notes her preference for quiet study, but Lucette insists she will be fine with help. Levinus thanks her for her consideration and promises to provide as much help as he can. Levinus reflects privately on the festival's massive scale, hoping that no trouble arises during the event. He stares ahead with a serious gaze, noting his inability to leave the current location just yet. Night falls over the castle as a mysterious question regarding Prince Delmar's consort echoes through the dark.
The palace stands silent and grand under the crescent moon during the late hours of the night.
Empress Diana meets the Emperor, who questions her about an audience regarding a very young child. The Emperor mentions the devastating epidemic that has been affecting the Principality of Peter lately. Empress Diana expresses her grief over the lost children and her desire to find Delmar a match. The Emperor listens with a cold, analytical expression, clearly suspicious of the Empress's underlying motives.
He questions if the list of families from the western border is truly just a coincidence.
Diana realizes with a start that the emperor has already deduced her political selection of loyalists.
Bowing her head, she formally requests that His Majesty review the list of candidates and provide feedback.
The emperor chuckles darkly while looking over the documents, his eyes glinting with a sharp, calculating light.
Empress Diana watches him with a worried expression, sensing the growing tension in the Grand Throne Room. The emperor dismisses her concerns, claiming the information he found is merely a bit interesting. A sudden flash sounding as a bright purple light emanates from a window in the village cottage.
Levinus groans in pain, his face contorted as he struggles with a sudden and mysterious ailment.
A sharp swish sounding as Redanum appears, noting the boy should be used to the bleeding wound. A rhythmic humming sounding as the magician prepares to see what reflections the dark magic reveals today.
Levinus looks downcast and troubled, remaining silent as the silver-haired magician continues his dark work.
Redanum asks what's the matter, noting the boy's troubled state as he prepares his magical orb. Redanum says there is nothing of note, closing his eyes with a faint smile. Levinus stops Redanum as he prepares to leave, asking if he can pose a question. Redanum's red eyes glint as he asks if the boy has a question for him. Levinus confirms with a steady gaze as he prepares to voice his concern.
Levinus worries if anyone will recognize his true identity at the upcoming event at the castle.
Redanum taps his long claws against his chin, amused that so many seek his counsel. Redanum notes his prophecies are expensive, while Levinus demands to know the magician's desired price. The silver-haired magician explains that the purpose of a prophecy is to read the future. Redanum warns that reading the future is forbidden, requiring a heavy and relative price to pay. Redanum extends his clawed hand, declaring he will take what is most precious to the boy. A vision of a smiling Lucette appears as Levinus realizes the gravity of the magician's demand. Redanum smiles enigmatically, asking if the boy is truly ready to move forward with the deal. Levinus looks down in conflict, desperately thinking that he cannot possibly trade Luce for any price. Redanum surprises the boy by mentioning there is only one specific person who might recognize him. Putting a finger to his lips, Redanum cryptically suggests one person could unveil the boy's identity. Levinus quickly objects, stating that he has not yet agreed to the magician's heavy price. Redanum insists this is just a guess and an investment rather than a formal forbidden prophecy.
A bright purple light sounding as Redanum vanishes, leaving Levinus alone with the magician's parting words.
Levinus stands in the dim room, contemplating the meaning of Redanum calling their deal an investment. The scene shifts to the academy grounds where the upcoming festival is the main topic. Lucette complains to Levinus about their teacher's overwhelming enthusiasm for the upcoming great festival opportunity. Lucette dreams of sleeping once the festival ends, while Levinus encourages her to keep hanging on. Lucette asks if Levinus will attend the academic festival even if he is not actively participating. Levinus looks surprised through his glasses, questioning why she would ask such a specific thing. Adjusting his glasses, Levinus assumes he should probably go despite his own initial hesitations and worries. Lucette recalls being told to decide for themselves and insists they won't be forced into anything. The orange-haired girl wonders if his hesitation is actually due to his eyes and others' opinions. Levinus is caught off guard by the suggestion as he stares at Lucette with wide eyes. Lucette explains her concern about his past troubles regarding what other people might think of him. Levinus reminds her of her own words, noting she previously called such worries mere silly superstition. A soft tapping sounding as they walk together, and Lucette quietly agrees that he is right. Lucette gently touches his hair, telling him never to forget the encouraging words she gave him. With a bright and genuine smile, Lucette tells Levinus that his eyes are the most beautiful. Levinus looks at her with a dazed and moved expression, clearly touched by her kind words. A soft rustle sounding as hands grasp, sealing a moment of mutual trust and quiet determination. Lucette looks at him with a gentle gaze, asking if he's truly sure about his decision. Levinus adjusts his glasses and insists he will be fine as long as he is with her. Levinus decides the festival sounds fun, privately vowing to deal with anything that gets in the way. A new scene opens with a view of a massive, grand palace standing under the sun. Inside the palace, a brown-haired woman looks distressed, calling out for her beloved young daughter. Eloise cries on the bed as she asks her mother why she must suffer through this. The blonde girl is shocked to be named a candidate for the prince's consort after living quietly. The mother comforts her crying daughter, reminding her that she is only a candidate for now. Eloise begs her mother to exclude her from the list of crown princess candidates, fearing the future. The mother understands the girl's feelings, but wonders how they can possibly refuse a direct imperial command. A close-up of a tearful eye represents the deep sorrow and fear felt by the girl. Eloise laments that refusing the command or displeasing His Majesty both lead to the same grim fate. Dark symbols represent the fate of those who cross the king, resulting in death or mysterious disappearance. The mother tells Eloise not to speak such things, insisting they still have time to find a way.
The scene ends on the mother's worried eyes as she considers the danger of their situation. The brown-haired mother comforts her blonde daughter, promising to personally manage the imperial palace's demands. Looking hopeful yet tearful, Eloise asks if this means she truly avoids traveling to the palace. The mother smiles warmly, telling her daughter to simply trust her and remain at ease. Sunlight streams through the bedroom window as the pair shares a quiet, supportive moment together. Eloise mentions she recently received news regarding a small event occurring in a distant rural village. Sniffling softly, Eloise worries that her status as a princess candidate should prevent her from traveling. The mother devises a plan, suggesting her daughter use a disguise to avoid being recognized. While Eloise questions her own acting skills, her mother insists she can carry out any look beautifully. The conversation concludes with a hopeful promise that the upcoming excursion will be a delightful time. The scene shifts to a quaint, well-kept cottage nestled peacefully in a bright, sunlit village. Inside, a brown-haired woman named Chelsea reads a letter, shocked by its sudden and ridiculous demand.
The letter formally demands Chelsea send her daughter away in exchange for any amount of money.
Chelsea is deeply confused, noting this is actually the first written request she has ever received. A mention of Menelik County triggers a painful memory, causing Chelsea's gaze to sharpen with intensity. Chelsea reflects on the cruel accusations from her husband's family regarding her past as a maid. A heavy thud sounding as Chelsea recalls her past misery and the loss of her beloved husband. A sharp crinkle sounding as Chelsea's grip tightens, physically manifesting her growing anger and frustration. Chelsea fumes over her husband's killers now attempting to steal her precious daughter from her. A sudden gasp sounding as Lucette calls out for her mother, startling Chelsea from her thoughts. Lucette notices her mother's departure, asking where she is heading and if something is wrong. Chelsea explains she must visit Rodante Castle to finalize materials for the upcoming academic festival.
Lucette admits the work has been difficult, but insists she only needs a little more effort.
A soft squeeze sounding as Chelsea hugs her daughter, praising her admirable hard work and dedication. Outside, Chelsea warns her daughter against following strangers while Lucette confidently jokes about her identity. Lucette waves a cheerful goodbye, her bright smile lighting up the quiet village landscape behind her. Chelsea watches her daughter go, quietly reminding her to stay safe and avoid getting hurt.
Lucette walks down the flower-lined path, unaware of the heavy burdens her mother is currently carrying.
Standing alone at the door, Chelsea watches her daughter depart with a bittersweet and protective gaze. Chelsea reflects with satisfaction on the fact that they have finally managed to settle down peacefully. Flashbacks of their simple, happy meals fill Chelsea's mind as she tries to forget their past. Her expression softens into sorrow, desperately wishing she could erase her past as if it never happened. Looking toward her daughter's path, Chelsea vows to protect Lucette no matter what challenges may arise. The scene transitions to a massive, imposing palace standing tall under a clear blue sky. Inside a lavish room, a blonde man questions if he truly appears to be so idle. Sitting regally, the blonde man wonders why he should care about a minor event in a village. He pauses upon reading the letter, realizing that the person he seeks is in Xenon Village. His blue eye narrows as he contemplates the significance of the information he just uncovered. The blonde man commands his subordinate to go to Rodante and find a boy with red eyes. He recalls a boy with red eyes, referring to the child as a troublesome thorn in his side. With a dark and sinister smirk, the blonde man orders his subordinate to deal with the boy. A rhythmic gallop sounding as horse legs move swiftly along a dusty, sunlit country road. Inside the moving carriage, the blonde lord asks Eloise what has been causing her so much trouble. A heavy rattle sounding as Eloise voices her fear of being recognized during their current journey. Fidgeting with her glasses, Eloise worries about the potential for punishment if her true identity is revealed. The blonde lord reassures her, explaining that their current destination has absolutely no ties to the palace. Eloise is revealed in a boy's disguise, looking like a proper young man to any casual observer. Eloise admits she feels uncomfortable with the look, but her father asks if she wants to return. Placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, the blonde lord reminds her that this was her mother's idea. A delicate chime sounding as fingers brush against piano keys, signaling the start of a new melody. Disguised and determined, Eloise gazes ahead, ready to face the upcoming festival despite her initial fears. Chibi Lev and a girl share a warm moment as the word father appears. Baron Felice encourages his daughter to enjoy her day, and she happily agrees. A carriage travels under a golden sky with hopes for many good things today. The series title is presented in elegant red and gold script on a white background. A presentation on herb efficacy concludes within a grand hall under a massive chandelier. Clapping echoes through the room as Luce finishes her lecture before a captive audience. A tired pew sounding escapes Luce as she finishes her difficult academic task. The sun sets behind the stone towers of the academy as the day ends. Stepping outside, Luce expresses relief that her hard work is finally over before being called. Lev praises her presentation as great and amazing while Luce walks to him. Luce admits she worried it was sloppy, but Lev insists the presentation was perfect. Lev praises her topic, research, and organization, finding her pharmacology work systematic and interesting. Laughing nervously, Luce admits she was impressed by his feedback as they stand near the palace.
Luce thanks Lev, explaining that his kind words make her feel a bit relieved.
Lev attributes her success to effort, and Luce is glad he noticed her hard work. Luce notes only the music festival remains and asks how to spend the time.
Lev suggests a guest lecture he's interested in, and Luce excitedly agrees to attend.
A lecturer explains how an arrangement stabilizes magic stones and improves their overall quality. Puzzled, Luce realizes she thought the lecture was about magic engineering. While Lev takes notes, Luce realizes she doesn't understand a single thing being said. Luce reflects that Lev finds this rare learning opportunity precious as he has lacked teachers. Watching him work with intense focus, Luce thinks it is nice to see him try. Luce asks to walk outside while Lev apologizes for the lecture being boring. Explaining she feels stuffy, Luce suggests they contact each other via pendant later. Walking outside, Luce feels more alive and wonders if she should have explored earlier. Luce searches the campus, curious to see what she might find while exploring alone. She stops at a notice board filled with posters for various academic conferences. Multiple boards display papers and announcements within the grand, brightly lit academy hallway. Luce laughs at a comment regarding a supposed lack of talent in the city. A sudden musical sound catches Luce's attention, causing her to stop and listen. Rhythmic music notes drift through the air around the massive, ornate towers of the palace. A creaking sounding follows as Luce peeks through double doors to find the music source. Luce marvels at the hall before a man asks about her presentation success. The purple-haired man explains he heard about the audience's positive response from her teacher. Luce credits her teacher for the success and asks what he's doing there. He explains they are preparing for a music night event to end the academic year. Stairs lead up through the palace as he mentions someone is inside preparing to perform. He says the Lord's performance is top-notch, and Luce expresses great curiosity. The man leaves to finish preparations, and Luce wishes him luck at the concert. Luce waves, looking forward to the performance with a bright and hopeful expression. Luce is startled as someone comments on her coming to such a squalid place. A rhythmic step sounding accompanies the visitor as he addresses Baron Felice regarding his visit. A close-up of sturdy boots follows the mention of Duchess Simel's family arrival. Luce is shocked to hear the name Simel mentioned by the people in the hall. Simel, the first female duke and protagonist of a cruel history, appears in a portrait. Montage of Aloys and Baron Felice makes Luce wonder if it's that Simmel family. The visitor requests an informal visit and asks to be shown quickly to their seats. Baron Felice apologizes to the visitor and offers to show them to a quiet seat. Luce gasps in shock, her hand to her mouth as the situation becomes clear. A soft gulp sounding escapes Luce as she hides, wondering why they are here. The Grand Palace stands under a full moon as a narrative reflects on future family success. Lucette clutches her arms, plagued by an ominous feeling despite the peaceful and brightly lit gardens. A soft, weary sigh sounding as the orange-haired girl huddles on the ground behind some bushes. A voice suddenly calls out to Lucette, addressing her as a lady and startling her in hiding. Rodanum stands before her under a cherry blossom tree, questioning why she is hiding here alone. A soft, magical hum sounding as the white-haired magician warns that this remote spot is dangerous. Lucette looks up in surprise at the tall, cloaked figure who has interrupted her quiet moment. Lucette explains that she simply needed a moment to think and intends to head back now. Lucette questions the magician, asking if it isn't equally dangerous for him to be alone here. Rodanum offers a slight smile, explaining that he is actually quite comfortable being on his own. Lucette notices his red eyes and feels a wave of sympathy for his likely past hardships. A rhythmic clapping sounding as Lucette laughs and dismisses red-eye superstitions as nothing but silly myths. Lucette warmly mentions that her own nice friend has red eyes too, which makes Rodanum smile. Lucette suggests staying in touch, prompting Rodanum to ask if her friend accompanied her today. Lucette confirms her friend is present while searching through her bag for an item she misplaced. Finding what she needed, Lucette cheerily asks the mysterious magician if he came to the festival alone. Rodanum explains that he is only here to observe the people attending the grand festival events. With a smirk, he asks if anything could possibly be more interesting than watching human nature. Lucette looks confused as Rodanum encourages her to imagine the entertainment found in observing others. Symbolic imagery illustrates the magician's musings on how every person is driven by at least one desire. Rodanum expresses his delight in seeing humans being devoured or destroyed by their own powerful desires. The magician reflects on how he never grows tired of witnessing the destructive cycles of humanity. Rodanum's expression turns sinister, leaving Lucette feeling deeply unsettled and terrified by his dark words. Nervously, Lucette agrees that his hobby is unique and hopes he continues to enjoy himself. Lucette quickly announces her departure, citing that her scheduled time for solitude has officially ended.
A soft rustle sounding as Radonam bids her farewell and tells her to enjoy the festivities. Radonam leans in cryptically, advising her to watch the audience closely because something interesting is starting. A sudden icy chill sounding as an unsettling sensation washes over Lucette from the magician's proximity. Lucette recoils in fear, shouting for the mysterious man to stay away from her immediately. A light whistling sounding as Lucette looks up to find that the magician has completely vanished.
Lucette wonders where he could have gone so quickly and silently, leaving the garden spot empty.
Perched in a nearby tree, Radonam ponders his own identity while holding a swirling purple flame. The scene shifts to the ballroom where enthusiastic clapping sounding as the master of ceremony speaks. A man in gold and white finery announces his upcoming piano performance to the crowded hall. The brown-haired man stands by a grand white piano, ready to perform a special musical rendition. The man sits to play as guests praise the Baron's flawless and highly skilled musical abilities. Lucette is among the guests, though she remains distracted and uneasy from her encounter in the garden. Lucette sighs, unable to shake the heavy and unsettled feeling the mysterious magician left with her. A sudden question breaks her trance, asking if she enjoyed the music that was just performed. Nearby, the blonde lord walks with a disguised Alois who praises the decision to attend. The blonde father is relieved to see his daughter's spirits lifted, calling her by her name. Lucette's eyes widen in shock upon hearing the name of the original story's famous female lead. An image of a beautiful blonde girl appears as Lucette considers the arrival of the story's protagonist. Lucette quickly averts her gaze and tries to hide her flustered reaction from those around her. Lucette stares ahead, processing the gravity of encountering a main character from the original narrative. A rhythmic tapping sounding as the Baron's fingers dance across the piano keys during his performance. A sudden, sharp realization sounding as Lucette makes intense eye contact with a black-haired, yellow-eyed man. Lucette looks down in embarrassment, blushing at the awkwardness of the unexpected and intense eye contact. She pauses for a moment, a sudden and confusing realization hitting her as she stops walking. Lucette looks back at the black-haired man, recognizing his face from her own hidden past. Lucette watches the black-haired man intently, wondering why he continues to stare at the audience. Lucette wonders if this is exactly what the mysterious person from earlier was warning her about. A heavy thud sounding as Lucette tries to remain calm, telling herself there is no need to fuss. Lucette watches the man's every move, seriously considering if he truly intended to be an assassin. Lucette scans the silhouettes of the ballroom guests, certain that a target is hidden among the crowd. Noticing a man, Lucette considers that if he were the target, he would have been attacked long ago. Lucette observes a laughing advisor, noting they lack the rank to inspire a deadly personal grudge. Lucette considers Franz but determines he is far too powerful for any assassin to confront directly. A sudden, sharp sound sounding as a startling realization causes Lucette to widen her green eyes. Lucette notices the disguised blonde girl, realizing she is high-ranking but likely too weak to resist. Determined to protect the vulnerable girl, Lucette watches her continue to hide her true identity. Lucette's suspicion is confirmed as she watches the man move, thinking her prediction was exactly right. A heavy rattle sounding as the attacker lunges, and Lucette shouts for her friend to avoid the strike. A fiery burst sounding as the black-haired man screams for everyone to stay out of his way. The blonde girl is frozen in shock, her eyes wide as the danger suddenly unfolds before her. A sharp clash sounding as Lucette intervenes, her face pale with terror as she confronts the attacker. A frantic warning sounding as a bystander screams that the current situation is becoming extremely dangerous. A rhythmic tapping sounding as a hand holds a glowing red gem, calling out for Luce. A man with glasses asks where she is, explaining his conference ended late and asking for a response. In a frustrated daze, the man wonders why this always happens when he needs to gather papers. Hearing a bystander ask if a child has died, the man with glasses pauses in absolute shock. Guests gossip about the tragedy, wondering how such a thing could happen in the peaceful village. Hearing a question about the red-haired girl's safety, the man with glasses repeats the description in horror. A paper fluttering sounding as the man pushes through the crowd, determined to pass through immediately. Desperate and panicked, the man with glasses calls out for Luce while searching the grand hall. A pained groan sounding as the man stops, his expression turning to one of utter disbelief. Eloise cradles the unconscious Lucette, crying while desperately wondering what she should do to help. Clutching Lucette tightly, the blonde girl screams at the top of her lungs for a doctor. A sudden, icy chill sounding as Lev's gaze sharpens, his eyes glowing with an intense red light. A heavy stumble sounding as Lev approaches, insisting they must take the injured girl away right now. A sharp tap sounding as Lev reaches out, commandingly telling the crying girl to move immediately. With a chilling glare, Lev orders the blonde girl not to touch his companion's body anymore. Trembling with fear, the blonde girl tearfully apologizes to the intense man standing over them. A soft tap sounding as Lucette touches Lev's face, telling him to calm down because the girl is innocent. Lucette smiles weakly, reassuring Lev that she is fine and asking him not to be hard on her.
a pained choke sounding as Lev whispers her name, his voice trembling with relief and lingering fear.
Lev apologizes for being scared and worried she was hurt, while Lucette acknowledges how shocked he was.
A soft sniffle sounding as Lev hides his face, apologizing again for making her worry about him.
A rhythmic tapping sounding as the blonde lord rushes over, and Alois calls out for her father.
The blonde lord covers Alois, suggesting they leave before the growing commotion makes things even worse. Lev calls out a sharp greeting, stopping the departing blonde lord in his tracks with one word.
Lev points out that people could have died, insisting they must say something before attempting to leave.
The blonde lord is visibly stunned by the confrontation, unable to find his words for a moment.
The Lord apologizes for the urgent situation, promising to greet them properly once things have finally settled.
Lucette smiles at Lev, insisting she is okay and suggesting they sort out the current situation first. Lev remains silent, his gaze fixed on Lucette as he processes the events that just took place. A heavy step sounding as Lev watches them go, wondering why he is always late to protect her.
Lev reflects on the crushing feeling of being unable to be by her side during crucial moments.
Lucette calls it an accident while a guard holds the attacker, thinking Lucette always appeared when needed. A heavy silence sounding as the narration laments failing to protect the one who was most precious.
A sharp crackle sounding as Lucette rests in Lev's arms, thinking she should have stopped watching.
With wide green eyes, Lucette looks up and softly calls out her companion's name.
Lucette smiles faintly, whispering that she feels reassured simply because he is here by her side.
Against a soft floral backdrop, Lev gently cradles the injured girl as she closes her eyes.
Lucette asks if she can rest for a bit, but Lev asks what she means by needing sleep.
A soft sliding sounding as Lucette's eyes slip shut, prompting Lev to call her name again. Realizing Lucette's skin has turned unnervingly pale, Lev tells himself to wait as panic sets in. A pained choke sounding as Lev frantically shakes Lucette, demanding that she snap out of it. Lev's red eyes widen behind his glasses as he processes the severity of the girl's current condition.
A sudden, sharp sound sounding as Lev stares at his blood-stained hand in Lucette's ruined dress.
In absolute shock, Lev whispers a denial as the terrifying reality of the situation finally hits him. A frantic warning sounding as Lev holds Lucette tightly, desperately begging her to open her eyes.
Baron Felice mentions the accident while the blonde lord insists there is no need for apologies.
The blonde lord promises to uncover the truth as Lucette lies unconscious in a grand bed. The Baron gestures while continuing his conversation with the golden-haired lord regarding the recent assassination attempt.
The blonde lord's gaze turns sharp and calculating as he considers the details of the attack.
The blonde lord orders Baron Felice not to delve any further into the matter of the attack. The Baron is visibly startled, expressing his absolute shock at the command to stop the official investigation. Turning away, the blonde lord reminds the Baron that today's visit was supposed to be strictly unofficial.
A portrait shows Alois, the blonde-haired girl with red eyes, as she appears in the original story.
The blonde lord hopes no more trouble arises, asking to let the matter pass while Felice listens. The Baron agrees to stop the investigation, and the blonde lord thanks him for his understanding. A soft rustle sounding as the blonde lord stops to ask the Baron a single final question. The lord asks about Lucette, whom the Baron explains is a child under his estate's patronage. Looking at the sleeping girl, the blonde lord hums thoughtfully while processing her role in the incident.
A memory shows the black-haired assassin lunging with a knife during the chaos of the grand ballroom.
In the vision, Lucette throws herself in front of the disguised Alois to take the deadly strike. The blonde lord watches the girl, whispering to himself that they must keep an eye on her. The blonde lord asks for a letter when Lucette wakes, dismissing the Baron's confusion about the request. Baron Felice asks for the reason behind the letter while staring at the departing blonde lord.
The lord calls Lucette a lifesaver he wishes to repay, leaving her in the Baron's care.
Lucette remains in a deep, peaceful sleep on her pillow, unaware of the high-stakes discussion nearby. Facing away from the bed, the Baron sighs and admits the current situation is becoming quite troublesome. A soft tapping sounding as the Baron reflects on his inability to defy the Duke's direct orders. Lev asks to enter while the Baron welcomes him into the room to check on Lucette's condition. A soft creak sounding as Lev enters the room, looking tired and anxious about his friend's safety. Lev asks about the perpetrator, only to learn that the Duke just recently passed through the area. Lev's expression turns to one of disbelief upon hearing that the investigation has been completely halted. Outraged, Lev reminds the Baron that Lucette almost died and questions the decision to stop searching. The Baron tries to calm Lev, explaining that the girl is safe and her wound was shallow.
Lev asks if the Duke's house stopped the investigation because the Lord has his own hidden reasons.
A heavy thud sounding as Lev clenches his fist, struggling to contain his growing anger and frustration.
Lev reflects on how Lucette risked everything only for the truth to remain buried by political power.
Lev asks for a moment alone with Lucette, and the Baron agrees to leave the room immediately. A soft creak sounding as the Baron apologizes for his lack of help before exiting the chamber.
A sharp tap sounding as Lev places his hand on a chair, turning his attention to Lucette. Lev stares at the sleeping girl, repeating the Duke's excuses to himself with a bitter, cynical tone.
Lev looks down in silence, feeling the weight of the injustice and his own failure to protect.
Lev considers that the Duke only cares for his daughter's safety, regardless of the details of today.
Narrative text explains that Aloise's parents, the Semel couple, seem to prioritize their daughter above all else.
Narrative text explains that parents in the Simmel family were extremely protective of their daughter within the palace. Lev acknowledges their desire to protect their daughter, but thinks to himself that he simply cannot accept it. Looking distraught, Lev sits by the bed and covers his face while Lucette remains unconscious on the pillow. Determined, Lev watches the sleeping girl, thinking they must find the perpetrator of the attack through any means. Lucette wakes up and calls out Lev's name, causing him to look over in a moment of surprise. A heavy rustle sounding as Lev jumps up, asking when she woke, while Lucette asks how long he stayed. A soft sniffle sounding as Lucette apologizes for her fear, while Lev blames himself for her getting hurt. Lev looks down solemnly, telling Lucette that he believes accidents like this one are, unfortunately, completely unavoidable. Lucette apologizes for breaking the brooch Lev gave her, but he offers to take care of it for her. A sharp tap sounding as Lev mentions bad news, prompting Lucette to ask him what has happened. Lev explains they cannot find the perpetrator, but reassures Lucette that the child she saved is perfectly safe. Lucette is relieved the girl was saved, but Lev asks her if that is truly all that matters now. Lev admits he feels a great relief and asks Lucette to stay with him just a bit longer. A soft shimmer sounding as Lucette drifts off, closing her eyes to get some much-needed rest and recovery. A soft breathing sounding as Lev remains seated by the bed, keeping a quiet vigil over his sleeping friend. Lev sits hunched over in his chair, his head bowed as he processes the events of the day. A soft rustle sounding as Lev holds the broken red gem, considering letting things go if she is all right. Clenching his fist, Lev vows to himself that he will never let an accident like this happen again. With a chilling, intense gaze, Lev declares that no more mistakes or errors will be tolerated from now on. Narrative text reflects on Lev's realization that strong power is necessary if he truly intends to protect her. Against the backdrop of white flowers, Lucette rests peacefully, unaware of the dark resolve forming within her companion. The narrative explains that Lev will willingly return to that role in order to achieve his goals. Sitting alone in the silent room, Lev reflects on the weight of the path he is about to take. A heavy thud sounding as Lev stares forward with glowing red eyes, promising Lucette he will become the truth. Under a starry sky, Lev's narration vows to correct everything and protect Lucette as he watches the castle. In the grand throne room, a king asks if the mission failed while a soldier kneels in shame. A frantic stumble sounding as the soldier tries to explain that another assassin may have interfered with their mission. A sharp ring sounding as the blonde king commands silence and draws his sword against the failing soldier. A sudden flash sounding as the king strikes with his blade, ending the subordinate's life in a single move. The king muses coldly, questioning if it was said that killers only grow stronger the more they take lives. Looking through the window at the body, the king reflects that everything is happening exactly as the prophecy predicted. A soft shimmer sounding as the king looks off with a satisfied smirk, contemplating the fate of the prophecy. Time passes and a voice asks Luce how she is feeling and if her wounds are healing well.
Lucette looks healthy and cheerful as she smiles during her recovery at home after the incident.
A soft laugh sounding as Lucette tells her mother the wound wasn't deep, while her mother brings her food. Scolding her daughter, the mother pinches Lucette's cheek while telling her she nearly broke her heart with worry. A soft rub sounding as the mother forbids her from going out, and Lucette agrees to focus on recovery. The mother expresses how terrified she was for her daughter's life and asks her never to do that again. Lucette calls out to her mother as narration explains she has been staying home and resting as advised. The mother and daughter stand together in their quiet home, sharing a moment of peace during Lucette's convalescence. A soft squeeze sounding as Lucette apologizes, while her mother warns her that the soup is going to spill. A close-up shows the bowl of warm soup, representing the care Lucette has received since returning home. Lucette asks about Lev, but her mother reveals there has been no word since he brought her back. Lucette wonders if Lev is angry with her for acting on her own and getting herself seriously hurt. A soft pat sounding as her mother strokes her head, suggesting Lev is simply busy and shouldn't be worried. Narrative text confirms that Lucette has not seen Lev even once since the day he brought her back home. A vision shows Lev's back as he walks away, symbolizing the distance that has grown between them recently. The mother suggests this is a good opportunity for Lucette to practice standing on her own for a change. Lucette remains dejected, still worrying that Lev might be disappointed in her for acting recklessly without his help. A sudden, sharp tap sounding as Lucette is startled, her thoughts still consumed by whether Lev is angry.
Hearing an approach, Lucette asks if it's Lev while her mother observes her reaction.
A soft scuffle sounding as Lucette rushes off, hoping Lev has arrived despite her mother's warning.
A sharp creak sounding as Lucette throws the door open, calling out Lev's name with excitement. A cheerful voice greets Lucette, revealing the visitor is a dark-haired man instead of her friend. Lucette identifies the man as Assistant Johann, who waves awkwardly as a purple bird flies by.
Lucette asks about the reason for his sudden visit, her expression turning from hope to curiosity.
Johann gestures toward a lavish horse-drawn carriage, announcing that the Duke of Simmel offers his thanks.
Johann explains that the Duke insisted on showing appreciation after learning about the injuries Lucette sustained.
Johann encourages them to accept the gifts while Lucette and her mother stare at the sparkling cargo. Johann asks to bring the treasures inside, but the mother and daughter exchange a silent, hesitant look. A close-up shows Lucette's resolute expression. She prepares to give her answer to the assistant.
Surprising the visitor, Lucette firmly requests that he send all the expensive gifts back to the Duke.
Johann asks if she dislikes the gifts, but Lucette quickly clarifies that her refusal isn't personal.
Lucette explains that anyone would have acted to save a child, feeling her actions deserve no reward.
Against a floral background, Lucette humbly repeats that she only did what anyone else would have done. Johann stares in disbelief at her modesty before Lucette asks her mother to support her decision.
The mother places a hand on Lucette's shoulder, agreeing to honor her daughter's selfless and principled request.
The mother asks Johann to inform the Duke's household of their refusal while he looks visibly flustered. Johann questions their certainty given the value of the money, but the mother firmly confirms their stance.
A soft sigh sounding as Johann bows his head, struggling to accept the family's unexpected lack of greed.
A soft squeeze sounding as the mother comforts Lucette while Johann promises to relay their final decision. Johann boards the elegant carriage, remarking that fulfilling his duty is the least he can do now. Johann bids Lucette farewell from the carriage, wishing for her full recovery before they meet again.
Lucette lets out a long breath of relief, glad she successfully turned away the excessive noble gifts.
Thinking to herself, Lucette reflects that the gifts felt like a bribe meant to buy their silence. A soft pat sounding as the mother praises Lucette for her wise and mature handling of the situation. Looking at her daughter with pride, the mother expresses her amazement at how grown-up Lucette has become. Lucette smiles, crediting her mother's lessons for her belief in not taking more than one truly needs. A soft laugh sounding as the mother playfully pinches Lucette's cheeks, teasing her for being so thoughtful. Lucette smiles warmly, thinking that she only wants to protect the things that truly matter to her. The mother and daughter walk back into their home together, leaving the encounter with the Duke behind. Night falls over the grand, illuminated palace as the scene shifts to the high-stakes world of the nobility. A sharp tap sounding as a woman in a red gown learns of Lucette's refusal from the Duke. The blonde Duke, Orleans, chuckles and describes Lucette as a rare and righteous child for her era. The woman in red thinks that Lucette nearly disrupted her plans, ignoring the Duke's confusion about her words. The blonde man watches as the woman in red orders him to send a letter to Rodante. With glowing red eyes, the woman in red declares her desire to see the girl's face in person.
A dark mist swirls around a red jewel necklace, hinting at the dangerous interest the nobility has taken.
Back at the store, Lucette insists she is feeling fine while looking at the shelves of supplies. Sweeping the floor, the mother tells Lucette to stop worrying about the shop and focus on resting.
Lucette gestures to herself, exclaiming that her wounds have healed completely and she feels wonderful and energetic.
The mother hums thoughtfully while watching her daughter, noticing her restlessness and desire to leave the house. The mother asks when Lucette plans to see Lev, catching her daughter off guard with a direct question. A soft sigh sounding as the mother recalls how Lucette constantly asked for Lev during her recovery period. The mother encourages Lucette to go find him, assuring her that she can manage the store alone. Lucette looks stunned and begins to blush as the realization of her mother's words sinks in deeply.
Lucette looks down shyly, her face turning pink as she considers the possibility of visiting her friend.
A soft thud sounding as Lucette rushes toward the door, promising to check on Love very quickly. A soft shimmer sounding as Lucette waves with a bright smile, promising her mother she will return soon. The mother watches with a happy laugh as her daughter sprints away without a single backward glance. Lucette's mother stands in the middle of her shop, her expression clouded with deep, silent contemplation. Reflecting on her daughter's injury, the brown-haired mother feels conflicted about letting the matter go without a fight. Clenching her hand on a wooden broom, the mother concludes that further involvement with the nobility is too dangerous. Her thoughts are interrupted by a sharp creak sounding as she worries about making a single mistake with them. Turning around, the mother asks if Luz forgot something, but her eyes widen in shock at the new arrival. A red-haired nobleman in a dark blue coat greets Miss Chelsea, noting that it has been quite some time. The mother stares at the unexpected visitor with a stunned and uneasy expression, recognizing him immediately from her past. With a confident and slightly menacing smirk, the red-haired man looks back, his green eyes shimmering with hidden intent. The mother identifies him as Friedrich and asks how he found her, while he mentions his ignored letters.
The mother declares they are no longer on speaking terms, but Friedrich mocks her newfound boldness while touching a lamp.
Friedrich insults her former status as a maid, prompting the mother to coldly demand he get to his point. With a chilling smile, Friedrich reveals his true purpose for visiting by asking for the whereabouts of his niece.
The mother dismisses his claim with a scoff, questioning why he would suddenly start looking for her daughter now.
Friedrich nonchalantly shrugs off her anger, insisting that his presence is purely intended to offer the family his help. Glancing around the humble shop, Friedrich remarks on the difficulty of living in such a modest and struggling environment.
A soft thud sounding as Friedrich paces, claiming a low-ranking maid like her shouldn't be living in this house.
Friedrich leans in close to the mother, mocking her failing general store and the leaking roof of their home. Unmoved by his intimidation, the mother tells him to get lost if he only came to spout nonsense. A sudden sharp ring sounding as the mother veils that he will never lay a finger on her daughter. Friedrich chuckles at her sensitivity, questioning her harsh treatment of someone who is only expressing concern for her welfare. Deciding to end the confrontation for now, Friedrich announces he will take his leave and departs the shop. Before leaving, Friedrich turns back with a smirk, promising that he will see his niece's face during their next meeting. A sharp tap sounding as the door closes, leaving the room in a heavy, oppressive silence after Friedrich's departure.
A heavy thud sounding as the mother sinks to her knees, trembling as she processes the threat to her family.
Slumped over on the floor, the mother remains paralyzed by the weight of the past returning to haunt her. Clenching her fist, the brown-haired mother vows to herself that she must hide Lucette no matter what happens next. In a moment of fierce determination, the mother promises she will never allow those people to take her daughter away. The scene shifts to the outside of a large, well-built house nestled among lush green trees under the sun. Time passes as the perspective moves through different parts of the property, eventually settling on a wooden door. A soft rap sounding as Lucette knocks on Lev's door, calling out for him to let her inside. After knocking many times, Lucette wonders if no one is home, her expression showing a hint of growing worry. Lucette feels a pang of rejection, thinking Lev might not want to see her since he never visited her. Entering the quiet building, Lucette explores the interior and heads toward a set of stairs, hoping to find her friend. Lucette hesitates, worrying that Lev might be displeased with her for coming up to his private living area uninvited. A soft scuffle sounding as Lucette starts to reconsider, thinking it might have been better if she had stayed downstairs. Her thoughts are broken by a sudden movement as someone approaches her from the shadows of the upper floor. Lucette looks startled, her green eyes widening as she tries to see who is moving toward her in the hallway. Calling out for love one more time, Lucette braces herself as a figure suddenly lunges forward toward her. A soft squeeze sounding as a young blonde boy unexpectedly throws his arms around Lucette in a tight hug. Caught completely off guard, Lucette stares down at the child with a look of utter confusion and surprise. The blonde boy asks for his brother, leaving Lucette bewildered as she wonders about the identity of the child. Kneeling down to his level, Lucette listens as the boy asks if she knows where his older brother is gone. Lucette is struck by how adorable the boy is, her initial confusion being replaced by a sense of wonder. Reflecting on the situation, Lucette is amazed to discover that Lev actually has a younger sibling she never knew about. Lucette smiles warmly at the boy, privately thinking that he looks absolutely nothing like her dark-haired companion, Lev. Lucette explains that she is also waiting for Lev and suggests they wait together since he is likely to return. A soft pat sounding as Lucette invites the boy to go downstairs, her curiosity about him growing by the second. The young blonde boy looks up at Lucette with wide blue eyes, seemingly intrigued by her presence in his home. Lucette remembers her past walks with Lev, contrasting his stoic nature with the bright energy of his little brother. Overwhelmed by the boy's charm, Lucette finds it difficult to contain her excitement over meeting such a cute sibling. Lucette asks the young blonde boy if he likes Lev, and he clarifies that he is his brother. The blonde boy pauses thoughtfully, his blue eyes reflecting a moment of quiet, internal contemplation. Lucette smiles warmly at the boy, agreeably noting that his older brother is indeed a very kind person. The boy mentions that even now, the books his brother reads to him are his absolute favorites. Chibi versions of the pair appear as the boy admits he came to see his brother because he hasn't slept well. Lucette watches the boy with a tender gaze, noticing how much the child truly seems to like Lev. Feeling a pang of sympathy, Lucette thinks to herself that not being able to sleep is quite sad. A bright idea suddenly strikes Lucette, her expression shifting into one of clever and helpful inspiration. Lucette tells the boy she might not read books like Lev, but has something else for him. Lucette holds out a small pink candy in her palm, inviting the young boy to try one. Text-heavy bubbles explain it is an herbal candy made from calming plants meant to help one sleep well. Lucette enthusiastically points to a vision of the ingredients while the blonde boy watches her with curiosity. The boy asks if the medicine is dangerous, but Lucette reassures him that it is totally safe.
Lucette tells him to just trust her, guaranteeing that the special herbal candy will definitely work.
A soft thump sounding as the young boy's heart reacts to Lucette's encouraging smile and kind gaze. Sitting together on the couch, the blonde boy takes the candy as Lucette watches him with anticipation. The blonde boy chews the candy slowly, his expression remaining neutral as he tests the new flavor. Lucette looks stunned when the young boy nonchalantly remarks that he does not feel sleepy at all. Lucette explains he just ate it and urges him to lie down and close his eyes to rest. The boy asks if he should lie down like this while settling onto the floral-patterned couch cushions. The boy asks if Lucette will leave if he falls asleep, but she promises she will stay. Lucette laughs happily, thinking to herself that he is still just a cute kid as he settles in.
The scene shifts to the peaceful interior of the room, showing various decorative details and floral patterns.
Giggling, Lucette notes that the boy fell asleep immediately and must have been exceptionally tired. Lucette wonders why Lev would hide such an adorable brother and decides to ask him about it later. A soft blink sounding as Lucette's eyes begin to droop, her own exhaustion finally catching up to her. Lucette hugs a pink pillow, realizing she is still quite tired and has not fully recovered yet. Lucette decides to close her eyes for a moment until Lev returns, sleeping beside the blonde boy. The camera lingers on a wooden table holding a potted plant and a candle in the quiet room. Perspective shifts to the empty wooden staircase, emphasizing the growing silence and stillness within the house. At a locked wooden door, a voice from within announces that they have finally finished a task. A blue jeweled brooch is inspected, with the speaker noting its magical tracking and recording functions for Luce. Lord Lotta, a hooded man with white hair, looms over Aurelian, asking if his work is too grim. A close-up reveals Aurelian's sharp red eyes as he looks up, his expression filled with intense focus. A sudden, sharp rattle sounding as Aurelian asks how long Lotta has been watching him work. Lotta asks about the festival, but Aurelian looks stressed and dismisses the event as a terrible experience. Aurelian flinches slightly, his red eyes widening in reaction to something mentioned by the hooded man. Aurelian asks if Lady Chamel was supposed to recognize him, while Lotta asks what makes him think that.
Lotta notes that she appeared in disguise, suspecting the Imperial Palace ordered her to watch over him.
A vision of a blonde woman appears as Lotta remarks that she seemingly did not recognize him. Lotta laughs softly, doubting that the Chamel family would go so far despite their loyalty to the crown. Lotta explains that princess candidates are forbidden from public outings, which likely prompted her secret disguise. Aurelian looks visibly stunned, repeating the mention of a crown princess candidate with a look of disbelief. Lotta notes that the information is top secret, but decides it is all right to share it with him. Leaning in, Lotta reveals the Empress has been very busy searching for a bride for Prince Delmar. Aurelian asks if the Empress intends to make Delmar the next emperor, but Lotta remains uncertain. Aurelian asks if the royal situation is currently unstable, his red eyes reflecting a deep and serious concern. Aurelian reflects that an event involving the emperor would provide him with a significant and welcome opportunity. A hand in a black glove is shown gripping a glowing purple dagger behind someone's dark coat. Aurelian's gaze remained sharp as Lotta suggests they finally move on to discussing the main topic. Lord Rawdon looms over Aurelian, questioning if he has forgotten the true reason for his current presence.
A sharp clench sounding as Aurelian grips his desk, cursing his own lapse in memory and focus.
Rawdon smiles thinly, explaining his duty to gauge loyalty before demanding that Aurelian give him his hand. Aurelian's red eyes widen in panic as he realizes his private thoughts are about to be exposed. A moment of tense silence follows as the weight of Rawdon's oppressive magic fills the small room. A heavy pulse sounding as Rawdon takes his hand while Aurelian fears his secrets will be revealed. A sudden, sharp rattle sounding as the atmosphere turns cold, mirroring the intense dread within Aurelian's heart. Both Rawdon and Aurelian look startled as their magical connection is broken by a sudden, unseen force. Aurelian pulls away, questioning the strange interference while Rawdon observes him with a deeply curious expression. Light spills from beneath a nearby door as Rawdon encourages Aurelian to go and investigate the source. Rawdon notes he can understand Aurelian's thoughts simply by looking into his eyes, bypassing the need for magic. A heavy thud sounding as Aurelian is struck by the realization that an entire week has passed. A sudden, sharp creak sounding as Aurelian bursts through the door, his face twisted in sheer desperation. Rushing down the stairs, Aurelian panics over having failed to visit Lucette even once during his isolation. Aurelian stops in his tracks as Prince Delmar appears in the doorway, calling out to his older brother. Staring in utter disbelief, Aurelian questions how the young blonde prince managed to find his secret location. A soft scuffle sounding as Delmar explains he brought a guest to spend some time with him. Aurelian's eyes widen in horror as he anticipates exactly who Delmar has brought into his private sanctuary. Lucette sits quietly on a floral couch, clutching a pink pillow while appearing lost in her thoughts.
Aurelian is frozen in shock, realizing that Lucette and his younger brother have already met and spoken. Aurelian turns to Delmar with a shadowed expression, sternly asking why the boy has returned here again. A sharp flinch sounding as Aurelian reminds Delmar of his previous warning never to show up again. The scene shifts to the exterior of a grand palace silhouetted against a vibrant, golden-hued evening sky. A pink-haired noblewoman confronts a group of sobbing maids, declaring that Prince Delmar is nowhere to be found. The maids bow low, offering desperate apologies for the sudden and unexpected disappearance of the young prince. Furious, the noblewoman accuses the servants of making excuses instead of performing their duties to the crown. A sharp rustle sounding as she grips her lavender dress, preparing herself to take charge of the situation.
Commanding the maids to follow her, the noblewoman insists they find the missing prince without further delay.
A sharp tap sounding as the noblewoman walks away, her purple cape billowing behind her in haste. A quick clack sounding as she wonders what the king will say when he learns of this disaster. Stopping in the hallway, the noblewoman's attention is captured by the sight of a familiar hooded man. Her purple eyes widen in surprise as she realizes that Radon is the perfect person to help. A soft scuffle sounding as she calls out to Radon, begging him to assist in finding Delmar. Radon remains calm, his red eyes reflecting deep thought as he considers the prince's disappearance from the palace. A mental image of Aurelian appears as Rahan begins to suspect where the young boy might have gone. The noblewoman urgently asks Radon if he has any knowledge regarding the prince's whereabouts or his destination.
Radon smiles politely, admitting that while he is not certain, he has several promising leads to investigate.
The noblewoman watches Radon intently as he explains there are clues well worth tracking down to find Delmar. Back at the house, the afternoon sun shines through a large window, casting long shadows across the room. A soft tremble sounding as Delmar looks up with tearful blue eyes, asking why his brother is angry. Aurelian stands over Delmar, reiterating his command that the boy was never to set foot here again. A sharp grab sounding as Aurelian demands to know why his warnings were ignored by the young prince. Delmar apologizes through his tears, promising his older brother that he will obey all future commands and rules. A flashback shows Delmar alone in his bed, unable to sleep due to the oppressive silence of Palace. A soft slide sounding as Delmar sits up, thinking that only seeing his brother could soothe his heart. A soft thud sounding as Delmar sneaks through the palace corridors, determined to find a way to escape. A bright flash sounding as Delmar activates a magic circle, having secretly used Rodhan's power for his journey. Delmar pleads with Aurelian to return to the palace together, hoping their father will be open to talk. Delmar stares up with hope, insisting there is no reason for his brother to remain in this place. A sharp tap sounding as Aurelian turns away, stating that his brother will never truly understand his perspective. A sharp sword rests against an ornate backdrop as thoughts linger on the Emperor's hidden motives. Aurelian questions his presence here, suspecting his current situation somehow involves an older sister. Delmar suggests that Aurelian's attachment to this humble place must be because of the red-haired girl. Delmar offers to let the girl stay, but Aurelian flatly rejects the idea with a firm refusal. Aurelian commands Delmar to keep the girl a secret and pretend he never visited this house. A sharp click sounding as Aurelian's red eye narrows behind his glasses, focused on a new plan. Aurelian watches Lucette sleeping, fearing that rumors of her existence could trigger dangerous palace interference. A sharp snap sounding as Aurelian roughly grabs Delmar, insisting the boy return home before it is too late. Aurelian's eyes widen in alarm as he suddenly calls out the young prince's name with urgent intensity. Aurelian and Delmar look up in total shock as a woman in a purple gown appears. Delmar looks up at the unexpected visitor with a very hesitant and questioning expression on his face. A sharp gasp sounding as Delmar recognizes the woman, realizing his mother has discovered his secret location. The queen demands that Aurelian let go of her son and explain what he is doing. Aurelian stares ahead as the queen calls his name with an incredibly sharp and angry tone. A heavy huff and pant sounding as the queen's arrival fills the quiet hallway with tension. Standing on the stairs, the queen commands Aurelian to unhand the young prince this very instant. The queen looks down at Aurelian with intense fury, asking if he summoned the boy here. A soft swish sounding as Aurelian explains it is a misunderstanding and the prince arrived first. Aurelian looks away with a serious expression, swearing to the queen that he did nothing wrong. Delmar looks up with pleading eyes, confirming that Aurelian is innocent and did nothing wrong. Delmar apologizes for his impulsive decision, explaining he came to the house without considering the consequences. The queen repeats Delmar's words back to him, her expression remaining skeptical of his sudden explanation. A close-up of Aurelian's red eye as he reflects on the special privileges the prince enjoys. Aurelian reflects on the prince's special privileges, noting the irony of his freedom to wander outside the palace. Aurelian remarks on the unfairness of the housebound crown princess candidate compared to the wandering prince. The queen looks stunned, asking how Levinus discovered the top secret information regarding the crown princess candidate.
Delmar is shocked, demanding an explanation from his mother about the marriage plans he knew nothing about. Aurelian notes that imperial secrets eventually reach even the most distant corners despite all secrecy attempts.
The queen stands on the stairs as Aurelian questions why she is rushing the prince's marriage.
The queen stares ahead silently as Aurelian asks if internal palace instability prompted the engagement.
A vision appears of a hooded man with white hair offering a golden apple to a lady. Aurelian reflects that while the imperial family seems peaceful, the emperor remains vigorous as always. The queen declares her decision was independent while Delmar protests as Aurelian silently notes the king's vigor.
Delmar demands to know what marriage means and why he was excluded from the decision-making process. A sharp shout sounding as the queen commands Delmar to be quiet, her face full of rage. The queen insists she is protecting the prince and orders him to behave for his own good.
A close-up of Aurelian's mouth reveals he finds the queen's protective behavior toward the prince amusing.
Aurelian notes the imperial family's disdain for the prince despite seeking a new crown princess. The queen asks Aurelian what he truly wants to say after speaking so rudely to her. Aurelian firmly declares that it is finally time to put an end to her constant surveillance. The queen looks back in shock, questioning his intent to defy orders and take a child. The queen asks if he intends to take her child as a hostage and defy the king. Delmar looks sad as Aurelian explains the prince's visits have caused too much trouble. The queen declares that neither Aurelian nor his associates will ever be allowed near the family again. Aurelian warns them never to return, thinking it strange that the emperor has spared him.
A vision of a chess match appears as Aurelian wonders if the emperor can't kill him.
Looking up at the chandelier, the queen asks if those are his final words before she departs.
A quick dash sounding as Delmar runs to his mother while Aurelian offers his future services.
The queen hugs Delmar as Aurelian states he would be more than happy to see the king. Aurelian vows to find the truth, declaring today the final time they will meet at this house.
A peaceful atmosphere fills the room as a voice gently calls out to Lucette, urging her to wake.
A soft blink sounding as Lucette groans while slowly opening her green eyes to the morning light. Love looks down with a calm expression, admitting he kept her waiting for quite a long time. A sharp gasp sounding as Lucette sits up on the couch, startled to find Lev has already arrived. Lucette looks embarrassed, apologizing for sleeping too long, while Lev reassures her that it is perfectly fine. Sitting together on the floral couch, Lucette curiously asks if Lev's younger brother has already departed. Lucette explains that the small blonde boy had been searching for him during his entire absence. Lev remains silent, his expression shadowed as he processes the news of the young prince's visit.
Lev explains the boy was just a cousin who was left and will likely never return again.
Lucette admits she was surprised by the sudden encounter, noting that the boy seemed to like him.
Lucette steals a quiet glance at Lev, her expression filled with unspoken questions and growing concern.
The moon shines through the window as Lucette asks if something is wrong, prompting Lev's confused response. Lucette reflects on their time apart, feeling as though ages have passed since their last proper meeting. Lucette confesses she feared he was angry because she had behaved rashly and suffered an injury. Looking at Lev, Lucette notes how inseparable they usually are and admits his recent behavior felt unfamiliar. Lucette confesses that his sudden distance made her feel as though he had become a total stranger.
Lucette looks at Love with pleading eyes, desperately asking if they are still the same close friends.
Love stares at her in surprise as Lucette questions if they are still on the same page. Lev breaks the tension by asking Lucette to offer her hand to him for a brief moment. Placing a repaired brooch in her palm, Lev admits he hated being unable to hear her voice. Love makes a solemn vow never to leave her side, leaving Lucette wide-eyed and deeply moved. A soft hug sounding as Lucette lunges forward, pulling Lev into a tight and sudden embrace. Lucette clings to him, admitting her worry and promising to forgive his absence just this once. Lev blushes deeply as he returns the hug, apologizing for the distress his isolation cost her. Love secretly reflects on the brooch, which allows him to track her and listen to her heartbeat. A soft squeeze sounding as Lev holds her close, silently vowing never to let her go again. A dark determination fills Lev's eyes as he thinks about being together with her for eternity. The scene shifts to the Grand Palace exterior, standing tall under a bright and clear morning sky. A sturdy wooden door remains closed as the narration notes that Lev never made her wait. A soft click sounding as Lev enters with a tray of snacks, resuming their usual friendly conversations. A joyful kya sounding as Lucette enjoys the treats, though she worries about her recent lack of discipline. Lucette wonders if she should control her appetite, but finds Lev's delicious cookies far too tempting. Looking in a mirror, Lucette hears a voice questioning her unusual vanity as she fixes her hair. Secretary Johann appears in the doorway with a bright smile, greeting Lucette with great enthusiasm and warmth. A loud ha-ha sounding as Johann admits the castle felt incredibly lonely and quiet without her presence. A soft rummage sounding as Johann explains his absence was due to her recovery and poor health. A quick lift sounding as Johan offers Lucette a formal letter, happy that they finally cross paths. Lucette is stunned to find she has received a formal invitation from the prestigious House Samel. Lucette questions why they would send an invitation after she had already declined all of their previous gifts. Lucette imagines the noble's appreciation, noting they even gave her permission to bring a guest along.
Lucette worries that her mother would never allow her to attend such a grand and public event.
Lucette is shocked when Johan suggests that her mother might actually be in favor of the outing. Johan explains he met her mother earlier, and she decided to leave the final choice to Lucette.
Lucette stares ahead in total disbelief, finding it impossible that her mother would ever agree to this.
The scene shifts to a rustic house as a voice clearly grants permission for the trip.
Lucette is left completely speechless, her wide-eyed expression reflecting her utter confusion at the sudden change.
Lucette's mother confirms the news, asking if Lucette is truly surprised by her unexpected and sudden approval. Standing in the foyer, the mother suggests that attending would be a good way to show her face. Lucette smiles with pure delight, having fully expected her mother to object to the invitation immediately. A soft pat sounding as the mother praises Lucette's eloquence and asks when she plans to leave. Chelsea tells Dahlia that someone will collect her soon, and Dahlia offers packing assistance. Dahlia questions Chelsea's decision, asking if she truly plans to keep the truth from Lucette.
Dahlia urges her sister to explain everything, but Chelsea dismisses the request by calling her name.
Chelsea stares ahead with a cold expression, declaring that the matter has already been settled. Dahlia looks at her sister with a mixture of sadness and frustration at her stubborn refusal.
Chelsea leaves to tend the store and suggests Lucette bring Lev along on her upcoming trip.
Dahlia pleads for a conversation as Lucette watches the two women walk away in total confusion.
Lucette looks downward with an uncertain expression, wondering if it is truly acceptable to go.
As the sun sets, a voice asks why Lucette has been so gloomy throughout the day. A tired sigh sounding as Lev serves tea while Lucette rests her head on her hand. Lucette explains that her mother and Aunt Dahlia quarreled and fears she is the primary cause. Lev asks for clarification on the argument while Lucette prepares to explain the source of the conflict. A sharp what? Sounding as Lev hears about the unexpected invitation from House Samel. Lucette discusses the invitation, noting they sent gifts before sending a formal letter after her rejection. Lucette admits feeling pressured, noting her mother approved of the trip while Aunt Dahlia strongly disagreed.
Lucette finds the situation difficult, unable to comprehend why the invitation caused such a heated argument.
A vision shows two men in a palace as Lev considers why Lucette is being rewarded. A vision of nobles appears as Lev reflects on how unlikely it is for commoners to be invited.
Lev looks away with narrowed eyes, suspecting a hidden motive behind the family's sudden invitation.
Lucette realizes Lev wasn't listening and asks him to pay attention to what she is saying.
Lucette asks Lev to accompany her to the Samel estate, hoping his presence will provide some comfort.
Lev offers a gentle smile, assuring her that going with her will not be a problem. Lucette is relieved, while Lev wonders how he could ever find her request to be an inconvenience. A soft pat sounding as a hand reaches out to touch the girl's long orange hair. Lev places a hand on Lucette's shoulder, making a solemn promise to stay by her side. Lucette beams with a joyful smile and brightly thanks Lev for agreeing to join her. Lev looks ahead with a dark intensity, vowing to ensure that Lucette is never in danger again. Under a sunset sky, Lev asks to walk her home, but Lucette insists she is fine.
Lucette waves goodbye from the distance, promising to see Lev again the day after tomorrow.
A quick clack sounding as the door is shut, leaving Lev alone in the quiet hallway. Standing by the closed door, Lev stares at the floor while contemplating the true nature of House Samel. A vision of a blonde noble appears as Lev reflects on how the family survived imperial purges. Lev reflects on the cunning Duchess Simmel, who knew exactly how to navigate palace politics to survive. A sharp clack sounding as Lev turns his head toward the door at a sudden movement. Lev suspects the cunning Duchess has a hidden reason for inviting the innocent girl to her estate.
Lev's red eyes glow with determination as he vows to prevent anyone from harming the girl.
A repetitive knock-knock sounding against the heavy wooden door as Lev stands at the ready. A sudden swish sounding as the door opens to reveal a view of the orange sky. Lev looks surprised, asking the person at the door if they have forgotten something important. A cloaked woman apologizes for the late hour and requests to come inside for a serious conversation. Dahlia looks at Lev with a piercing gaze, stating she knows he is not from this region.
Lev looks on in shock as Dahlia begins to question his true status and his presence there.
A soft whoosh sounding as the scene shifts outside, where Dahlia demands to know the boy's identity. Lev stands in the warm light of the window, questioning what she means by his identity. A heavy thump sounding as Dahlia declares that Lev should not even be in this place.
Dahlia tells him to stop pretending, citing her long experience working for various high-ranking noble families.
Dahlia confronts Lev about concealing his identity while staying in the village, causing him to flinch. Lev looks back with a tense expression, demanding to know why she is confronting him right now. A vision of a family tree appears as Dahlia mentions the noble name of Lawrence Menelik.
Love stares ahead with a neutral expression, confirming he knows the lord who died of an illness.
Dahlia confirms the nobleman passed away after moving to the small village. Dahlia explains Luce was born with the elite Menelik blood flowing through her. Dahlia recalls serving as Lawrence's maid before they fell in love and fled.
Flashback shows House Menelik feared Lawrence would return to claim their immense power.
Dahlia recounts Lawrence dying shortly after their arrival due to his frail health. Dahlia passionately declares her husband was a sacrifice to his own family's greed. A sharp freeze, sounding as Lev is stunned by Dahlia's vow to protect Luce. A soft grasp sounding as Dahlia admits she cannot accomplish her goal alone. A firm clasp sounding as Dahlia begs Lev to use his power for Luce. Dahlia offers any arrangement, including marriage or service, to ensure her daughter's safety. Lev realizes Luce's mother is unaware of his status as imperial royalty. A stunned silence follows Dahlia's intense and unexpected request for protection. Lev claims his status is a mere facade and apologizes for being unhelpful. Dahlia looks down sadly, assuming Lev must have his own hidden reasons. A sudden swish sounding as Dahlia turns her back to prepare for departure. Dahlia promises to keep Lev's true status a secret from everyone else. Dahlia addresses the boy as Levinus while walking toward the quiet hallway. Dahlia looks back with a gentle smile, asking him to stay by Luce's side. Lev agrees, but feels a sudden and ominous sense of dread. A sharp creak sounding as a carriage arrives at the grand estate gates. A maid welcomes the group to the massive and ornate House Simmelcastle. Luce is overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the palace and its servants. Luce, Lev, and Sir Franz stand before the entrance, amazed by the grandeur. Louise offers to assist Luce with the necessary preparations for the evening banquet. Louise explains the Duchess has ordered the girl receive the best possible treatment. Sir Franz encourages Luce to go, noting her special treatment as a savior. Sir Franz casts a knowing glance toward Lev as Luce follows the maid. Sir Franz asks Lev if he is interrupting a date with his escort. Lev admits something about the current situation is deeply bothering his mind. Sir Franz suggests it is natural for someone to recognize Lev's true status. Sir Franz believes someone of Lev's stature would certainly be recognized here. Sir Franz reveals he knew Lev wasn't ordinary since their swords first clashed. Lev sighs, reflecting on how long he has lived in the quiet village. A heavy step sounding as Sir Franz demands to know Lev's true identity. Lev tells Sir Franz that his questioning has gone quite far enough. Lev reflects on his secret reason for remaining in the village. A steady step sounding as Lev follows a butler into the estate garden. Sir Franz wonders about the true depth and nature of Lev's hidden secret. The scene shifts to the opulent and brightly lit interior of the palace. Louise calls to Luce as the girl prepares for the formal dinner event. Luce nervously mentions the dress she is wearing to the attentive maid. Luce stands in a beautiful, layered pink gown adorned with lace and frills. Luce expresses her concern over wearing a dress with such a low neckline. Luce asks about etiquette while Louise tells her to simply relax and be herself. Louise advises Luce to be especially mindful when interacting with her grace. Louise warns that the Duchess rarely reveals her true intentions through her words.
Louise confirms the Duchess will attend the banquet after finishing a prior engagement.
Louise mentions the Duchess is very interested in Luce, making the girl nervous. Luce reflects on her choice to reject gifts after receiving such hospitality. A soft raise sounding as Luce notes how awkward this hospitality feels. Lev enters the room and calls to Luce, who turns around looking surprised by his arrival. Lev asks if she is finished getting ready while walking toward her, followed by Sir Franz. Lev smiles and tells the girl that the layered pink dress looks great on her. A rhythmic badoom sounding as Luce wonders why her heart is suddenly racing so fast. Luce notes that seeing Lev every day does not stop her from feeling strangely different now. Luce stares at her friend and wonders why he looks so remarkably different to her today. The girl thinks to herself that Lev looks almost like a prince in a fairy tale. Luce notes that he took his glasses off, and the brown-haired boy offers a quiet acknowledgement. Sir Franz tells Lev wearing glasses wasn't proper etiquette, while Lev asks if he looks strange. A sudden jolt sounding as Luce quickly assures Lev that he looks really good. Lev smiles, admitting he rarely sees her like this, and asks if she likes his appearance. Luce admits feeling awkward, but notes that seeing Lev happy makes her want to shout. A powerful whoosh sounding as Luce mentally screams about how good-looking her childhood friend is. In her imagination, Luce stands on a high peak and shouts her joy to the world. Luce is swept away by a wave of intense excitement after seeing Lev's new look. Luce realizes shouting might be troublesome as Lev asks the girl if she is all right. Lev notes that it is time for the banquet to start and asks to go. Lev offers to escort Luce to the banquet hall as they walk together toward the event. Luce is deeply touched by Lev's kindness as he prepares to act as her formal escort. Lev tells Luce the Duchess will be late but is definitely trying to make it.
A steady step sounding as the group enters the grand banquet hall for the formal dinner. A soft rummage sounding as Lev asks if she'll be all right, and Luce confidently agrees.
Luce shows Lev an envelope explaining that she has prepared something special for the occasion.
The banquet table is covered in a lavish spread of meats, bread, fruits, and wine. The blonde man welcomes Luce, noting the long journey and asking her to be comfortable.
Luce thanks him for the invitation and asks about the blonde lady sitting beside him.
The blonde girl remains silent as she gazes downward, her face hidden behind her long hair. The girl identifies herself as Aloise Semel and thanks Luce for everything on that day. Luce realizes she is really meeting Eloise and tells herself she must not look foolish. A quick glance, sounding as Eloise turns her attention toward Lev with an expression of curiosity.
Eloise calls out to the boy, capturing the attention of everyone seated at the dinner table.
Aloy stares at Lev with an intense curiosity, studying his features with a focused expression.
The blonde man asks if she remembers Lev, but Eloise thinks she's seen him elsewhere.
Lev claims he has been in Sinon village all this time, and she must be mistaken.
Eloise apologizes for the error, though she notes that Lev still seems very familiar somehow. A heavy silence sounding as an awkward hush falls over the guests at the banquet table. The blonde man laughs, suggesting it was a misunderstanding and urging everyone to start eating dinner. A quick glance sounding as Luce looks at Lev and notices his tense and defensive posture. Luce wonders if Lev is upset about past events, noting he is unusually avoidant of others. Luce realizes that for some unknown reason, Lev has his guard up against their current hosts.
A rhythmic clatter sounding as the grand chandelier illuminates the opulence of the banquet hall.
Luce begins to cut her salmon dinner as the host addresses her by name once more.
The blonde man asks why Luce declined his gifts, and Luce prepares her awkward response. Luce explains she only did what was right and says it wasn't really anything special. The blonde nobleman notes that she was even disguised, causing the girl to look away. A sharp creak sounding as Eloise looks toward the door at the sound of someone arriving.
A brown-haired woman enters the hall, praising Luce for being observant as she joins the group.
The woman identifies herself as Duchess Simmel and welcomes the girl who saved her daughter. Duchess Simmel apologizes for being late and tells her guests they do not need to rise. Duchess Simmel sits down, offering to answer any questions Luce may have about the incident. Luce thinks the Duchess is friendlier than expected, but soon becomes cautious as the mood shifts. Luce inquires about the investigation into the assailant and why Lady Eloise was wearing a disguise. Duchess Simmel gazes at the girl with a silent, calculating expression that makes the atmosphere tense. The Duchess claims they are conducting a discreet investigation while the girl listens with growing concern. A sudden startled sounding as Luce asks why the investigation was supposedly halted if it's still ongoing.
A rhythmic tap sounding as the Duchess mentions finding something strange during her private inquiries into the matter.
The Duchess directly asks Luce to explain exactly how she managed to save her daughter that day. Duchess Simmel questions how a young girl could track an assassin's movements so precisely before an attack. The Duchess explains her need to consider every possibility, while Eloise looks on with a worried expression. Duchess Simmel suggests Luce schemed the attack from the start, prompting a shocked reaction from the young girl. Luce is horrified by the Duchess's accusation that she might have been colluding with the dangerous assailant. Both the Duke and Lady Eloise look completely stunned by the Duchess's sudden and ridiculous claim. Luce realizes the Duchess is being intentionally mean and wonders what her true goal for this interrogation is.
Love stands up to defend Luce, calling out the Duchess's improper conduct as she remains perfectly calm.
Duchess Simmel demands that both of them cooperate with a more in-depth investigation into the rescue incident. Lev stares intensely at the Duchess with a cold, defensive expression as the tension in the room peaks. The Duchess suddenly ends the questioning, saying she has heard enough for now as she looks away. A powerful rise sounding as Lev stands up and places a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. A sharp, startled sounding as the hosts react to the sudden movement and heavy tension from Lev. Lady Eloise looks deeply worried while Duchess Simmel watches the group with a steady, unreadable gaze. Luce looks down at her arm in shock, noticing a sudden and very concerning development.
A rhythmic da-dun sounding as Luce realizes a red, blotchy rash has appeared across her forearm.
A sudden spring sounding as the Duke asks what happened to her arm and if the food was bad. Luce quickly claims she is fine and just needs to rest, trying to minimize the growing alarm.
A firm grasp sounding as Lev tells Luce they are leaving immediately and don't need to stay.
Lev apologizes to the Duchess, but firmly states that the conversation is over, given the girl's current state. A cold glare sounding as Lev tells the Duchess they have shown plenty of respect as invited guests. A sudden rush sounding as Lev leads the girl out while the Duchess watches them with indifference. The scene shifts to the quiet and ornate interior of another room away from the banquet hall.
Lev explains he turned down a physician because she claimed the medicine she brought would be enough.
Luce apologizes for putting him in a difficult position and notes how shocked he seemed at the table.
Luce tells him to stop kneeling, but Lev admits the Duchess's rude treatment of her makes him angry.
A sharp grit sounding as Lev expresses his fury over how the Duchess dared to treat a guest.
Luce stops him, explaining that there has been a significant misunderstanding about the rash on her arm.
Lev looks completely confused, staring at her with a blank expression and a floating question mark.
Luce reveals she used oak tree moss extract to intentionally cause the rash as a planned diversion.
An image of the envelope and a small bottle of extract confirms the girl's clever and tactical plan. Luce winks and notes that the rash appeared at the perfect time to end the Duchess's interrogation.
A relieved woo sounding as Lev realizes the injury was a fake and not a real illness.
Luce smiles and apologizes for not informing him of her secret plan to escape the banquet earlier. Lev looks down silently, as if processing the fact that she hurt herself to solve the problem. Lev looks at her and asks if relying on him wasn't an option she even considered using. Luce is surprised by his question, her eyes wide as she realizes she hurt his pride or feelings. A soft touch, sounding as Lev says it, is painful for him to watch her get hurt.
Lev recalls past times he protected her, asking her not to choose such self-sacrificing solutions in the future.
Luce stares at him, realizing for the first time how deeply her actions affect her childhood friend.
Luce reflects on how she thought ending the matter with the Duchess this way was the right move.
Luce notes that while her plan was lucrative, she completely overlooked the emotional impact it would have.
Luce looks at the boy and realizes she ended up hurting Lev's feelings despite her best intentions.
Luce gives a confused response as she struggles to understand the sudden and intense turn of emotions.
Close-up of Lev as he begins to reveal his second wish to his red-haired companion.
Luce stares at him with wide green eyes, surprised by the mention of a wish.
The girl's focused green eyes wait with anticipation for the boy to continue his thought.
A soft apology is uttered amidst the quiet, ornate furnishings of the private sitting room. Lev admits that he likely upset her by choosing not to discuss his diversion plan beforehand.
The black-haired boy remains kneeling before the seated girl as they navigate their complicated feelings.
Luce flashes a peace sign and reminds Lev that he still has 2 wishes left, causing a rhythmic but dumb sounding.
Lev asks her to promise she will seek his help in the future, and she agrees.
Luce suddenly remembers something important as the pair stands together in the grandly decorated room.
Luce worries that they abandoned Sir Franz back at the banquet, but Lev reassures her. The narration explains that the man was prepared to handle such situations on their behalf. A rhythmic, haggard sounding as Duchess Simmel thanks Sir Franz for his long and detailed explanation. A rhythmic gaunt sounding as Duchess Simmel praises the man's helpfulness while he laughs nervously. Duchess Simmel suggests wrapping up the late-night banquet and thanks everyone for their long attendance. Duke Simmel looks away silently, his expression troubled and tense following the evening's strange events. A lone voice calls out to their spouse beneath the light of the grand chandelier.
Duke Simmel tells his wife she was too aggressive toward the guests who saved Eloise.
The Duchess suggests they stop being suspicious and focus on catching the person who attacked Eloise.
Duke Simmel admits his own doubts but insists they must find the culprit without exposing Eloise.
Duchess Simmel stands with her back to him, coldly stating she already knows the culprit.
A rhythmic dun sounding as Duchess Simmel reveals she instigated the assassination, causing the Duke to react in shock.
Flashbacks reveal the Duchess wanted to use a staged attack to keep Eloise from the palace.
Duke Simmel is horrified, asking how she could subject their own daughter to such danger.
The Duke shouts about the trauma this will cause, while the Duchess remains cold and firm.
A rhythmic chills sounding as the Duchess claims she simply did what her daughter wanted.
Duke Simmel stares at his wife in pure disbelief, his face pale from her confession.
Eloise overhears the argument from outside the door, her face shadowed with growing, intense horror.
A rhythmic thump sounding as Duke Simmel asks how their daughter will handle such trauma.
The girl is paralyzed by the memory of her mother confessing to the assassination plot.
A rhythmic dash sounding as Eloise flees through the halls, gasping in horror that her mother tried to kill her.
A rhythmic thump sounding as Eloise wonders how trying to kill her could possibly be for her benefit.
A rhythmic dash sounding as the princess runs through the dark palace, wondering what to do. The moon shines through the balcony windows of the quiet palace as the night deepens.
A rhythmic sounding as a long, tired sigh echoes up toward the bedroom ceiling.
A rhythmic wide awake sounding as Luce sits up in bed, unable to find any sleep.
Luce reflects on Love's behavior and the Duchess's hostility, feeling overwhelmed by her many worries.
A rhythmic spring sounding as a sudden knock on the door makes Luce sit up instantly.
A familiar voice asks to enter the room, leaving Luce surprised by the unexpected late visitor.
A rhythmic creak sounding as the heavy double doors to the bedroom are pushed open.
Eloise enters the room and Luce is shocked to see the young noblewoman visiting so late.
Eloise explains she dropped by because she had something important to tell her savior tonight.
A rhythmic glance, sounding as Luce asks if the girl really has something to say to her. A rhythmic sit, sounding as the blonde girl folds her hands and takes a seat.
Eloise asks if she can have a moment of the red-haired girl's time to talk privately. Eloise apologizes for her mother's inappropriate behavior during the formal dinner earlier that same evening.
Luce kindly replies that she understands why the Duchess would be shocked by the rescue incident. A rhythmic flinch, sounding as Alois reacts strongly to the mention of a mother's concern. A rhythmic startled, sounding as Alois insists Luce should be angry about being blamed for everything. A rhythmic halt, sounding as the blonde girl suddenly stops, her expression becoming very somber.
Eloise offers an apology for her mother, while Luce wonders why she is being so defensive.
Luce expresses her gratitude to the blonde girl, noting how much better she feels now.
Lady Eloise listens silently, her large pink eyes reflecting a deep sense of inner turmoil.
Alois asks about the red-haired girl's arm injury, and Luce assures her she used ointment.
Luce reveals her medical studies as she explains the origin of the homemade ointment to Luce.
Luce explains her interest in pharmacology stems from a desire to help her childhood friend, Lev. Eloise asks for clarification, confirming if the friend she mentioned is indeed the young man, Levinus. The blonde noblewoman questions the depth of their relationship, and Luce confirms they are best friends.
Luce is visibly shocked when Alois asks about Lev's heritage and status as a bastard son.
Eloise insists that the young man was clearly being untruthful during their conversation at the banquet. The girl remains certain that the young man's noble lineage is far too obvious to hide. A memory of the dark-haired boy dining surfaces as Alois recalls seeing his face somewhere before. Eloise looks at Luce with pity, asking if she truly knows nothing about her friend's past.
Luce recalls Love's sudden move and begins to wonder if there is truth to the girl's claims.
Luce looks down sadly, admitting that she genuinely has no knowledge of any secret noble background. A sudden rise, sounding as Aloise stands up, claiming she only shared this out of concern. The noblewoman warns Luce that trusting someone who is not being fully honest is a mistake. Luce smiles warmly, explaining that she trusts Lev will tell her everything when he feels ready.
Alois is taken aback, questioning why she would trust someone who is actively keeping secrets from her.
The red-haired girl looks away thoughtfully, her resolve slightly wavering as she considers her friend's behavior.
A rhythmic clench, sounding as Luce realizes Lev likely has a very good reason for his silence. An image of Lev appears as Luce reflects on how he always prioritizes her safety over himself.
Luce looks ahead with a gentle smile, deciding that she will simply trust him and wait patiently.
Eloise stares at her savior in silence, looking completely stunned by the girl's unwavering and selfless devotion. The quiet night air carries the heavy realization that choosing to trust is often a difficult path. The two girls face each other in the dim room, the emotional weight between them feeling tangible. Luce admits that simple trust is the only thing she can offer her friend at this time. A rhythmic clench, sounding as a voice wonders how anyone could trust another person so completely. Eloise looks distressed, asking how Luce can maintain such a high level of trust in anyone else.
Luce is surprised as the blonde girl's voice shakes with an intense and growing emotional pain.
Eloise asks what she would do if a trusted person did something that made no sense. A rhythmic teary, sounding as Alois asks how to handle the pain of a broken, vanished trust. Luce looks at her guest in shock, realizing the conversation is no longer about Lev's hidden secrets. Luce explains she would first seek out the reason, as things are often just a tragic misunderstanding. Luce says she wouldn't regret her trust and would simply find someone new to believe in instead. Eloise asks who is left to trust, and Luce suggests she should start by trusting herself. Luce gently explains that while others might fail you, a person can never truly betray themselves. Eloise is awestruck by the red-haired girl's strength, realizing she has a much more resilient spirit. A rhythmic turn, sounding as Eloise thanks her and prepares to leave with a clearer mind. The blonde girl offers her full assistance in the future as a way to show her gratitude. A rhythmic step, sounding as Eloise formally swears to help Luce whenever she might need it. Luce smiles and accepts the offer, though she privately wonders if she will ever actually need help. The scene shifts to the bright morning sun shining over the magnificent and ornate palace grounds. A rhythmic da-dun, sounding as Duchess Samel smiles coldly and asks Luce about her sleep.
A rhythmic swoosh, sounding as the scene reveals the Duchess and Luce having tea together outside.
A voice calls out that it is time for Eloise to act as the tension rises. A rhythmic poke, sounding as the Duchess offers cake and mocks the girl's previous allergy claim. Luce laughs nervously, wondering how she managed to end up in this extremely uncomfortable social situation. A flashback shows a maid informing Luce that the Duchess has personally invited her to morning tea. Luce looks stiff as the maid explains it is meant to be a friendly chat among women. Luce realizes that the Duchess likely wants to continue the aggressive interrogation they started the night before. The Duchess explains that Aurelio and Sir Franz won't return until the afternoon at the earliest. A maid winks while informing Luce that Lev has already been taken away for the morning. Luce wonders how the Duchess schemed so effectively while politely asking the woman for an escort. A rhythmic drip sounding as the Duchess mocks Luce's allergy while the girl laments her predicament. A rhythmic prick sounding as Luce explains her rash subsided quickly, much to the Duchess's relief.
The Duchess notes the previous night's ending was unpleasant and thanks Luce for this private conversation.
Luce notes Lady Aluce's lateness, but the Duchess suggests they begin their private talk regardless. A rhythmic clatter sounding as the Duchess admits she is uneasy due to the current situation. The Duchess sips her tea while Luce wonders if the woman is walking on eggshells. The Duchess mentions the imperial family's poor mood, prompting Luce to ask if something is wrong. Looking out at the garden, the Duchess notes that things are no longer what they were. Luce looks surprised at the mention of imperial pressure and wonders what is truly going on. The Duchess sips her tea again, calling the imperial family's recent behavior unusual and difficult to assume. Luce looks on in silence, processing the heavy information the Duchess is sharing about the palace. Narration explains that with the appearance of House Simmel, the original novel story may not have started. Luce observes the scenery and suspects that another unknown force might be involved in recent events. The Duchess asks if anything comes to mind, and Luce suggests there could be a hidden mage. An image of a cloaked, laughing mage appears as Luce considers the possibility of a secret mastermind.
The Duchess stares back with a blank, confused expression at the mention of a surviving mage.
The Duchess calls the idea stupid, noting mages were exterminated, while Luce laughs at her own suggestion. A rhythmic groan, sounding as Luce realizes the novel's plot requires a mage to function correctly. The Duchess stares intently, suggesting the late Emperor might have spared someone he viewed as a dog. Luce is left speechless by the Duchess's cold and unsettling implication regarding the Emperor's past mercy. The Duchess thanks Luce for the story and hopes she enjoys her stay despite Aloise's absence. The Duchess smiles knowingly, asking Luce if she ever actually promised that Aloise would join them. Luce realizes the empty chair was a prop as the Duchess laughs at her successful social manipulation. A rhythmic turn sounding as the Duchess asks if Luce has lived in Sinon her whole life. The brown-haired woman looks away, concluding that she must have been mistaken about her earlier suspicions. The Duchess mentions that Luce's face looks oddly familiar, leaving the red-haired girl feeling very unsettled. A new day dawning, shifting the scene as the bright morning sun fills the sky. A waterfall cascades through the lush green mountains as a frustrated voice echoes across the valley. Sir Franz laments losing his target again and suggests he and Levinus try a different hunting spot. The sun shines through the dense canopy of the quiet forest as the hunting party moves on. Franz notes the Duke's dislike of hunting, and Levinus confirms the Duchess forced him to attend. Franz spots a deer in the distance and encourages Levinus to take the next shot himself. Light glimmers through the trees as the two men focus on the prey ahead of them. Sir Franz complains that Levinus is dragging out the shot while the deer is still wary.
Aiming his rifle, Levinus listens as Franz warns him to tell Lucette the truth about his past.
Franz insists that if Levinus keeps secrets indefinitely, Lucette might eventually run away from him. Levinus's red eye narrows as he gazes at the deer, his mind heavy with Franz's difficult advice. A flock of birds takes flight from the trees, startled by the sudden movement in the forest. Sir Franz sighs as the deer escapes, while Levinus remains silent and deeply lost in thought. A rhythmic swoosh sounding as Franz teases the boy for waiting too long to take the shot. A rhythmic rattle sounding as the carriage travels, and Luce celebrates that they are finally going home. A rhythmic droop sounding as a tired Luce tells Lev her energy was drained by the Duchess. Despite her exhaustion, Luce considers the visit a success while reflecting on her time at the palace.
Luce recalls the Duchess's comment about her familiar face and looks at a portrait of her father.
Luce stares ahead with wide eyes, wondering if her father had some secret connection to the Duchess. Sir Franz looks out the carriage window and asks why the village area appears so bright red. A rhythmic spring sounding as they realize a fire is raging in the direction of the village. Luce watches in horror as her home burns, desperately urging the carriage driver to hurry. A flare sounding as the red-haired girl dashes toward the thick smoke and rising flames. Standing in shock before the inferno, Luce asks how it's possible that her house is burning. A blaze and flare sounding as the girl stares helplessly at the engulfed wooden structure. A snap sounding as Luce wonders if the fire was a tragic accident or intentional arson. A woman with short hair calls out to Luce, warning her to stay away from the danger. A halt sounding as Luce asks Aunt Dahlia about her mother's whereabouts and work schedule. A thump sounding as Dahlia reveals the mother stayed home sick, sending Luce into a panic. It turns sounding as the girl ignores the warnings and rushes toward the collapsing house.
A step sounding as Luce fears the supports will collapse before she can save her mother.
A grab sounding as Lev holds her back, warning she'll be devoured by the flames too. Luce pleads with her friend, refusing to simply stand by while her mother is trapped inside. A yank sounding as the girl tries to break free from Lev's firm and protective grip. A rumble sounding as a bystander warns the crowd to flee from the collapsing building. A grab sounding as Lev shields the red-haired girl from a massive explosion of fire. A thud sounding as the two fall back safely while the house is completely engulfed. A whoosh sounding as Lev checks if she's hurt, repeating how dangerous the situation was. Luce clings to her friend and sobs, asking Lev what she's supposed to do now. A blaze sounding as Luce reflects on how Chelsea helped her settle into this world. Luce recalls a peaceful time in the forest, realizing her happiness was entirely due to Chelsea. A clack sounding as the young girl remembers a quiet moment touching a wooden chest. Luce recalls asking her mother how she would feel if they moved to the capital. A sigh sounding as Chelsea notes the girl's sudden desire to leave their forest home. The brown-haired woman smiles warmly, telling her daughter she will succeed anywhere she chooses. Chelsea gives her enthusiastic approval, confidently stating that Luce is truly her own daughter. A pat sounding as a gentle hand rests on the red-haired girl's head in affection. Chelsea asks if her daughter will remember her even if she leaves for the city. Luce laughs and promises that she could never forget the woman who raised her. A hug sounding as Luce reflects on how real and tender her mother's love was. Returning to the present, Lev stares at his grieving friend with a somber and focused expression. Luce weeps for her lost home, her tears shimmering in the light of the fire. A whisper sounding as village women comment on the intensity and tragedy of the massive fire. Lev watches the inferno, thinking to himself that the entire house will surely burn down. A blaze and pop sounding as Lev realizes nothing will be identifiable once it is ash. The scene shifts to a peaceful building standing under a bright and clear morning sky. Lev holds a tray of soup, asking Luce if she truly cannot eat anything yet. Luce sits in bed while Lev notes with concern that she hasn't eaten in 3 days. Luce apologizes for her lack of appetite and asks to be left alone for a while. Lev tells her he is all right and encourages his friend to get some more rest. A clack sounding as Lev leaves the tray, offering to reheat the soup for her later. A shut sounding as the heavy wooden door closes, leaving the girl in complete solitude. Luce remains sitting in her bed, her head bowed in deep and overwhelming sorrow. A drip sounding as a single tear falls from the grieving girl's eye. A sniffle and sob sounding as Luce finally buries her face in her hands. A hand reaches for the door handle in the corridor outside, but hesitates to enter. Love stands alone in the hallway, listening to his friends crying with a downcast look. A clinch sounding as Lev concludes that the house fire definitely was not an accident. Lev recalls the hooded woman's reckless plan to hide Luce from the search of House Menelik. A turn sounding as Lev prepares to leave the door, his mind made up. A step sounding as Lev walks away, reflecting on how much Luce is suffering. Chelsea's image fades into white petals as the narrator questions the heartlessness of mothers. A young Aurelio reaches out toward the light, lamenting that some things disappear forever. Aurelio mumbles that they never should have existed, his expression shadowed by deep resentment. A rhythmic step, sounding as Aurelio walks down the dark and quiet manor hallway. Aurelio stops abruptly, his red eyes widening behind his glasses at a sudden realization. Confirming his path, a rhythmic step, sounding as Aurelio heads toward a specific room. Standing before a heavy wooden door, Aurelio realizes he has found a viable method. A rhythmic clack, sounding as the boy stands resolutely before the locked entranceway. Aurelio demands that Labdanum show himself, his face illuminated by a faint and eerie glow. A rhythmic whoosh, sounding as the cloaked mage appears and greets His Highness casually. Aurelio requests to ask one thing, and the silver-haired mage invites him to proceed. Labdanum gazes intently, noting that his magical capabilities extend far beyond mere prophecies. Labdanum offers to grant any wish for a price, a dark smile crossing his face. The mage waits for the boy to speak his desire while Aurelio remains deeply conflicted. Aurelio requests to erase Chelsea's existence while the mage responds with a sinister grin. A rhythmic thump sounding as the plan to erase memories from the villagers begins. Luce sits up in bed looking distant and pale as the magical deal unfolds. Labdanum repeats the request to confirm that the boy truly wants to erase the past. The massive house fire rages in a memory, the flames consuming everything in their path. Labdanum asks for final confirmation as he stands before the bed where Luce rests. Aurelia looks away with a somber expression and confirms that he wants to proceed. A rhythmic touch sounding as Aurelio strokes Luce's hair, noting she cannot endure more suffering. Labdanum agrees it's better she forgets, noting Chelsea originally planned to erase her own existence. Labdanum suggests making it as if she never existed, but Aurelio decides that's unnecessary. A rhythmic swish sounding as Aurelio recalls Chelsea's warning about House Menelik searching for Luce.
Aurelia worries that changing her movements drastically might allow the imperial family to track them. A rhythmic lift sounding as Labdanum raises his clawed hand to begin the magical ritual.
A rhythmic extend sounding as the mage asks Master Aurelio to commence their dark deal.
A rhythmic gulp sounding as Aurelio prepares himself for the heavy cost of the magic.
Labdanum assumes the boy knows the price, and Aurelio confirms his awareness of the sacrifice.
A rhythmic glance sounding as Aurelio accepts that the mage will take his most precious possession. Looking at his sleeping friend, Aurelio suspects the mage is not referring to Luz herself.
Aurelio declares he is ready to face the consequences and finalize the magical contract.
Labdanum commands the magic to begin as a blinding white light erupts within the room.
A rhythmic whir sounding as magic swirls around Luz, guided by Labdanum's glowing hand.
Glowing leaves of light wrap around the sleeping girl as the memory erasure takes hold.
A rhythmic room and float sounding as Luz is lifted high into the air.
A rhythmic clench sounding as Aurelio offers up anything that belongs solely to him.
A rhythmic swoosh sounding as the boy declares his own losses don't matter besides Luz.
Aurelio stares into the intense light, his eyes reflecting the power of the unfolding spell.
A rhythmic shh sounding as Aurelio panics, seeing Luz's hair turn from red to gold.
A rhythmic whoosh sounding as the mage explains the color change is a harmless side effect.
A memory surfaces of young Aurelio training with a sword against a skilled, older warrior.
Aurelio reflects that nothing is too precious to give up for the sake of his friend.
In a happy memory, Aurelio holds a strawberry cake while standing in a blooming garden.
Aurelio recalls hugging Luz tightly, realizing he has never felt such a profound connection.
Luz smiles warmly in the golden memory, her eyes closed in a moment of peace.
A rhythmic swirl sounding as the memory fades, and Aurelio returns to the blinding present.
Aurelio bows his head and closes his eyes, accepting the finality of his choice. A rhythmic beam sounding as the golden magic light bursts out from the window.
A blinding divine light erupts with a sudden flash, sounding as the magical ritual concludes. The golden radiance spreads over the landscape, weaving the spell of memory erasure across the village.
Standing within the fading light, Aurelio asks the mage what was taken from him as payment.
Labdanum laughs darkly, his amusement echoing as he prepares to depart from the young prince's side. Looking down at the sleeping girl, Aurelio mumbles that the cost was insignificant by his standards. The silver-haired mage bids farewell to his highness, vanishing into the air as the spell settles.
Morning sunlight spills through the bedroom window as a soft, rhythmic chirp sounding fills the air.
Stretching in the warm light, blonde-haired Luz wonders why she slept so deeply and peacefully last night.
The girl's eyes sparkle with newfound clarity as she wakes up feeling refreshed in her cozy room.
Looking around at her peaceful surroundings, Luz reflects that her sleep felt like a very long dream. Lev enters with a tray of hot soup, asking his friend if she is finally awake yet.
Luz smiles brightly at her friend, offering a cheerful good morning from the comfort of her bed.
Adjusting his glasses, Lev returns the greeting with a soft and relieved look on his face. Luz asks why he brought the food to her room, wondering if she missed the entire morning. The blonde girl laughs, apologizing for causing trouble by oversleeping so deeply like the other day. A quick clack sounding as Lev sets down the tray, questioning what she meant by the other day. A heavy thump sounding as Lev listens to her false memories regarding a visit to a castle.
Luz explains her surprise at waking up home after blacking out during their supposed carriage ride together.
Feeling a bit embarrassed, Luz admits she's just training for the Olympic sleeping team at this rate.
Luz decides she needs to work on her stamina and apologizes for being such a heavy burden.
Luz reflects on her old house collapsing in the rain, unaware of the actual fire and tragedy.
The girl mentions finding a new place to stay, but Lev quickly reassures her it is unnecessary.
Lev explains that he doesn't use the room anyway and is happy as ever.
A soft step sounding as the boy approaches the bed where the blonde girl is sitting comfortably.
A tender brush sounding as Lev touches her cheek, catching the surprised girl off guard with affection. Lev smiles warmly, stating that he is genuinely happy with the way things are right now.
Luz blushes and looks away, thanking her friend for saying such kind and supportive things.
Luz asks for a second to get ready so she can join him downstairs for the meal.
A creak sounding as the bed shifts and a soft whoo sounding as Luz exhales in relief. Resting her hand on the bed, Luz thinks to herself that Lev has such a good heart.
Narration reflects that despite having no family or friends, Lev is always so considerate of her.
Luz realizes that without his constant support, she would have struggled immensely to live her life. Looking at a framed image, the girl reminds herself she must find a way to survive independently.
A light fidget sounding as Luz touches her hair, wondering if it has grown a little longer.
A rhythmic step sounding as Lev walks away down the hallway, his mind focused on his plans.
Lev reflects on the success of the magical deal that altered the memories of those around them.
A dark grin crossing his face as Lev concludes that as long as she never knows, it's settled.
The scene shifts to Senon Village months later, where a woman thanks Luz for her hard work.
Working in a shop, the blonde girl smiles and notes that the day's tasks weren't too difficult. The shopkeeper wonders why business is so busy lately, feeling like she recently lost an important employee. The woman asks Luce if everything is all right with her, noticing her friend's quiet and thoughtful mood. Luce reveals her plan to move out soon, feeling like she has been a burden for too long. The shopkeeper asks how Lev is doing, noting she hasn't seen the boy around the village lately. The woman smiles and comments that Lev is a timid but good kid who she misses seeing.
The shopkeeper asks Luce if she and Lev have any plans for the upcoming quiet evening.
The woman mentions Dietrich's return to the capital and invites them to a small going-away party tonight. Luce smiles and confirms that the gathering is at the shopkeeper's house before accepting the invitation. A jingle sounding from the door as the woman bids Luce farewell until they meet later that evening.
A rhythmic step sounding as Luce walks through the village, noting how peace has returned to her.
A soft squeeze sounding as Luce grips her bag strap, hoping everything is okay with her friend Lev.
Luce's frustration mounts as she reflects on a serious situation unfolding before her.
Luce waits by the window at night, noting that Lev has been returning home quite late.
Watching him leave, the girl laments that her friend no longer shares his daily activities with her. Tears fall as Luce's sorrow is heard through a soft drip sounding, admitting Lev feels changed. A tall windmill stands prominently against a bright, cloud-filled sky during a calm, sunny afternoon. A boy falls onto the grass with a sudden, loud crash sounding while yelping in pain. Vincent accuses Lev of pushing him, but the dark-haired boy coldly tells him to watch his mouth. Lev's expression darkens as he acknowledges he knows who is responsible for the rumors about Luce. With glowing red eyes, Lev threatens to cut out Vincent's tongue for insulting his dear friend. Walking away, Luce's heart sinks with a rhythmic step sounding as she reflects on Lev's newfound aggression. A distorted vision of a building engulfed in flames suggests that a tragic event has occurred. A sudden, painful throb sounding causes Luce to clutch her head in distress as she struggles. Luce begins to fall, but a quick grab sounding occurs as Lev catches her and calls her name. Lev asks the girl if she is all right, catching her off guard with his sudden, protective concern. Under a clear sky, Luce asks if he came to fetch her, and he simply confirms. A soft swoosh sounding passes as Lev worries that her frequent collapses mean she is actually ill. Luce insists she is fine, claiming she merely stumbled and is not suffering from any sickness. Looking at her childhood friend, Luce wonders when the kindest person in the world became so unfamiliar. Wooden mugs strike together with a loud clack sounding as the group celebrates with a cheerful toast. Friends at the tavern tease Dietrich about sending gifts from the capital while Lev watches them. An annoyed Lev gives Dietrich a frantic shake sounding, telling him to go in his place instead.
Dietrich desperately begs for a semester of freedom while Luce watches the chaotic scene unfold.
Luce laughs at Dietrich's reluctance while Lev suspects there might be alcohol in their fruit juice. The girl takes a long drink from her wooden mug while observing the lively tavern atmosphere. Luce reflects on the joy surrounding her, feeling it has been ages since she enjoyed such noise. Luce's green eyes widen as a quick glance sounding captures her sudden curiosity toward her friend. Looking at Lev, the girl silently wonders what thoughts are truly crossing her old friend's mind. A focused glance sounding highlights Lev's intense, red-eyed gaze as he looks back through his glasses. Lev performs a sudden lean sounding toward Luce, asking if there is something on his face. Overwhelmed and blushing, the flustered girl stammers out a frantic apology to her curious dark-haired friend. Looking at the mug, Lev concludes that the cherry juice has likely fermented into actual alcohol. A floral border frames the observation that the girl's cheeks have become quite flushed from drinking. A gentle tap sounding occurs as Lev touches her cheek, causing Luce to question her state. Lev suggests they step outside for fresh air to help her feel better, and she agrees. A cool whoosh sounding accompanies them outside as Luce admits the fermented juice has made her drunk. The two friends sit together in the quiet night, the atmosphere between them thick with unspoken words. Luce calls out to her friend as fireflies dance under the moonlight by the old village houses. A soft swoosh sounding passes as Lev offers an apology, leaving the girl feeling quite confused. Luce confesses that the truth is he has started to feel like a stranger to her lately. She recounts his late nights and his uncharacteristic aggression toward Vincent, expressing her deep, growing surprise. Luce admits she feels she has missed something important but doesn't know what it could be. A bright, warm vision of a smiling, orange-haired woman appears as a fleeting memory from elsewhere. Luce continues, explaining her feelings of distance and the loneliness that has recently started to plague her. Lev calls her name as a faint sparkle sounding highlights her wide-eyed, expectant look of surprise. A soft bump sounding occurs as Lev presses his forehead to her, startling the young girl. A firm grasp sounding accompanies Lev's hand on hers as he reassures her that nothing has changed. He explains his absences and his anger toward Vincent, insisting it was all for her sake.
A gentle kiss sounding lands on her forehead as Lev promises to always be by her side.
Overcome with emotion, a sudden blush sending colors through Luce's face as she stares at him in shock. Smiling warmly, Lev encourages Luce to tell him if she ever feels uneasy about him again.
Love asks Luce to look at her necklace, and she lifts the silver jewelry with a look of mild surprise.
A close-up reveals the pendant is shaped like a crocus flower, its petals shimmering under the soft light.
Their fingers brush as Lev reaches out, stating that the flower represents the profound joy of trust between them.
Blushing deeply behind his glasses, Lev confesses that his feelings for her have remained unchanged since they first met.
A rhythmic ba-doom sounding fills the air as Luce stares at him, her heart racing at his unexpected admission.
Thinking to herself, the blonde girl reflects on how her friend has always shown her nothing but kindness.
Memories of childhood surface, showing a young Lev smiling warmly and hugging a young red-haired girl with genuine affection. In another memory, the boy presents a gift box containing the crocus necklace to the delighted red-haired child.
The scene shifts back to a younger Lev kneeling before his friend, illustrating his long-standing devotion to her.
Returning to the present, Luce looks at their peaceful home in the village, hoping their quiet life continues.
A rhythmic creak sounding as Luce opens the front door, announcing her return as she enters with a smile.
A rhythmic step sounding as she walks through the quiet house, wondering why her friend hasn't greeted her yet. Luce leans into a room, calling out for Lev, but the silence within the house begins to feel unsettling. Standing before an empty room, she realizes her assumption about their future was far from the truth. The blonde girl's eyes widen in shock as she discovers something that shatters her peaceful reality. A rhythmic drop sounding as Luce lets her bag fall to the floor, her voice trembling as she calls out. The scene shifts to a site of carnage where Labdanum notes the bloodbath, addressing the boy as a prince. In a somber light, it is revealed that the boy known as Lev is actually the crown prince. A rhythmic dot-dun sounding as Aurelio Lavinus Hadassah looks on with cold, red eyes, his true identity fully exposed.
At the imperial palace in the Vladan Empire, a courtier urges His Majesty to reach a final decision immediately. Inside the throne room, nobles argue that the illegitimate prince's continued presence puts the entire imperial authority at risk. A rhythmic stomp sounding echoes through the grand hallway as heavy armored footsteps approach the council chamber doors.
A pink-haired woman listens as the nobles whisper that the mission to Peter Duchy was meant to be fatal. A rhythmic burst sounding as Aurelio throws the doors open, returning alive despite the court's treacherous expectations for him. The pink-haired woman is visibly shaken as Aurelius' intense, red-eyed gaze meets hers across the silent, tense room. A rhythmic flinch sounding as the terrified nobles recoil, unable to believe the prince has returned so quickly. A rhythmic step sounding as Aurelio walks down the long carpet, casually asking the woman if she has been well. A rhythmic whip and thud sounding as the prince tosses a heavy bag onto the table before the council. Aurelio formally introduces himself as the first crown prince, announcing that he has successfully forced the Peter Duchy surrender.
Disbelieving murmurs fill the room as the nobles struggle to comprehend how an invincible fortress fell so quickly.
The pink-haired woman demands silence, her voice cutting through the chaotic whispering of the shocked nobleman. A rhythmic, silent sounding settles over the chamber as everyone waits for the high-ranking woman to address the prince. Mastering her composure, the woman commends Aurelio for his victory, noting it will bring great glory to the empire. She promises a reward for his service, but Aurelio interrupts, stating he has a specific request regarding his compensation. The woman's expression becomes guarded and suspicious as she grants the prince permission to state his desired reward. Aurelio reflects on his long service on the front lines while the emperor was ill and his brother was young. The pink-haired woman remains silent as Aurelio emphasizes that it was an honor to serve his nation for so long. A rhythmic press sounding as the prince touches his shoulder, claiming he was injured during the intense recent battles. Looking his superior in the eye, Aurelio requests to recover in the privacy of the detached castle for a time. The council members react with pure shock, their faces paling at the mention of the exclusive imperial residence. A noble shouts in outrage, questioning how the prince dares to request entrance into such a sacred, symbolic place. He argues that the castle is reserved for the future crown princess and is off-limits to someone like him. Aurelio counters by pointing out that the second prince broke his engagement, leaving the castle vacant and its purpose postponed. The noblemen gasp and stutter, left speechless by the prince's cold logic and his knowledge of the broken engagement. Aurelio reflects on his years of participation in wars, noting the palace has only ever given him a small office. The pink-haired woman stares ahead as Aurelio asks her to show mercy and grant his request for the castle. A rhythmic creak sounding as the massive doors are pushed open, signaling the end of the tense imperial meeting. A rhythmic clack sounding as the doors shut behind Aurelio, leaving him alone in the quiet, dim hallway. A rhythmic sigh sounding as the prince leans his head back against the wood, finally letting his exhaustion show.
A rhythmic appear sounding as labdanum materializes, noting that the prince will finally be able to find some rest.
Aurelio acknowledges the obvious plots against him and begins to change the subject of conversation. Looking at his companion, Aurelio asks Labdanum if the emperor's condition is still not showing improvement.
A gentle smile sounding as Labdanum dismisses the query, noting that such matters fall outside his jurisdiction.
Aurelio reflects on his successful establishment within the palace walls, despite the heavy stigma of his illegitimacy.
In a memory, younger Aurelio asks a noblewoman for an army, prompting her concern about imperial enmity.
Aurelio declares that Vladan Empire's history will change soon, leaving the woman visibly stunned by his ambition. Chaos erupts as the emperor descends into madness, causing a rebellion that the weak empress cannot handle. Kneeling before his superior, Aurelio requests permission to lead the war for the emperor and second prince. With a determined gaze, Aurelio vows to bring ultimate glory and victory to the great Vladan Empire. A heavy shadow descends over the palace as the scene shifts through the passage of time. Labdanum watches from the shadows, noting that none of these grand achievements would have ever been possible.
He reflects that their success was entirely dependent on the specific contract made with the red-haired girl.
Labdanum questions why the prince isn't resting, but Aurelio insists he must go see someone immediately.
A sudden turn sounding as Aurelio explains he has been waiting for this specific moment for many years.
Aurelio thinks of a future where they are never separated again, while Labdanum observes him with amusement.
Labdanum takes his leave for the day as Aurelio walks toward his private quarters in the castle.
Bidding the prince a restful night, Labdanum watches as Aurelio enters his room to finally find peace. Abandoned armor rests on the table as a tranquil silence finally settles over the prince's private chambers. A soft touch sounding as the bandaged prince notes that his physical recovery is progressing much slower now. Aurelio sits alone, admitting he overdid his efforts in his desperate rush to return to her side. Cold, red eyes stare forward as the prince reflects on the intensity of his long, arduous journey. He thinks to himself that 3 years was such an agonizingly long time to spend in total isolation. Resting his chin on his hand, Aurelio gazes longingly at a snow globe containing a miniature village house. A soft smile touches his lips as he looks forward to his long-awaited reunion with his friend. The miniature house inside the snow globe sparkles, representing the home he left behind in Sinan village. A rhythmic knock sounding echoes through a quiet house as an unexpected visitor arrives at the front door. Startled from her work, the blonde girl in the green dress looks up at the sudden noise. Luz calls out that she is coming as she prepares to see who is at the door. A rhythmic step sounding as Luz walks down the stairs, wondering who would visit at such an hour. She considers that her usual business associates have already visited or aren't expected until much later next week.
A sudden realization strikes Luz, and her eyes widen with a flicker of desperate hope and anticipation. A quick dash sounding as Luz hurries down the remaining steps, her heart racing with a singular thought. Luz wonders if Lev has finally returned to her as she reaches the large wooden front door. A sudden burst sounding as Luz throws the door open, calling out a name with breathless, hopeful excitement. Staring at the guest, Luz's expression falters as she questions if the person before her is actually her friend. Standing outside the beautiful village home, the visitor denies her hope, stating that they are not the person expected. A sharp clack sounding as a teacup is placed down, and Luz asks what brought her guest today. A delicate sip sounding as the blonde Lady Eloise sips her tea before Luz addresses her by name. Eloise asks Luz how she has been lately, catching the blonde girl off guard with the casual inquiry. Eloise recounts Luz's busy routine as a pharmacist during the day and a medicine developer at night. She continues her assessment, noting that Luz rarely leaves the house and seemingly lacks any personal hobbies. A sharp stab sounding as Eloise points out that Luz's life has become a stagnant, unchanging daily routine. Luz asks if she came to nag her, but Eloise explains she is simply frustrated by the situation. A soft clench sounding as Eloise asks how many years Luz intends to spend waiting for Levinus's return. Memories of a younger Luz standing in an empty room surface, recalling how all his belongings had vanished. In the past, Eloise told Luz that her mother claimed no boy with that name ever even existed.
Luz reflects that failing to find him, even with a duchess's resources, suggested Lev was never real.
Eloise admits she knows the truth, but her expression remains serious as she looks at her troubled friend. A soft clench sounding as Luz grips her pendant, her mind racing with thoughts of her missing friend. The girl realizes that although she thought he had vanished forever, the truth might be far more complex. Luz sits alone in a bright, ethereal space, staring pensively at a single, mysterious letter. Sitting across from her friend, Luz explains that she cannot reply because she lacks an address. A side view of Lady Eloise shows her listening with a calm and sympathetic expression. Addressing Luz by name, Eloise reveals she has traveled there today to ask for a favor.
A sudden, intense focus falls on Luce as she looks up, surprised by her friend's request. A sharp jolt sounding vibrates through the chandelier as Luce reacts with sheer shock to the news. Luce questions the suddenness of a trip to the capital, while Eloise mentions her mother's instructions.
Eloise describes an upcoming imperial auction, expressing a clear need to purchase a specific item there.
She explains the auction is a loyalty test, requiring participants to bid with perfect, strategic precision. With hopeful, praying hands, Eloise begs Luce to accompany her, praising the girl's sharp perception.
A sepia-toned memory flickers of a young girl reaching out toward a boy in the sunlight.
A nervous ha-ha sounding escapes Luce as she tries to dismiss her unsettling memories as mere coincidence.
Using an adorable pleading expression, Eloise admits she is not confident enough to go alone.
A heavy groan sounding escapes Luce as she worries about getting entangled in the original tragic story. Eloise looks back over her shoulder, enigmatically suggesting that one can never truly know the future. A close-up of a green eye reflects the bright morning light as a decision is finally made. The scene shifts to the bright blue skies and rooftops of the bustling imperial capital city.
A rhythmic clip-clop sounding follows the ornate carriage as it travels down the sunlit cobblestone road. Wearing a new checkered dress, Luce doubts her own fashion sense despite being on the way.
Inside the carriage, Eloise enthusiastically promises to repay Luce properly for agreeing to help her today. A soft drip sounding accompanies Lucie's internal shame for being so easily swayed by her friend's request. Eloise excitedly points out the window, noticing that the grand imperial palace is finally within view.
A rhythmic clip-clop sounding echoes as the carriage approaches the massive, towering spires of the palace.
Staring in awe, Luce marvels at the sheer height and extravagance of the empire's symbolic heart. A flicker of hope crosses Luce's mind as she wonders if this journey will reunite her with love.
Eloise notes the palace has been unusually busy lately due to brewing issues regarding the imperial succession.
Rumors of the emperor's illness and a first prince's return from war paint a picture of instability. Luce inquires about the crown prince's status, but Eloise describes the situation as being quite awkward. Hearing about the two warring political factions, Luce realizes the scenario matches a story she once knew. She recalls a tale where a jealous older prince marries the female lead for cold political gain. Luce looks at Eloise, realizing her friend is actually the female lead from that tragic original story. The story's end warns of a tragic romance that concludes with the deaths of all involved.
A sudden dud-dun sounding mirrors Luce's mounting terror as the pieces of the puzzle fall together.
Panicking, Luce screams for the carriage to turn around immediately, confusing her friend with her sudden outburst. A long groan sounding escapes the girl as she fears Eloise meeting the prince will trigger hell. A soft flutter sounding passes by the stone walls of a high balcony overlooking the busy streets. A dark crow watches as a hand holds a message confirming that Luce has finally arrived. Looking out the window, Aurelio decides he must prepare himself to properly greet the person he missed. A heavy step sounding echoes through the lush room as the prince begins his careful, calculated preparations. A quick grab sounding occurs as Aurelio reaches for a pair of glasses resting on a wooden table. Putting on his glasses, Aurelio smiles, wanting to appear exactly as she remembers him from their childhood. A sharp dun sounding highlights Luce's arrival in the capital, surrounded by blooming pink floral decorations. A bright sparkle sounding fills the air as Luce takes in the breathtaking beauty of the city's architecture. While Eloise visits the bank, Luce decides to spend her free time exploring the nearby marketplace alone. A rhythmic clack sounding accompanies the girl's steps as she wonders what she might find in town. Luce walks through the streets, her expression turning somber as she reflects on the dangerous journey ahead. Inside the carriage, Luce continues to weep and plead with her friend to return home immediately. A deep dun sounding underscores her vision of a mad tyrant burning the entire world to ash. Reverting to her composure, Luce dismisses her odd behavior, leaving Eloise with a look of pure confusion. A low rattle sounding precedes Luce asking her friend if she has ever met the princes before. A sudden thump sounding punctuates Luce's shock at the mention of a potential royal marriage. Lady Eloise laughs off the surprise, teasing the girl for being so visibly shaken. The blonde woman explains the situation is over, while Luce questions why it ended. A rattle sounding follows the explanation that the imperial family suddenly withdrew their proposal. Luce realizes that a period of internal chaos for the imperial family began then. Walking with a rhythmic step sounding, Luce reflects on the details Lady Eloise shared. Narrative panels recount the emperor falling ill and the political maneuvering for the succession. The first prince's return disrupted the plans, which Luce finds contrary to the original story. Luce remains deeply puzzled about why the second prince was involved in marriage talks. Considering the first prince's actions, Luce gives a firm nod, noting his typical tyrant behavior. With a determined step sounding, Luce vows to prevent the original story from unfolding. A sudden lean sounding startles Luce as a man with dark hair approaches her.
Luce gasps in alarm as the man performs a swift spin, sounding to face her. The blonde girl stares in stunned silence at the unexpected person standing before her. Love looks down at his old friend with a calm and gentle expression. Looking at the girl through his glasses, the red-eyed boy asks if she is okay. Luce stands frozen in the street, overwhelmed by seeing her childhood friend again. Sitting together at a table, Luce struggles to accept that he is actually there. The girl questions if she is dreaming as she observes the person in front of her. Love smiles warmly, admitting that he also did not expect this chance meeting. Luce looks away coldly, noting that she has more reason to be surprised. Looking at her tea, she points out that he vanished without a single word. Lev listens silently as she mentions the mysterious letters he sent without an address. Overcome with emotion, Luce lets out a loud yell sounding regarding how worried she was. The dark-haired boy offers a soft, patient smile in response to her outburst. Luce stares at him, her expression a mix of lingering shock and quiet realization. Lev offers a sincere apology for his abrupt departure and the anxiety it cost her. Looking at her with intense focus, he confesses that he missed her terribly. Luce is left speechless by the raw honesty of his unexpected confession. Lev acknowledges her disappointment and asks for her understanding as a soft whoosh sounding passes. The girl remains quiet, processing the weight of his words and his sudden return. Narrative text reveals her deep-seated fears of drifting apart and never seeing him again. Looking down with flushed cheeks, Luce struggles to reconcile her feelings. A heavy silence hangs between the two friends as they sit together in the courtyard. Luce asks about his activities during his absence, admitting she hasn't fully forgiven him. Lev explains he has been busy assisting a caregiver who suddenly fell ill. Luce is surprised to learn he was staying with the owner of his old house. Confused, she mentions she still lives there and was waiting for his return. The girl looks at him with a skeptical gaze, finding his story difficult to believe. Narrative panels suggest that the boy must have had a wealthy patron for that house. Luce reflects on her previous decision not to pry into his secrets or past. She admits she kept her distance because she believed it was for his benefit. A vision of an orange-haired woman appears as Luce reflects on her quiet support. Her hands give a sudden clench, sounding as she admits to her own secret sadness. The girl's face flushes as she hears him softly call her name once again. Love reaches out toward her, urging her not to worry about their future. A promising message appears, stating that they will always be together from now on. Love pulls Luce into a firm embrace, holding her close in the quiet garden. Caught in a quick glance sounding, the girl asks for confirmation of his promise. Lev offers a confident smile as he reassures her of his commitment. Love pulls Luce into a firm embrace, reiterating his promise that they will be together from now until forever. Lev stands behind Luce and places his hands on her shoulders while she sits at a small table outdoors. Luce gently places her hand over Love's gloved hand, expressing her deep desire to know more about him. As she reflects on his absence, Luce wonders about his recent activities and the thoughts he has been keeping. Luce's green eyes look directly forward as she prepares to ask a significant question about his past. Luce performs a sudden turn sounding toward Lev, calling his name softly to get his full attention. Looking at the dark-haired boy, the girl offers a gentle, expectant smile as she continues their conversation. A rhythmic step sounding echoes as the scene shifts to a bright, sunlit park within the capital city. Walking together, Luce expresses her genuine amazement at finding such a beautiful and pleasant park in the capital. Turning to her friend, the girl remarks on the park's surprising similarity to their childhood hometown. Love offers a warm, calm smile, agreeing that the two locations share a very similar and nostalgic atmosphere. Luce asks about home, and a vision confirms that Johann and the Lord are doing just fine. A nervous fidget sounding occurs as Luce prepares to share a significant update regarding her own life. Luce reveals that she has officially started working as a pharmacist in the village during his absence. Looking at her through his glasses, Lev recalls her prior studies in pharmacology, and she confirms his memory. Walking side by side, Luce asks the dark-haired boy if he understands the reason she chose to become a pharmacist. Luce explains she became a pharmacist specifically to help him, referencing the medicine he took as a child. Lev's internal thoughts reveal that the potion he was given as a child actually came from the imperial family. Memories of the strange green potion surface, which was used to control him by inducing painful withdrawal symptoms. Lev's intense red eyes focus on Luce as he begins a specific line of questioning about his health. Lev asks for detailed descriptions of his symptoms, noting that different ailments require specific medical treatments. A thoughtful ponder sounding follows as both friends consider the complexities of matching medicines to specific symptoms. Rubbing his head, Lev describes his current symptoms as a cough and a fever, asking for her advice. A quick glance sounding highlights Lev's focus as he prepares to mention another symptom to the blonde girl. A sudden swish sounding occurs as Lev adds that his heart also tends to beat very fast. A rhythmic badum sounding captures the moment Lev places Luce's hand directly over his own beating heart. Luce stares in stunned silence as the steady badum sounding of his heart continues beneath her palm.
A frantic retreat sounding accompanies Luce's flustered reaction as she promises to formulate a medication for him.
Lev looks forward to her help while a flustered Luce stands nearby with beads of sweat.
Narrative text explains that Lev will no longer be reliant on the medicines used to control him.
Lev smiles warmly, admitting he genuinely enjoys the fact that Luce is so worried about his well-being.
A soft whoosh sounding passes over the quiet rooftops as their conversation in the garden concludes.
Walking away, the dark-haired boy asks what specific reason brought the blonde-haired girl to the capital city. Luce explains that Lady Eloise personally invited her to attend a major upcoming auction in the capital. Lev mentions he will also be participating in the imperial auction while he remains in the city. Luce asks if his wealthy patron invited him, and Lev confirms the arrangement with a simple nod.
Looking at him with realization, Luce concludes that the family Lev is involved with must be very powerful. Narrative text over a crown emblem suggests the weight and influence of the imperial family involved in his life. Standing in the wide courtyard, Luce asks for reassurance that they will get to see each other again. The blonde-haired girl looks up expectantly at her friend, her face framed by soft, glowing flowers.
A firm grasp sounding accompanies Lev's hand on hers as he reaffirms his promise of their future together. Lev performs a gentle kiss sounding on Luce's hand, causing the girl to look at him in shock. A deep blush sounding colors Luce's face as she stammers out a confused response to his romantic gesture. Smiling warmly, Lev promises Luce that he will be the one waiting for her from now on. Walking together at a distance, Luce reflects on how much her childhood friend's demeanor has changed.
The blonde-haired girl looks contemplative, still trying to reconcile the Lev she knows with his new personality.
Narrative text reveals her concern that he doesn't seem like the same person from her childhood. A new scene begins as narrative text announces the arrival of the day for the imperial auction. A sharp clack sounding echoes as Luce steps forward in her formal dress, prepared for the evening's event. Dressed in their finest attire, Luce and Lady Eloise arrive at the grand auction house together.
Luce looks slightly apprehensive while standing against a background of glowing flowers and ribbons.
Expressing her discomfort to Lady Eloise, Luce admits she feels out of place in such grand surroundings. A soft whimper sounding escapes the girl as she admits her struggle to adjust to the formal environment. Panic sets in as Luce realizes she has been separated from her companion in the crowded hall. Luce looks around frantically, worrying about the whereabouts of her friend and the potential for a dangerous encounter.
A sudden, heavy bump sounding startles the girl as she accidentally collides with a tall, blonde man.
Offering a quick apology, Luce wonders why she has been so easily disoriented lately. The blonde-haired man looks at her with genuine curiosity, remarking that she seems strangely familiar. Standing together in the bright hallway, Luce finds herself wondering about the identity of the mysterious stranger. The scene expands to show the magnificent architecture of the courtyard filled with pillars and fountains. A long, silent stare sounding passes between the two as they stand together in the open courtyard. Luce politely suggests that he might be mistaken, insisting she has never met him before. A radiant, golden sparkle sounding surrounds the man as he studies the blonde-haired girl with intense focus. The man asks about her attendance at previous banquets, while she explains this is her first visit to the capital. A thoughtful sounding occurs as the chibi-style man remains convinced they have crossed paths before. A sudden, close lean sounding makes Luce jump as the man tries to verify his hunch. An intense stare sounding captures the moment as Luce feels overwhelmed by his close proximity. Looking at him more closely, Luce admits to herself that he does have a familiar quality. The girl remains deeply puzzled as the stranger continues to hint at a shared past. The blonde man mentions a specific day at a house, seeking to jog her memory. Smiling gently, he asks her directly if she recalls their previous meeting at that location. Luce looks at him with wide eyes, trying to make sense of his mention of a house. A sudden realization hits the girl as she lets out an enlightened gasp. The man gestures to his face, a vision of his childhood self appearing as he confirms his identity. He admits he did not recognize her at first because of how much she has grown. A hazy vision of a younger boy in dark clothing highlights their past connection. He mentions a specific piece of candy, recalling it as the reason for his first deep sleep. Luce beams with joy, expressing her happiness at finally getting to see him again properly. An energetic wave sounding accompanies the girl as she confirms her memories of their childhood encounter. Luce recalls Lev's prior mention of a cousin, wondering if this man is that relative. Narrative text notes his distinguished appearance and high social status among the gathered nobility. She explains her initial confusion, noting that a significant amount of time has passed since they were young. The blonde man listens intently as she continues to explain her reasons for not recognizing him immediately. He points out a specific change in her appearance that also caught him off guard. Luce looks confused, asking for clarification on his comments regarding her being in disguise. She insists her current appearance is entirely natural, while he wonders if she is wearing a wig.
A rhythmic thump sounding accompanies the memory of her hair being a different shade in the past.
Luce looks down at her teal dress, completely bewildered by his mention of the color red. A painful throb sounding causes the girl to clutch her head in sudden, sharp distress.
Narrative text highlights the sudden and intense pain radiating through her mind. A loud pulsing thump sounding occurs as strange, muffled voices begin to echo in her head.
Fractured, film-like memories of fire and a young couple begin to surface in her vision.
Luce questions Love's sadness in the hazy, burning memories that are flickering through her mind.
A heavy thump sounding punctuates a vision of a girl suffering amidst the roaring flames.
A soft fsh sounding passes as the voices in her head become distorted and hard to hear. The man looks on in shock as he calls her name, her hair suddenly turning bright red. Staring at her own locks, the red-haired girl gasps in total disbelief at the impossible change. Gripping a strand of her hair, she frantically questions the sudden and radical color shift.
More fragments of memories showing golden eyes and fire appear as her distress reaches a peak.
Luce reels from the overwhelming visions as the blonde man watches her in deep concern.
A soft reach sounding as a hand draws near the orange-haired girl's startled, pensive face.
A sudden hug sounding as Aurelio catches Luce in a protective embrace, shielding her from view. Identifying himself as the one she knows, Aurelio reassures Luce and tells her not to fear.
Aurelio releases his hold and gently asks the girl if she has finally regained her composure.
Staring at the dark-haired prince's red eyes, Luce realizes with shock that this man is Lev.
Aurelio prepares to guide her to the event while a nearby nobleman watches with utter confusion.
With an intimidating gaze, the prince orders the witness to remain silent about their brief encounter. The blonde nobleman beckons Luce to follow him, and she gives a hesitant, uncertain reply. Left behind by their companion, both Luce and the nobleman remain bewildered by the prince's behavior. Claiming she feels unwell, Luce excuses herself from the man who senses a trace of magic. A quick glance sounding as the blonde man looks back at the couple walking away together.
A sudden chill sounding as Aurelio casts a cold, threatening look toward the retreating nobleman.
Bewildered by the prince's mysterious actions, the man watches as Luce whispers her old friend's name.
Luce informs the prince that she is feeling better as they continue through the palace garden.
A sharp halt sounding as Luce stops in her tracks, her heart racing with a realization.
Standing before the prince, the girl expresses her desperate need to ask him a serious question.
Luce recalls the startling moment her golden hair suddenly transformed into its current vibrant orange shade.
A fragment of a memory she doesn't recognize surfaces, showing the prince in a different light. A soft clench sounding as Luce is overcome by a wave of distress regarding her past. Facing each other in the quiet courtyard, the tension between the two friends becomes increasingly palpable.
A sudden whoosh sounding as the wind rushes past, highlighting Luce's deep confusion about her identity. Looking into Aurelio's intense red eyes, Luce wonders what has truly happened to her very soul.